A man took part in the hunter qualification exam, yet he shocked even the world's top S-rank powerhouses. All because he defeated the super rookie of the hunter world using only the most basic physical techniques. This scene made every examiner feel it was impossible. Even the strongest of the S-rank guilds could not suppress the fighting spirit in his heart, and wanted to step in personally to find out the upper limit of his strength. But what they did not know was, that this man had fought in another world for a full 80 years, and was the undefeated gun god, who, by himself alone, personally wiped out the demon king of that other world. After completing his mission, he also felt utterly exhausted. So he made a request to the goddess, that she preserve all the experiences and memories he had here intact and send him back to Earth. The goddess agreed, but his earthly body had long since died, so she would place his soul into a new vessel. Immediately after, a beam of light crashed down onto Yukinsuk, and his new vessel was also a body that was just about to breathe its last. But the goddess believed that he would surely be able to live a different life again with this body. When he opened his eyes again, he had returned to Earth. That damned other world had put Yukinsuk through endless torment. Now he had finally returned, but this new body was only that of a teenage boy. He twisted open the kitchen faucet, and what flowed out was clean water untouched by pollution. And with just a light press, fire could be lit. This was what true supreme magic was. The majors of the other world could all go to hell. And in this world, there was also the chicken cutlet he loved most. And this real texture made his eyes heat up with excitement. This was what food was supposed to taste like. During the full 80 years he had struggled in the other world, he had never once eaten a proper meal. Now, at last, he could live in this world like an ordinary person. But at that moment, he did not notice the eerie red light glowing outside the window. He walked into the bathroom and took a comfortable shower. Although Yukinsuk was already seriously out of touch with this world, he believed that a beautiful life would soon come close to him. But just then, a ghostly face suddenly appeared by his window. A chill instantly ran down his back in fright. How could such a thing exist on Earth? Then he heard the broadcast behind him sound out, issuing a notice to all residents. A corrosion rift had appeared in the apartment complex. The broadcast ordered everyone to head to the underground shelter immediately. And Yukinsuk had no idea at all what a corrosion rift was, nor did he know what exactly had happened. The next second, he saw a scene that made his scalp go numb. On his window glass, several of those humanoid monsters from before were crawling all over it in a dense swarm. Their claws were just about to pierce through the glass. In the next moment, just as they smashed through the window and charged in, he turned and rushed out. It seemed that the Earth of today was nothing like the Earth in his memory. He had to find out what had happened. And these humanoid monsters, judging by their appearance, they were very similar to the monsters of the other world. Very soon, he crept along the edge outside the window, avoiding that group of monsters. After they left, he immediately climbed out through the window. He judged that he should follow the broadcast instructions and go to the shelter first. Just then, he saw a child ahead. He was about to take the child and flee together, but discovered that the child actually wanted to turn back to look for the monsters. That face was still very young, but his eyes were frighteningly hard. He was going to kill the monsters and even asked Yukinsuk whether he wanted to join him. Yukinsuk was a little unable to understand it. Are kids these days all this reckless? From the child, he learned that Earth had already been like this for a full 13 years. The so-called corrosion rifts were the exits where monsters appeared. No one knew how they formed, and no one knew where or when they would appear. Yukinsuk felt a heavy oppression in his chest as he listened. He had fought desperately to return to Earth, only for this place to have become hell as well. He asked the child, who is the strongest hunter right now? The child answered cleanly and decisively with one name, Lee Seyun. Lee Seyun belonged to the Ganabi Guild, which ranked in Earth's top 10. She wielded a great sword and was currently handling a corrosion rift in Chorwan. This world clearly had powerful hunters, yet ordinary people were still fighting monsters too. This still made Yukinsuk feel unreal. At this moment, he suddenly covered the child's mouth, and lowered his voice, telling the child not to make a sound. There were monsters coming up ahead. He focused his eyes and saw that there were 5 monsters in total ahead. But he knew very clearly, there were 5 in front of him, and a 6th was still hiding in the dark. Fortunately, this body seemed to possess extraordinary strength, so dealing with these few should not be difficult. But he was not confident he could protect this child during the fight, yet it was also impossible for him to just leave him behind. Just as he was thinking of a countermeasure, he suddenly caught a familiar sensation. A faint blue gas drifted through the air. That was magic power. Now he could be certain, this place in the world he had once lived and operated under the same rules. The next second, one of the monsters in front of them suddenly burst into flames. This attack came from Yukinsuk. He had long since exhausted the magic power he had accumulated over more than 80 years, but as long as there was magic in the air, he could condense it again. This meant that he could still use the flames of paradox engraved into his soul, though he was a little dissatisfied with the firepower. But it was still more than enough to deal with these few guys. Seeing this scene, the child's eyes immediately turned worshipful. I didn't expect you to actually have a unique skill. After saying that, the child also wanted to rush up and finish them off. Yukinsuk was speechless for a moment. The main target among the monsters was not dead yet, so what was he rushing in for? Sure enough, just as he had guessed, the little boy instantly became the target locked on to by that group of monsters. Sure enough, just as he had guessed, the little boy instantly became the target locked on to by that group of monsters. The little boy began trembling in fear on the spot, but luckily Yukinsuk reached out in time and grabbed his arm tightly. Yukinsuk told the little boy to hand him the stick on the ground. He wanted to borrow a weapon. The next second, the figures of 3 monsters lunged at him at high speed. The moment he gripped the weapon, his gaze completely changed. The shadow of the stick cut through the air with a crisp explosive crack. Immediately after, those 3 monsters were directly sliced in half at the waist by him. At this moment, he once again regained the feel of the gun god stepping onto the battlefield. The boy was so shocked by this scene that he could not speak. He concluded that Yukinsuk was definitely no ordinary person. He had to be a hidden hunter. But inside Yukinsuk, anger surged and churned. The peaceful life he had traded everything to obtain was actually going to turn into a battlefield again. Soon, with a dark expression, he entered the underground shelter together with the brat. The child's mother recognized her son at a glance and kept thanking Yukinsuk. You were the one who saved my son, right? Thank you so much. Seeing the expensive clothes on the woman, Yukinsuk froze for a moment. So this child was a rich young master. No wonder he had been so arrogant just now. At this moment, the entire building began to shake violently. In only a few seconds, a monster smashed the main door apart and barged in by force. Everyone was screaming and running for their lives, and only Yukinsuk stood where he was, not moving a single step. The child turned back and shouted at him, "Run. Even for you, you can't beat it this time." But Yukinsuk still did not run. He had originally thought he had returned to a familiar world, but now it seemed, this place was no different from the other world. He tilted his head and asked the brat, "Aren't you rich? Then why do you still want to become a hunter? Wouldn't it be better to find a safe place to hide and live peacefully?" The child said that his father had been killed by a monster. Their whole family had originally been hiding in a shelter too, but his father was still killed by a monster inside that shelter. From that moment on, the child understood there was no truly safe place on earth at all. So he swore to become a hunter, to become the strongest hunter in this world, to eliminate all corrosion rifts and save this world. You might think what I'm saying is ridiculous. Before he could finish speaking, Yukinsuk interrupted him. Yukinsuk smiled, but it was a smile of approval. You will become a very remarkable hunter. But unfortunately, you cannot save this world. As Yukinsuk's words fell, the child's mother desperately pulled him and urged him to run. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out behind them. The child suddenly turned around and discovered in shock, that the monster they had feared had already been killed by Yukinsuk with one hand. He said the child could not save the world because this was something he would do himself. After all, he had more than enough experience with this kind of work. After dealing with the monster, Yukinsuk returned home and filled in some basic information about this world. And at the same time he also discovered that his account balance only had 3,001 left. The original owner of this body had once been an employee at a logistics company, but because of a corrosion rift, the company went bankrupt, and he also lost his job. Just as Yukinsuk was still thinking about how to make money and survive, he saw a hunter recruitment notice on his phone. In the blink of an eye, it was the next day at the Hunter Association building. Today, a grand selection ceremony was to be held here. And this ceremony had also attracted quite a few hunter scouts, who wanted to dig up promising newcomers here and bring them back to their own guilds. But one of the scouts felt that this batch of examinees had no particularly outstanding prospects at all, just a bunch of small fry. Yet this selection had even attracted Lee Se-yoon, a hunter ranked in the world's top 10. Everyone cast worshipful looks. Someone like her could usually only be seen in the news, and no one had expected to see her in person today. They all assumed by default that Lee Se-yoon had come here for Han Sang-ae, a graduate of the Hunter Academy. She had awakened electrokinetic abilities. But what they did not know was that Lee Se-yoon did not take Han Sang-ae seriously at all, and at most saw her as a walking power bank. The colleague beside her was still saying that Han Sang-ae's abilities really could come in handy. At that moment, the man beside her pushed up his sunglasses. Even if someone performs well in the academy, there are plenty who fall apart completely in real combat. That sentence was exactly to Lee Se-yoon's liking, and she casually tossed her colleague a piece of candy. This is a praise candy. Actual combat and training had never been the same thing. For students who had only gone through safe training, it was hard to adapt to real battle, and Han Sang-ae would also need a long time. Soon, the competition below was about to begin. Lee Se-yoon looked down at the arena with great interest, as if choosing prey. Freshman, show me the strength that will make me want you. The host froze for a moment when he saw the contestant's information. It was actually someone of civilian background who had not even attended Hunter Academy. At the same time, Yu Chansuk pulled up the zipper of his combat suit, with the weapon issued by the association in his hand. The host was still mocking him, wondering where exactly he got the nerve to stand on the stage. And the contestant stepping onto the stage at this moment was Yu Chansuk. He himself was indeed still not very used to this new name. The rules this time were simple: only weapons provided by the association could be used, and no fatal injuries could be inflicted on the opponent. Yu Chansuk's idea was very simple: use this assessment as a springboard to obtain greater authority. The blonde guy opposite him looked arrogant and did not take Yu Chansuk seriously at all. As the referee raised his hand high, the first match officially began. The instant the fight started, the blonde guy charged forward violently. He was trembling with excitement, because his opponent was trash who could not even condense magic power. But in the face of that momentum, there was not the slightest expression on Yu Chansuk's face. Because in his eyes, the blonde guy was full of openings. The next second, Yu Chansuk drove the weapon in his hand into the ground. And then, under the blonde guy's stunned gaze, he directly vanished from sight. The blonde guy's heart sank, a speed-type hunter. By the time he reacted, Yu Chansuk was already standing behind him. Your spearsmanship is terrible. I don't need a weapon to beat you. In the next second, Yu Chansuk drove a punch into his stomach. That force nearly made the blonde guy vomit up his breakfast. But just as the blonde guy was about to collapse, Yu Chansuk planted a foot and forced him back upright. Then came a vicious uppercut that directly shattered his jaw. The blonde guy who had been acting cocky just moments ago was now practically blacking out. Yu Chansuk, on the other hand, was momentarily stunned. He knew the other side was weak, but not to the point of being this fragile. The reason he had gone barehanded was because he was afraid the spear would hit too hard. After thinking it over, he understood, this guy was just a rookie, and this was what average level was actually like. But this scene left Lee Se-yoon stunned on the spot. What exactly was up with this guy? She immediately pulled up Yu Chansuk's file, employee at a logistics company. The colleague beside her explained that there was almost no stored magic power in the young man's body. To have this kind of strength, it ought to require long-term accumulation. Otherwise it could only be luck. But those words only earned him a piece of shut-up candy. In Lee Se-yoon's eyes, Yu Chansuk looked more like someone who was deliberately choosing not to accumulate magic power. On the field, Yu Chansuk rolled his neck and felt a little uncomfortable. But in order to prove his ability, he decided to simply finish off this round. The next second, Yu Chansuk's figure directly closed in right in front of the blonde guy. He raised his fist. Don't worry, this punch won't be fatal. But the blonde guy was already scared senseless and could only keep begging for mercy. With a bang, Yu Chansuk punched him until he fainted on the spot. This scene made quite a few hunter scouts begin discussing Yu Chansuk, and Lee Se-yoon decided that while everyone else was still discussing him, she would personally go test Yu Chansuk's limits. Her companion asked where she was going, and Lee Se-yoon only gave one reply: to see the association president. I want to ask him for a favor. At the same time, Yu Chansuk's fighting was still continuing. But the results were all the same. No one could last more than 3 moves against him. The more Yu Chansuk fought, the more annoyed he became. Just what exactly did this Hunter Academy teach? How could it train people into such uselessness? Finally, after he knocked down several people, a decent opponent stood before him. The moment she appeared, people around immediately began talking. She was candidate Han Sang-ae, and everyone wanted to know whether she could put an end to this mysterious newcomer's winning streak. Yu Chansuk only glanced at her once before his interest was stirred. Because among everyone present today, she had the greatest concentration of magic power on her body. Han Sang-ae's tone was sharp. You've gotten this far entirely by luck, but from here on, you won't have any more lucky breaks. Yu Chansuk sneered inwardly. Was this kind of template line also handed out uniformly by the academy? The next second, Han Sang-ae slowly drew the blade in her hand. A golden light flashed in her eyes. You may not have a special skill, but I won't go easy on you either. That statement actually made Yu Chansuk pause. How could he possibly have no skills? He was just afraid that if he used them, he would damage her too badly. She took a deep breath, then quickly lowered herself into a crouch, bending at the waist, as if airflow were swirling beside her hand, and began condensing magic power. Golden lightning wrapped around the blade, and the whole sword trembled slightly. Seeing this scene, Yu Chansuk did become a little interested. In the next moment, her figure shot out violently, and a blue-green light burst forth at the same time. But the blade-drawing strike she had charged up for so long did not even touch a single hair of Yu Chansuk's. He simply leaped into the air and dodged it. Han Sang-ae was completely shocked. He dodged it. He evaded her lightning draw slash just by jumping. Suspended in midair, Yu Chansuk found it even more interesting. She was running electricity between the scabbard and the blade to create magnetism, then stacking magnetic force onto the explosive burst of the draw, turning that strike into a railgun. A moment later, Yu Chansuk landed steadily. So far, your skill is the best, but you missed one thing. You're only thinking about how to strike faster. You're too obsessed with speed. Han Sang-ae's problem was this: in order to accelerate, she had laid down a magnetic track in the air, no matter how fast or strong she was. No one would be stupid enough to take an attack with its path written all over its face. Han Sang-ae was very unwilling to accept it and felt that Yu Chansuk had only dodged by chance. She drew her blade again at high speed and launched an even fiercer series of attacks. Even without that move, I can still beat someone like you. But what left her in despair was that Yu Chansuk casually dodged all of her attacks. You really are full of yourself. If I can dodge even your fastest move, why would I get hit by something like this? Yu Chansuk's words completely ignited Han Sang-ae, and she stopped thinking entirely. Her mind held nothing but anger. Driven by rage, Han Sang-ae directly brought out her strongest attack. Yu Chansuk saw at a glance that she was forcibly squeezing herself dry to condense magic power. If she kept going, her body would give out first. Yu Chansuk flashed in front of her in an instant. That move just now was cool, but this is where it ends. Before making his move, he added blandly, "If it hurts, raise your left hand." Then came a thud as he drove a heavy punch into her lower abdomen. He had not used full strength, yet the blow still made Han Sang-ae spit saliva everywhere. After that he pressed in with a chain of punches, practically attacking point blank, and the final punch crashed heavily into her face. After taking that punch, Han Sang-ae's consciousness began to drift. With a thump, this newcomer who had been entrusted with high hopes failed to defeat Yu Chansuk and instead collapsed at his feet. The whole crowd immediately exploded. He suppressed Han Sang-ae, she's one of the academy's top students. Because Yu Chansuk had no reputation, many people instead began doubting Han Sang-ae, thinking she was just famous, too dependent on magic power, and lacking in physical training. Hearing movement behind him, Yu Chansuk thought Han Sang-ae wanted to keep fighting, but when he turned around, he discovered that she had merely raised her left hand. Her whole body was practically floating, and she probably could not even stand up. Yu Chansuk could not help finding it a little amusing. He had casually said if it hurts, raise your left hand, and she had really done it, truly a model honor student. At that moment, a staff member quickly walked over to the referee. He whispered a few words into the referee's ear, and the referee's brow furrowed more and more deeply. Immediately after, the referee announced to the whole arena, the match schedule has changed. Winner Yu Chansuk, please rest for a while. Those words made Yu Chansuk frown. Haven't I already finished? Why do I still need to rest and prepare for another match? The referee's next sentence cleared up the confusion. Later, winner Yu Chansuk will have a special match against an active hunter. This match has been specially approved by the association president, and the arrangements are complete. Everyone stared at the name on the big screen. The audience's reaction was so intense that Yu Chansuk judged that the person coming must be highly seasoned. A special match, someone is stepping forward on purpose to test me. I've seen this sort of thing in the other world too. Just then, the sound of a blade scraping across the ground echoed through the arena. Your name is Yu Chansuk, right? I'm Lee Se-yoon. I came to confirm whether you have other skills. This stage is too small for you. How about a match with me, Yu Chansuk? If you think it's too much, you can refuse, I'd understand. After all, it's very sudden. When he saw clearly who it was, Yu Chansuk let out a bitter smile. It was actually the Lee Se-yoon that Child had mentioned, the world's top 10, and the calmness and pressure radiating from her were absolutely not an act. She was a true professional hunter. With Yu Chansuk's current body, even with a spear in hand, it would be hard to defeat her. Yet for some reason, a slight curve rose at the corner of his mouth. Since you want to test me, then come on. The referee was slightly stunned. You don't need to rest. Lee Se-yoon saw the battle and ignite in Yu Chansuk's eyes. It seems you and I are the same kind of person. Yu Chansuk also revealed an excited smile. Then let me see whether the strongest in this world is worthy of my recognition. And so, the two instantly erupted into fierce battle. Their clash left the entire audience stunned into silence. Even the referee was sweating on his forehead. He no longer knew how to commentate on it. At this moment, Yu Chansuk blocked another of Lee Se-yoon's attacks, but there was not the slightest ease on his face. Because he could feel it, this woman was strong, so strong that she was almost not inferior to him. In the next moment, in order to break free from Lee Se-yoon's pressure, Yu Chansuk spun the shaft of his spear in his palm and forcibly blasted away her offensive. He used his full strength in the strike, forcing Lee Se-yoon to retreat repeatedly. But Lee Se-yoon still remained completely at ease. She was only testing Yu Chansuk's limits and had not used her full strength. Compared with the beginning, Yu Chansuk's speed had already dropped noticeably. At this moment, Yu Chansuk had already been entangled in combat with this S-rank hunter for a long time, and fatigue was finally written across his face. It was not that she had no openings, but that this body could not keep up with his combat awareness. Lee Se-yoon was genuinely excited. She had not seen someone like Yu Chan-suk in a long time, though they were not on the same level. The word strong absolutely suited him. She wanted, for the first time in a long while, to have a truly fierce fight, but she also noticed that Yu Chan-suk was beginning to tire. Lee Se-yoon stepped forward and spoke calmly. You did very well. I originally thought you could only last 5 minutes, but I didn't expect you to hold on for 30. Her figure suddenly accelerated and rushed forward. Since you're tired, I'll make it easier for you, go back and rest sooner. Yu Chan-suk tightened his grip on the spear shaft. There was no stored magic power left in his body, and the magic power in the air was very thin as well. He let out a breath and flattened his emotions. He had not wanted to use that move, but now he had no other choice. Yu Chan-suk quickly leaned back, preparing to receive Lee Se-yoon's next wave of attacks. His eyes locked tightly onto her movements. So long as even the slightest opening appeared, he would ignite the flames of paradox. When Yu Chan-suk ignited the flames of paradox, shock appeared in Lee Se-yoon's eyes for the first time. But she did not retreat and directly brought her sword down, cutting through even the black flames offensive together with it. Yu Chan-suk knew it had not hit, and immediately retreated to open the distance. Lee Se-yoon revealed a satisfied smile. That strike just now should have been impossible for you to dodge, but you still avoided it. And what is that black aura on your body? You used it to attack me just now, didn't you? But I cut it apart. Yu Chan-suk slowly opened his mouth. This is the flames of paradox, and also my final trump card. Back in the other world, this had been the power he used most often and trusted most. These black flames were different from ordinary fire. His clothes were still intact because they could not burn matter. What they burned were abstract concepts designated by me. With my current output, I can't ignite concepts with higher ignition points, such as self, memory, or reason. In the next moment, Yu Chan-suk suddenly charged forward, the spear spinning in his hand with explosive force. What he could burn now was only fatigue. Lee Se-yoon was visibly startled. Your speed is even faster. Could it be that you were holding back the whole time? Yu Chan-suk did not answer. His figure closed in on her like teleportation, and the spear instantly thrust out in a strike. Lee Se-yoon's eyes were full of disbelief. You recovered your strength in such a short time. How did you do that? Before her words had even finished, her figure vanished from the arena. With only a whoosh, she likewise appeared before Yu Chan-suk at near teleporting speed. The two swung their weapons at the same time, and dense metallic clangs exploded through the air. But the more Lee Se-yoon fought, the more she felt something was wrong. The concentration of magic power in the air was constantly fluctuating, but the arena's settings had not changed. There was only one reason, the flames of paradox of Yu Chan-suk. Just as ordinary fire releases energy by burning matter, the flames of paradox also release magic power when burning abstract concepts. Yu Chan-suk used magic power to ignite the flames of paradox, and the flames of paradox burned away his fatigue, which in turn produced even more magic power, forming a cycle. This was practically an endless loop. Fatigue was burned away, letting him continue burning. The magic power produced then ignited the black flames again, repeating over and over. In other words, what he excelled at was a war of attrition. The longer the battle lasted, the weaker the opponent became, while he could always maintain himself in a half-fatigued state and keep fighting. At this moment, Lee Se-yoon suddenly closed in front of Yu Chan-suk and made a sword-swinging motion. With a ringing sword cry, that slash directly split the arena apart, but it still did not hit Yu Chan-suk. Lee Se-yoon slowly raised her head. Are you still going to continue? Yu Chan-suk walked out step by step from the dust and smoke, and let out a low laugh. I was planning to fight a battle of attrition with you from the start, and now you're telling me to stop. You know I can keep going, don't you? Yu Chan-suk continued pressing her. Would you like someone like me, who doesn't know when to back down? Weariness surfaced in Lee Se-yoon's eyes. She had been suppressing her strength the entire time, fighting at a level close to Yu Chan-suk's. If she got serious, she could probably end it in one move. I think no one would like someone who doesn't know when to back down. When a tree is burned, only ashes remain, and ashes that have been burned cannot be burned again. Likewise, the flames of paradox also leave residue behind. When everything has been burned down to nothing but ashes, that is when the flames of paradox disappear, and also when Yu Chan-suk's life reaches its end. Lee Se-yoon glanced at the timer, 4 hours and 17 minutes. At this moment, Yu Chan-suk had already been completely beaten down by Lee Se-yoon, and she looked down at him. You've held on long enough, are you still going to continue? Yet Yu Chan-suk directly admitted defeat. Please spare me. If this keeps going, I really will die. Since I forfeit, the winner of this match is Lee Se-yoon. At this moment, Lee Se-yoon took a lollipop out from her clothes. Seeing it lollipop, all of her subordinates froze. Lee Se-yoon tossed the lollipop to Yu Chan-suk together with a business card. This is your reward for working hard. The card is in there too, remember to call me. Yu Chan-suk picked up the card and glanced at it. On it was written, Jinabai LLC, Team 3 Partner Hunter. Lee Se-yoon lowered her voice and said to Yu Chan-suk, we'll talk about the details later. Once you've rested up, give me a call. The scene shifted, and Yu Chan-suk bit down and crushed the lollipop Lee Se-yoon had given him. He was completely dumbfounded by the smartphone in front of him. Back in his era, identification had still been handwritten on paper, but this phone could not only prove identity, it even had a second-hand equipment trading app, as well as messaging and calling functions. That reminded him of the other world. It was a bit like magic for long-distance voice transmission. Just then, a burly man walked up to Yu Chan-suk. You're Hunter Yu Chan-suk, right? In person, you're way more handsome than on camera. After finding him, the man also handed him a business card. The card read Grand Purity LLC, his name was Yoon Song-hyun, and his purpose was direct. He wanted Yu Chan-suk to join his team. If you build up enough experience under me, you'll definitely shine. Yu Chan-suk raised his eyes and looked at his expression, feeling that he did not seem to be lying. But Lee Se-yoon's expression suddenly flashed through Yu Chan-suk's mind. There had seemed to be a faint blush on her face at the time, and she had reminded him to make sure to contact her after he had rested well. So he accepted Yoon Song-hyun's business card. After all, he already had a prior engagement and could not give an answer on the spot, so he could only say, I need to think about it. Yet this action made Yoon Song-hyun burst into laughter. Did you think I'd force you to agree immediately? I'll give you plenty of time. Yu Chan-suk had thought he was fairly easygoing. But then the man suddenly pressed a hand onto Yu Chan-suk's shoulder, and Yu Chan-suk lifted his eyes and met that unfriendly gaze head-on. I hope you think it through. I believe you're a smart person. With that, he left, leaving only Yu Chan-suk standing there in a daze. Yu Chan-suk was stunned because he had not expected the man to be so blatant. After this, not only would he not go to the Grand Purity Guild, he did not even want to consider it anymore. 10 minutes later, Yu Chan-suk dialed Lee Se-yoon's number and asked where she was. Lee Se-yoon sent him an address, the little hut on the second floor of the Hunter Association, telling him to come straight up and find her. When he reached the second floor, Yu Chan-suk indeed saw a shop called Little Hut. The clerk became excited the moment he saw him. He was a trending figure now, after all. Welcome to Little Hut, that person has been waiting for you for a long time. Hearing Yu Chan-suk enter, Lee Se-yoon turned around and casually beckoned to him. She had not expected Yu Chan-suk to come so quickly. Did something happen? Yu Chan-suk recounted what had just happened. Someone wanted to recruit me into a guild, a particularly huge guy. Lee Se-yoon's expression remained calm. The person you're talking about should be Yoon Sung-hyun from the Grand Purity Guild. Since he personally set his sights on you, the other guilds naturally wouldn't dare make a move. Yu Chan-suk laughed quietly. Even your guild is afraid of him. If that's really the case, I'll be disappointed. But what Yu Chan-suk had not expected was that Lee Se-yoon had no intention of recruiting him. What do you think about working without belonging to any guild? I mean, being a freelancer. That immediately piqued Yu Chan-suk's interest. What she means is, even without joining a guild, I can still take guild commissions. Lee Se-yoon explained that she guessed Yoon Sung-hyun would offer Yu Chan-suk a junior position. Yu Chan-suk slapped the table. He'd only give me a junior position. Then what exactly is a partner hunter? So Lee Se-yoon began explaining the rules to him. Guild hunters are usually divided into 3 types, junior, senior, and partner. Juniors and seniors belong to teams and are led by a partner hunter. You can think of them as people earning fixed salaries. Partner hunters receive equity, not fixed wages. They share dividends based on net profit, more like company owners. It sounded just like the setup of a law firm. Lee Se-yoon also said that the people who first established hunter guilds had modeled them after law firms. She believed there was no need for Yu Chan-suk to start from the junior level and slowly climb upward to become a partner through promotion. Yu Chan-suk understood as well. As long as he gained enough fame and produced results convincing enough to win people over, the guilds would naturally come to him on their own. Lee Se-yoon was very pleased to hear that. She found that communicating with Yu Chan-suk was almost effortless. But what puzzled Yu Chan-suk even more was why she kept giving him candy. From the moment he sat down until now, she had already stuffed 2 pieces into his hand. But I have neither connections nor resources, so how am I supposed to get decent commissions? That would be too hard. Lee Se-yoon said that was not a problem at all. She could help him, and for free. Yu Chan-suk was even less convinced. I don't believe in free benefits. Why are you helping me this much? Lee Se-yoon reached into a file bag. In the future, when you become famous and the guilds are all competing for you, I only hope you'll remember that there was once a woman who helped you. Just think of it as owing me a favor. As she spoke, she slowly pushed the file bag in front of Yu Chan-suk. Want to take a look? Whether you do it or not is up to you. I only have one simple request. Yu Chan-suk opened the file bag, a commission from Incheon City Hall, 2 years ago. The attempt to clear a corrosion rift on Jedong Island had failed, resulting in the formation of a corrosion zone. He had originally thought he was being asked to clear the rift, but the contents actually said, "Patrol Jedong Island, check whether any new corrosion gaps appear, and eliminate them promptly." The mission was to be carried out 1 month later. She was offering 5 million won in advance, with another 15 million won added upon success. Yu Chon-suk tossed the materials onto the table. The job was life-threatening, yet the money was not all that much. Instead, Lee Se-yoon's eyes lit up. "If you think it's unfair, then get stronger and get famous. Even if your pockets are already full, money will keep flowing in." Right now, she only wanted one answer from Yu Chon-suk. "Take it, or leave it." Yu Chon-suk spoke slowly. "Since you put it that way, I'll take it. I like challenging the limit." 30 minutes later, 2 cars were speeding down the highway, and Lee Se-yoon was on the phone with a mysterious man, introducing Yu Chon-suk, civilian background, passed a weapon tournament empty-handed. The other side had given a fairly good evaluation. Lee Se-yoon laughed out loud. "That evaluation isn't quite right. He fought me for a full 4 hours. The person on the other end clearly could not believe it." "Are you sure? Not because you were suppressing your strength?" Lee Se-yoon gave a cold laugh. "I'm a veteran hunter with more than 10 years of experience, someone who survived hell. By all rights, I should have been able to toy with him easily, yet I still had to fight him head-on for more than 4 hours." A thought even surfaced in her mind. Even if she had another chance, she might not encounter a monster like Yu Chon-suk again. The other party was still worried, but that mission clearly calls for an experienced hunter. Even if his skill is strong, can he handle it if he teams up with veteran hunters? Lee Se-yoon told him not to worry, because she had already arranged for someone with enough experience to be by Yu Chon-suk's side. The other person asked again, "What if that kid grows to your level?" Lee Se-yoon replied coldly, "This may sound harsh, but if Yu Chon-suk reaches my level, perhaps even the boss won't be his match." Time returned to 1 month earlier, when Yu Chon-suk had ordered a delivery online. The courier complained all the way, "This thing is way too heavy, I really don't know what he ordered." After setting the package down at the door, he turned and hurried off to deliver the next one. After the courier left, Yu Chon-suk opened the door and carried the package inside. Soon, a very long black case was sitting on the table. This was the weapon he had bought online. With both hands, he flipped the clasps open directly. The moment he saw the weapon, shock flashed through his eyes. Its design was absurdly perfect, as if it had been custom-made for him. No matter which angle he looked at it from, this spear matched his expectations. Taking it onto the battlefield would be more than enough. There was also a bottle of green liquid in the case, said to be a spirit medicine. So-called spirit medicine was a medicine hunters use in emergencies, containing concentrated magic power, something that could save lives at a critical moment. The usual way of handling magic power was like drawing water from a dispenser, control atmospheric magic power, store it in the body, and then mobilize it when needed. Spirit medicine let hunters complete that step in a short amount of time. But Yu Chon-suk's way of using magic power was different. He skipped storage and directly absorbed and released it from the air. The advantage was that he used the magic power in the air, so in theory there was no upper limit, and the channels for absorption and release would be continuously strengthened, allowing him to control more magic power. But the drawback was just as fatal. Before those channels had fully developed, the amount he could control was very small, making it hard to unleash a high burst in a short time. "I don't have time to wait slowly, then I'll store part of it first." Yu Chon-suk drank the bottle of magic potion in one gulp. "If I train at this intensity for a month, I should grow enough to reach the level I need." Time advanced to 1 month later, on Jedong Island in Incheon. A long line had already formed there, all hunters participating in this operation. After checking Yu Chon-suk's information, the staff assigned him to Squad 8. Soon, Yu Chon-suk walked to the sign marked with the number 8. He did not say a word, but the others were chatting animatedly. This month's pay definitely wouldn't be low, the only question was when they would depart. Yu Chon-suk was meditating and resting when he suddenly heard someone call his name. When he turned around, it was unexpectedly the rising hunter star Han Sang-ae. She had cut her hair much shorter, clearly realizing that long hair could be grabbed in a fight. Han Sang-ae had come to find Yu Chon-suk this time because she wanted to cooperate with him on the mission. Yu Chon-suk asked her, "There are so many people here, so why are you specifically looking for me?" Han Sang-ae said it directly, "Because you're strong enough." During the cooperation, she wanted to observe and learn his fighting style. Yu Chon-suk was a little speechless, another burden, and one he probably would not be able to shake off in the short term. "You can follow if you want, but on one condition, you have to be able to keep up with my speed." At that moment, a staff member interrupted them. "Squad 8 is now fully assembled, so I'll begin the mission briefing. Some of you are on your first mission, so I'll explain the terminology as well, those with experience. Please bear with me. Corrosion rifts are divided into level 1, level 2, level 3, and unrated, with the ones closer to level 1 being more dangerous. A corrosion rift appearing for the first time in a given area is additionally designated as Alpha. At present, Jadong Island's Alpha corrosion rift is located at the church in northern Insiri. Although it remains unrated, considering that the rift may strengthen at any time, we strongly advise that you do not approach it. Your mission is to patrol Yuknuri and Jadong Mayan, identify any additional corrosion rifts that may appear, and eliminate them. Someone in the squad immediately expressed dissatisfaction. You're sending rookies to do clearing missions. Isn't that a mistake? The staff member did not respond at all and simply led them on their way. Yu Chansuk heard someone say that this place was very dangerous. Even from far away, you could feel a bone-chilling energy, as if your blood might freeze. He only felt that these people were exaggerating too much. At that moment, Han Sang-a lightly tapped Yu Chansuk on the thigh with the back of her blade, signaling him to move. The mission had started. The staff member loudly reminded them, the situation on the island will be reported in sync to the offshore control room. If you need support, contact us. Hunters, good luck. After arriving in the area, the group began huddling together to make a plan, survey the two regions within 1 week. Yu Chansuk spoke up directly and interrupted them. He pointed at the map on his phone. I suggest establishing our base at Weizhou Temple and operating from there. That immediately angered several people. Who are you? Haven't seen you before. You're a rookie, right? What gives you the right to suggest Weizhou Temple? And don't think you can order us around. Yu Chansuk could not be bothered to argue with them and simply laid out his reasoning clearly. Weizhou Temple overlooks Yupnuri. The old temple buildings are still there, so they can serve as a campsite. That's common sense. You don't understand that. He had not expected that the more he explained, the angrier they would become. There are plenty of places to stay nearby. What if we go up the mountain and get surrounded? Yu Chansuk coldly replied, we're not fighting thousands of enemies in a war, so how could we possibly get surrounded there? But his rhetorical question only made the other side more agitated. No matter what, we're not going to follow the command of an inexperienced hunter like you. That confirmed one thing for him, every world had people who refused to think logically. In the end, their argument produced one result, split up, they would go their way, and Yu Chansuk's side would go theirs. Yu Chansuk had originally thought that only Han Sang-a would follow him, but unexpectedly a third person joined their two-man group. He sized up the man beside him from the corner of his eye. The man's magic power seemed slightly higher than even Han Sang-a's. Yu Chansuk remembered that his name seemed to be Kim Min-jae, and he was curious why the man had come along, but after hearing the reason, he actually laughed. You two both look like this is your first mission, right? If two rookies act alone, something could easily happen, so I came to keep an eye on you. That made Yu Chansuk feel that, at the very least, there was one reliable person in the team. Just then, Yu Chansuk looked ahead. He had already sensed that something was wrong. He suddenly shifted his footing, and under the stunned gazes of the other two, he raised his left hand to signal them to stop. Yu Chansuk made a gesture for silence, telling them not to make a sound. He was going to take a look from the other side. Kim Min-jae quietly leaned out to observe, and in the next second, he saw dozens of monsters running through the forest. He estimated there were at least 50 and immediately suggested taking a detour. Yu Chansuk raised a hand to calm him. Don't panic yet, what is your unique skill? But Kim Min-jae did not answer. You're not thinking of fighting them, are you? Yu Chansuk's gaze instantly turned oppressive. Isn't it a hunter's job to deal with corrosion creatures? I'll ask again, what is your unique skill? After that, Yu Chansuk confirmed that Kim Min-jae's ability was fire, and that his best spell was fireball. Good, on my signal, hit the middle first. Kim Min-jae froze on the spot. He had not expected Yu Chansuk to decide so decisively to engage at once, and he could not keep up with the pace at all. Before he had even processed it, he heard Han Sang-ae ask, if Min handles the attack, then what am I supposed to do? Kim Min-jae tried to stop them. The three of us taking on 50 is too reckless. And didn't you say this is your first mission? While we can still contact the other hunters, let's regroup first. Yu Chansuk said there was no time, the other squads would take too long to reach this place. And their routes were different. Yu Chansuk's side had set out from Weizhou Temple, while the other hunters were along the coastline searching for other rifts. There was another point as well. Rashley calling on the radio was unwise. You could not guarantee that the people who heard it would come, nor could you guarantee that the monsters would not scatter during the wait and instead threaten other hunters. When Kim Min-jae calmed down and thought about it, he realized that Yu Chansuk was indeed right. And even if someone really was nearby, they might not come immediately to help because of the earlier conflict. That meant, they could only rely on the three of them to resolve this. In a disadvantageous situation like this, what we need to do is launch a surprise attack. So your fireball is the key. Yu Chansuk had no time for more nonsense and directly explained the tactics clearly. Kim Min-jae, throw the fireball at the center. I'll block both sides and keep them from escaping. Han Sang-ae will finish them off and cover the rear. Kim Min-jae felt his scalp go numb as he listened. The arrangement was so detailed it was as if Yu Chansuk had already seen the battle in advance. Yu Chansuk was like a commander who had gone through countless battles. Just what was he? They waited until the moment the monsters clustered together. And at that very instant, Kim Min-jae directly hurled out a fireball. In the next second, before the monsters could even react, a massive flame smashed into their formation. The fireball was extremely powerful, instantly burning several monsters to ashes. But fireball required charging time, and during that gap, Yu Chansuk stepped in to hold the line. Kim Min-jae brought both hands together at his brow and continued charging. In the next moment, Yu Chansuk moved, so fast he was like a passing shadow. His eyes were full of killing intent. Right now, the most important thing was to pin down the monster horde and hold out until the next fireball was ready. With a sweeping charge, he cut down several rift monsters. To maximize their effectiveness, their division of roles had to be clear. He had to keep the monsters pressed on his side and not let them get near Kim Min-jae. At that moment, one monster lunged at Yu Chansuk. Yu Chansuk ignored it completely, and another horizontal sweep of his spear took down several more. There was no way he would allow even one of them to get near Kim Min-jae. But he could not hold the line by himself alone, so he had to borrow Han Sang-ae's strength. Yu Chansuk said quietly, "Your turn." In the next moment, the crisp sound of a sword being drawn exploded by their ears. Han Sang-ae brought her blade down in one slash, instantly shattering the bodies of 3 goblins. Han Sang-ae let out a breath, "I can hold the side steady. From here on, it depends on Kim Min-jae." The moment her words fell, an even larger fireball erupted. Kim Min-jae's second shot was already fully charged. Yu Chansuk raised a hand to stop him. "Wait, I'll pull back first, then you fire. Otherwise, if you hit me by mistake, that'll be troublesome." After Yu Chansuk withdrew, Kim Min-jae fiercely launched the fireball. Like an unbridled beast, the fireball hurtled straight toward the monster pack. With a thunderous boom, the place where Yu Chansuk had been standing moments ago exploded loudly, and he had already leaped out of range before the blast came down. Then he gripped his spear tightly and pressed forward again. At the moment the fireball landed, 2 monsters tried to use the chaos to escape, but there was no way Yu Chansuk was going to let them go. A moment later, the smoke in the forest gradually dispersed. Yu Chansuk drove his spear down and planted it firmly into the ground. The ambush had been extremely successful, the monsters were wiped out, but the 3 of them were exhausted as well. Yu Chansuk was just about to praise the 2 of them when he suddenly sensed something wrong behind him. When he turned around, Kim Min-jae was actually aiming a handgun at Yu Chansuk's head, his expression frighteningly serious. But in the next second, he smiled. "Could you move aside? You're blocking the direction I'm aiming at." Yu Chansuk was speechless for a moment. He had thought Kim Min-jae was about to shoot him. In the next second, Kim Min-jae fired 2 shots into the monster corpses. He was implanting microchips into the bodies. Once the mission was over and safety was confirmed, the scrap recovery company contracted with him would come and collect them. So-called scrap recovery agents were people who specialized in recovering byproducts from corpses. After the chips were implanted, the recovery company would come deal with the bodies and collect all valuable materials. They would assess the value, sell the materials, and distribute the profit, first taking their commission according to the contract, then giving the remainder to the deceased hunter's family. Yu Chansuk asked Kim Min-jae whether these people were reliable. Kim Min-jae said they were completely trustworthy. The key was to find the right recovery company and sign a contract in advance, and that step was extremely important. While they were chatting, one monster was hiding behind a tree, staring fixedly at them. In the next moment, the monster suddenly sprang up in an ambush, and the gravel on the ground was blasted flying in all directions by its strike. At that instant, Yu Chansuk grabbed Kim Min-jae and directly pulled him out of that spot. Had they been even one step slower, both of them would have been badly injured. After retreating to a safe distance, Yu Chansuk threw Kim Min-jae onto the ground and turned to stare at that monster. Kim Min-jae looked speechless. They had just cleared out a whole horde, and now another one had appeared. The monster let out a strange hey-how laugh and opened a mouthful of disgusting sharp fangs. Yu Chansuk's gaze darkened further. This thing was probably the leader of the little monsters from earlier. The monster let out a roar, the sound booming through the forest as though it were summoning its kind. Yu Chansuk cursed under his breath, "Damn it, wouldn't it have been easier if you charged over with your underlings just now? Instead you had to wait and challenge the 3 of us now. You're asking to die." The leader monster continued its eerie laughter, and Yu Chansuk could clearly feel the magic power coming from it. It was on a completely different level from those cannon fodder creatures. Yu Chansuk shouted to the other 2, telling them not to interfere and to let him handle it alone. This monster was too strong, and if it started chasing them, none of them would be able to escape. The 2 of them froze on the spot. At this level, shouldn't the 3 of them join forces? Yu Chansuk directly cut them off in a low voice. "I'll only say this once, retreat, don't make me say it a second time." Do you want to go back with your heads separated from your bodies? As soon as those words came out, both of them stiffened instantly. It was harsh, and all too real. Yu Chansuk shook out his spear and said coldly, "Listen to me and leave immediately. I'm actually better off alone here, because I can fight at full strength without any reservations." He roared, "Come on then, Bat Leader." Very quickly, Yu Chansuk and the Bat Leader clashed head-on. Han Sang-yi wanted to rush over and help, but Kim Min-jae grabbed her. Going over now would only hold him back. It looked as if Yu Chansuk was being suppressed, but that was not the case at all, because not a single one of the Bat Leader's attacks hit him, not even the edge of his clothes was touched. Han Sang-ae could tell one more thing as well. Yu Chansuk's speed and powers of observation were terrifyingly absurd. If she were up there, she would never be able to dodge that kind of barrage. At that moment, Yu Chansuk twisted his waist and once again evaded the leader's punch. He dodged and counterattacked at the same time, and wherever his spear swept, black flames followed like a shadow. The more black flames accumulated, the slower the monster's movements became. So although Yu Chansuk appeared to be struggling in a hard fight, in reality he was just toying with this leader as if it were prey. Han Sang-ae was completely dumbstruck. Is he really a rookie hunter? Why does he look like someone who's fought countless brutal battles? At the same time, the leader monster lunged again, and Yu Chansuk gave a low laugh. Good, let me see whether you're worthy of forcing me to use my full strength. In the next second, Yu Chansuk slid low across the ground and rapidly retreated, while at the same time hurling the spear in his hand violently into the air. Han Sang-ae's eyes widened instantly. He threw his spear into the sky. What was he trying to do? The spear in the air slowly descended, while the leader monster continued closing gun on Yu Chansuk. Kim Min-jae was bewildered too, throwing away his weapon at a time like this. In that split second, the leader monster had already pounced right in front of Yu Chansuk. But Yu Chansuk did not panic in the slightest and merely stared at it expressionlessly. With a wet sound, the monster's head slowly fell in front of Yu Chansuk. So the spear he had thrown into the air was the final killing move. It pierced through the monster's neck the instant it fell. Even with its neck pierced through by the spear, it was still able to struggle, and Yu Chansuk had to admit that its vitality really was tenacious. But unfortunately for it, the outcome was already decided. He had to finish it immediately and absolutely could not give it any chance to turn the tables. Then, right before the horrified eyes of the other two, Yu Chansuk pulled out the spear and madly stabbed at the monster's head. Kim Min-jae's scalp went numb. How could this be? Just now it had clearly looked as though Yu Chansuk was being overwhelmed. But in the blink of an eye the monster had fallen. What exactly had happened? Yu Chansuk turned back and called out to Kim Min-jae, "Is it normal for this kind of monster to appear here?" Kim Min-jae also became suspicious. Judging from the strength of an individual like this, even if it was not a corrosion unit core, it at least meant this place ought to be rated level 3. Corrosion units were divided into 4 grades, and the operation briefing had said that Jedong Island's Alpha Corrosion Unit was still unrated. Then that means, Jedong Island's Alpha Corrosion Unit has already risen to level 3. This must be reported immediately. Han Sang-ae was not quite willing to believe it, and Yu Chansuk told her to think calmly. If it were not level 3, there was no way to explain the current strength of these monsters. As Yu Chansuk analyzed this, Kim Min-jae's face completely changed as well. The gap between unrated and level 3 was the difference between 2 worlds. If it really had risen to level 3, very few hunters would likely make it back alive. This island was too dangerous, and it had to be reported as an urgent matter. Kim Min-jae suggested that they first go save the other hunters. With Yu Chansuk's strength, he should be able to hold out even against a level 3 threat. Yu Chansuk rejected it on the spot. There was no way he could single-handedly find and save every hunter on the island. He had limits, and what he could not do, he simply could not do. Yu Chansuk seriously told the two of them that their mission was not rescue, but to confirm and eliminate any additional corrosion rifts that had appeared, and moreover, work of this kind could never guarantee 0 casualties from the beginning. Han Sang-ae suddenly asked Yu Chansuk a question. If you were in that kind of desperate situation, what do you think you would be like? Yu Chansuk did not understand for a moment. Han Sang-ae pressed further. If you ran into danger, wouldn't you feel wronged, resentful, or even pray for someone to come save you? Yu Chansuk's expression darkened instantly. Do you want to save people by imagining the mindset of the dead? It's not that I don't understand emotion, I'm talking about results. If you really want to go save them, I won't stop you, but put away that damn saint complex of yours. Some deaths are unavoidable. When facing that kind of death, no matter what I think, I will still die with the resolve to die. If, in order to save a few hunters, I let the rift worsen and cause even more people to die here, that would be my sin. In a desperate situation, the one thing you cannot do is waver. If you still carry that sort of mindset while carrying out missions, you won't live long in this world. That night, they found a place to rest. They entered a private house, and the whole building was empty, with no sign that corrosion monsters had ever stayed there. Kim Min-jae checked the place over and confirmed that there was nothing unusual, except that it was too dark. But because of those lights, they would be able to see the positions of the other hunters clearly, yet in Yu Chan-suk's view, the lights would expose their own position as well, and that made things more dangerous instead. If it were only cannon fodder, being exposed would not matter. But if another creature on the level of the bat leader showed up, then they would be in trouble. So Yu Chan-suk took out his phone and sent a warning to the other hunters. This is Squad 8. Based on the monster level we encountered, the Alpha Corrosion unit may have risen to level 3. Turning on lights carelessly may attract high-risk individuals, so please avoid it as much as possible. As long as the core of a corrosion rift was destroyed, all corrosion creatures would disappear. Once their energy supply was cut off, the corrosion zone would also recede. Yu Chan-suk thought it over. It actually did not sound that complicated, so why were they making it sound so difficult? Once the time was right, he would go and deal with the corrosion rift himself. Soon, it was deep into the night, and Han Sang-ae had already fallen asleep. Aside from her, Kim Min-jae was asleep too. Yu Chan-suk placed an alarm device beside them. The device would sound an alert if monsters approached, so he could leave without worry. He walked out of the house, his figure moving rapidly through the forest. Fortunately, the briefing had marked the Alpha's location, so this operation should have gone smoothly. But just then, Yu Chan-suk sensed that something was wrong. There was movement ahead, and he abruptly stopped, looked up, and heard a familiar eerie laugh. I knew it was going too smoothly, so it's you again. Without hesitation, he ignited his flames. But when he turned his head and got a clear look, he realized it was not the creature he had expected. He had never seen this face before. It was several times larger than him, completely beyond comparison with the bat leader. At the same time, an emergency suddenly broke out at Hunter Association Central. The signals of some hunters from Squad 5 had been cut off, and they were presumed dead. Management was stunned on the spot, and then they received death reports from other squads as well. Damn it, what exactly has been happening since just now? He immediately ordered his subordinates to contact headquarters for reinforcements, while also sending an emergency distress message to all hunters on the island. Soon, more intelligence came in. Someone was approaching the Alpha Core's location. The chief immediately told them to send a warning to stop that person. There was an extremely dangerous monster ahead, but only afterward did they learn that the person rushing toward the Alpha Center was actually Yu Chan-suk of Squad 8. He was the first to find the core. The chief ordered his men to connect to Yu Chan-suk's terminal immediately and confirm whether he was still alive. After all, something like a corrosion core upgrading had never happened before. Yu Chan-suk had been the first to charge toward the core amid the chaos, so he had to be monitored in real time. Very soon, the terminal connected, and on the screen, Yu Chan-suk was being hunted by a monster. Rather than a battle, it was more like he was desperately running for his life. The monster was stronger and faster than they had imagined. Then Hunter Central heard Yu Chan-suk's voice. The monster behind me is absurdly strong. The fact that I'm still alive is pure luck. Didn't you say this place had already been investigated? Then why is there no intel? You bastards. When I get back, I'm going to stuff the corrosion core into every one of your mouths. Hearing that speech, they only wanted to mute the terminal, confirming that he was still alive was enough. With his current strength, Yu Chan-suk still could not kill something of this level. He could only chip away at it little by little and then finish it off with his spear at the end. But the monster before him completely exceeded expectations. It showed no signs of going down at all. After his battle with the bat leader during the day, Yu Chan-suk had drawn too much magic power from Giant on Island, which left him weaker now instead. So he could not leave Giant on Island. He had to immediately find a place on the island where he could draw magic power. A glint flashed in Yu Chan-suk's eyes. He had actually found a target that quickly. Ahead of him, a black opening had split open in the ground. Without hesitating, Yu Chan-suk jumped straight in. He even turned back and shouted to the huge thing behind him, "Follow me. I just happen to have something I want to check." On the other side, Hunter Headquarters completely lost the signal from Yu Chan-suk's terminal, because he had entered the Alpha Corrosion Core. Hearing that news, the chief's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Damn it. After entering the interior of the core, Yu Chan-suk found that it was far cleaner than he had imagined. He could not help thinking, if even the spread of an unrated and a level 3 wasn't that fast, then just how outrageous would level 1 and level 2 be? A moment later, he cleared the boundary of the corrosion rift. What he had to face next was that giant thing. I'm not someone who likes fighting to the death, but if this thing keeps chasing me, I'll get angry too. Yu Chan-suk slowly tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand and recalled one of the deadliest problems of the Flames of Paradox. One of the biggest problems with the Flames of Paradox was that they would spread to every living being except Yu Chan-suk himself. Even allies were no exception. That was what made them so terrifying. So once the blaze exceeded the level he could control, he could no longer use it. That was a hard limitation. At that moment, a monster appeared in front of Yu Chan-suk. He thrust out with his spear in a sudden strike and hit the monster dead on. The monster let out a power in the air, and guided it into his body, forcibly storing it there. Magic power surged through every corner of his body, widening his channels and making his pathways tougher. Yukinsuk let out a long breath, and an even faint demonic energy spilled from his mouth. The effect was absurdly strong, far beyond his expectations. But just then, it seemed as if a crack had opened in the sky. Yukinsuk glanced upward, and instead of being afraid, he calmed down. Even now, it was not over. Several more monsters identical to the previous one crawled out of the crack. Unfortunately for them, they had come too late. Yukinsuk's tempering was already complete, and he had no fear of them at all. Very soon, the three monsters lunged at him together. Yukinsuk shook his spear and sneered, "Brainless things, do you still think having numbers on your side is useful now?" In the next second, the burst of magic power he unleashed directly shredded them cleanly, and they could not even touch the edge of his clothes. Yukinsuk was now several times stronger than before, but he was still far from his peak in the other world. Proportionally speaking, he had probably only recovered about 1%. But just then, a figure suddenly flashed out behind Yukinsuk, trying to ambush him. That made his heart sink. When had this thing gotten so close? Yukinsuk almost instantly opened distance the moment the other side moved. The opponent had a humanoid body and a rat's head, its level was clearly above that of an ordinary core entity. Instead, Yukinsuk became interested. At this level, how many chain strikes could it withstand from him? In the next moment, Yukinsuk charged fiercely forward, his spear whistling explosively through the air. He thrust once with the spear, only for the rat-headed monster to block it by force. The rat-headed monster even mocked him. "Your strike is too slow." But what it did not know was that while the speed of Yukinsuk's thrust had not been full power, the force behind it was overwhelming, and fine cracks had already appeared on its weapon. Yukinsuk locked his eyes on it and enunciated slowly, "Twin Moon Spear, first strike, pierce." In the next second, the rat-headed monster was blasted flying by magic power, and Yukinsuk took the chance to pursue, directly crushing the tempo. The rat-headed monster did not even understand what had just happened. Twin Moon Spear was Yukinsuk's technique. His attack path would leave behind blue trails, and those trails could repeat the route of the first strike and reproduce it 4 complete times. If he attacked along those trails, that would merely be the simplest form of landing 4 consecutive hits. But what was truly terrifying was, the blue trajectories could autonomously pursue the target, like 2 returning eyes that were nearly impossible to evade. Against this kind of delayed chain attack, what could it possibly use to turn the situation around? The rat-headed monster was struck again, and so long as it exposed even the slightest opening, Yukinsuk could kill it instantly. And now was the moment to finish things. In the next second, Yukinsuk unleashed a series of blows onto its body. Each strike carried 4 layered impacts, and its body was nearly torn apart. Before long, even its head was reduced to only half. You didn't think disappearing would mean this was over, did you? But just as Yukinsuk was about to continue the combo, a box suddenly appeared in his hand. Yukinsuk slowly opened the box. The moment he saw what was inside, his whole body froze. At the same time, Hunter Central had long since descended into chaos. The corrosion rift was spreading outward from the center of Jadong Island. Squad signals were being cut off one after another, and panic pressed down like a tidal wave. Watching all this, the chief felt his hands and feet go cold. This had completely exceeded the contingency plan. His eyes were full of helplessness. Is this really the end? Unless a miracle happens, all we can do is stand here and watch the hunters be wiped out. At that moment, a subordinate suddenly called out to him. "Chief, come here quickly." The subordinate reported that a hunter who had entered the Alpha Core region had sent back a message. He immediately put the message on the big screen and synced it across all channels. Everyone could see Yukinsuk's notice. Yukinsuk's message was very simple. The corrosion core signal had disappeared, confirmed eliminated. All corrosion entities encountered by the hunters had also been confirmed gone. The chief looked at the screen and barely dared breathe. He had witnessed a miracle with his own eyes. After sending the message, Yukinsuk finally let out a long breath. He looked up at the starry sky, and there were still many stars. More importantly, the air was clean, far better than in the other world. Time went back to 2 minutes earlier, when a huge swarm of monsters had been pouring out of the rift. Han Sengye instantly led the fight against them, her body already covered in multiple wounds. Her hand could barely hold the blade, but in the next second, as if grasping her last conviction, she braced her arm with her right hand and forced herself to grip the hilt again. She stared straight ahead. There were several times more monsters than yesterday. Worse still, after waking up, they had not found Yukinsuk anywhere. At that moment, Kim Min-jae called out to her from behind. "Miss Han, do you think we can still make it back alive? I'm starting to panic." It was no surprise that he was panicking. The monsters ahead were packed so densely they looked black, and if they all rushed forward together, the two of them would be trampled to death. Han Seng-ae turned and glanced at Kim Min-jae. He too had reached his limit. She did not know whether they could survive, nor how much longer she could hold on, but she absolutely could not collapse now. In the next second, one ugly monster lunged at Han Seng-ae. Han Seng-ae's gaze turned icy, and her body sank slightly as the power of lightning burst forth in an instant. But then she realized, her legs had gone numb. She did not even know when it had started, but the worst part right now was that 3 more monsters were closing in on her at the same time. Kim Min-jae was frantic with anxiety, but he had no strength left to support her. The monster was just about to sink its teeth into Han Seng-ae's neck. Kim Min-jae even wanted to close his eyes. He could not bear to watch what came next. But 5 seconds passed, and the scream they had expected never came. The instant they opened their eyes, the sight before them was chilling. The monsters in front of them, all of them had vanished, leaving behind only a ground full of bone dust. The next day, Yu Chan-suk met up with them at the Hunter Assembly Point on Jayadon Island. The moment he saw the scene, Yu Chan-suk's expression instantly darkened. He had not expected there to be this many injured. Could it be that while he was gone, the corrosion rift had gone berserk? When everyone saw Yu Chan-suk appear, they all looked shocked. This guy had really cleared a level 3 corrosion rift by himself. But then they looked again at Yu Chan-suk's somewhat lean build, and no matter how they looked at it, he did not seem like someone capable of clearing a level 3 threat. After walking a little farther, Yu Chan-suk found the members of Squad 8. Kim Min-jae was stunned on the spot. He had never imagined that Yu Chan-suk would truly be able to resolve the corrosion rift alone. Yu Chan-suk let out a cold laugh. Let's just say this body moved on its own, all for the sake of protecting my fellow hunters. Everything had gone too smoothly, and Yu Chan-suk knew he needed to play the good guy again and quickly wash away that villainous aura from before. At that moment, someone called out to Yu Chan-suk from behind, and then someone called out to him again from behind. He introduced himself as Park Jong-tae, branch manager of the Korea Operations Company. Yu Chan-suk glanced at him and asked directly, "Was it you who called me here?" The man told Yu Chan-suk to come with him. The mayor wanted to see him. Yu Chan-suk had lost count of how many times he had been summoned by now. These old men just loved ordering people around. Still, he also remembered one thing. The contract had not specified any additional reward for clearing a level 3 threat. Since he was already here, he might as well negotiate the price while he was at it. The moment Yu Chan-suk got out of the car, a man came up to greet him proactively. The other man introduced himself as Lee Pil-jae, a liaison officer responsible for communication and cooperation. As they walked, he said, "The mayor has been looking forward to this meeting for a long time." When he received the Jayandon Island report at dawn, he was stunned on the spot. The chairman immediately told him to arrange a meeting, and he even cancelled all his scheduled appointments just to speak with you. A rookie destroying a level 3 origin point alone, nothing like that has happened since the senior hunters of the first generation. Yu Chan-suk had not expected that someone in the past had accomplished it too. It seemed that person really had been formidable. Yu Chan-suk arrived smoothly at the mayor's office. A slightly chubby man stood up. "Welcome. My name is Park Ji-yun, the mayor of the city. I'm sorry to have called you here on such a gloomy day." He invited Yu Chan-suk to a cafe, wanting to sit down and have a proper talk. As the mayor of Incheon, Jadong Island had always been a source of worry for him, but due to budget limitations, it was very difficult to hire an expensive guild. Yu Chan-suk sipped his tea, thinking only of how to squeeze a hefty sum out of him. After learning that Yu Chan-suk was still a rookie, the mayor instead seemed quite proud. Yu Chan-suk did not quite understand, why had this man suddenly gotten excited. It turned out that Incheon was one of Korea's core regions, and thanks to the infrastructure around Incheon Airport, logistics flowed constantly through it. On top of that, with the Free Economic Zone project, international cities like Songdo attracted massive amounts of foreign capital. With so many options it was dizzying. Huge sums of money passed through Incheon's international urban zones, and goods were transferred through the airport. He would ensure that Yu Chan-suk's path as a hunter would be smooth all the way, paved with success. At that moment, Yu Chan-suk interrupted him, because he wanted to ask a question first. "If you're giving me this much support, then I'd have to give something back too, right? For example, helping a mayor whose approval rating is dropping get re-elected?" The mayor gave a dry cough. "Your information network is impressive. Smartphones really can do anything." Yu Chan-suk had already looked it up online. The mayor's term would end early at the beginning of next year. Judging from the situation, the mainstream view was that re-election was hopeless. Cold sweat formed on the chairman's temples. "You speak very directly, but if you want to get involved in a request like that, wouldn't you also need permission from the Incheon city government? A public notice would not do." As a rookie, Yu Chan-suk indeed needed the mayor's permission to enter. If handled properly, he could even spread the story everywhere that Yu Chan-suk was a genius discovered by Jean of the guild. He wanted to write Yu Chan-suk into his own book of achievements and snatch the credit along the way. The mayor continued, relying on that infrastructure. He had connections with many overseas and domestic companies. He pressed a coffee package on the table as an example. The modeling contract for this brand was about to expire, and he could put Yu Chon-suk's face on it. And that was not all. There were many more possibilities he could offer. But right then, Yu Chon-suk cut him off directly. In your eyes, I'm cheap, aren't I? That's what you're thinking. The mayor's expression stiffened, and he was clearly a little unable to save face. The mayor tried to explain, I've seen the news. This world urgently needs a new face to change this gloomy atmosphere. Yu Chon-suk's gaze instantly turned cold. What I mean is, you say you can give me everything, but all those things were things I was bound to seize with my own hands sooner or later anyway. Don't you think this deal is unfair? The mayor then threw out even more conditions, such as screening safe, high-paying commissions for Yu Chon-suk. But in Yu Chon-suk's eyes, the proposal was mind-numbingly boring. Yu Chon-suk waved a hand and stood up to leave. Please congratulate that coffee model for me. Because I refused, he gets to keep endorsing it. On the other side of Jedong, two people were standing in the shadows. One of the men spoke. It seemed that the experiment on Jedong Island had failed. The man kneeling on the ground could only keep apologizing. But there is also some good news. Hearing the words good news, the man's eyes finally showed interest, and the good news the kneeling man referred to was an edited clip from the hunter qualification exam. The video recorded Yu Chon-suk using the flames of paradox. The man watched the video, and a smile rose at the corner of his mouth. Truly impressive, this rookie. The scene shifted, and after the mission on Jedong Island in Incheon was completed, the national hunter rankings, updated on the first of every month, were reshuffled. This was the moment everyone looked forward to most each month. No matter how old you were waiting for this ranking list to come out. Everyone wanted to know who had taken first place this month. Even hunters kept their eyes on it. Usually the rankings did not change much and were more for public viewing, but this time was different. Soon, the ranking list was delivered into the hands of Hunter Association Chairman Moon Jong-tae. Chairman, this is the September World Hunter Ranking Report. Please review it. Meanwhile, far away on the battlefield, Lee Se-yoon was also watching the rankings closely. At this moment, Yu Chon-suk was sitting in a chair, flipping through the newly released rankings. No matter how flashy the presentation was, the only part that truly carried weight was always the top 10. He quickly opened the ranking page. Rank 10, Swordswoman Lee Se-yoon. Rank 5, Throwing Knife Kim Chae-yoon. Rank 3, Fire God Choi Yeo-yoon. Rank 2, Strongman Jang Tae-suk. Just as Yu Chon-suk was about to open the number 1 rank, there suddenly came a knock at the door behind him. He turned around and saw a venue staff member. Sorry to keep you waiting. You may go out now. And the number 1 spot on the ranking, rising star Yu Chon-suk. The headline even read, he has set the fastest promotion speed in history. If a veteran hunter with 5 years of experience cleared a level 3 corrosion zone alone, it might only count as a routine achievement. In the hunter community, it would not be particularly unusual. But if this was a rookie hunter's first mission, then it was an entirely different matter. When Yu Chon-suk stepped onto the venue stage, the crowd below instantly erupted. Mr. Yu Chon-suk, what did you do before becoming a hunter? Did you really clear the corrosion zone without backup? Did you foresee that the area would upgrade? Questions crashed over him like a tide. Yu Chon-suk let out a long sigh. He felt like one of those children on genius shows and only wanted to answer quickly and leave. Soon, a young man stood up and asked loudly, everyone is very curious about your future. Could you talk about your hunter mindset, or your resolve? Yu Chon-suk had no intention of giving those official lines. He did not want to say a single thing like I'll work hard. He only replied with one sentence. I speak through results. Just use your eyes to look at my results. After answering, Yu Chon-suk boarded a helicopter. Below the cabin was a gigantic black pit. This place had once seen a brutal battle. The person behind him explained to Yu Chon-suk, this scene was terrifying, and overseas it was even worse. After corrosion zones appeared, most countries had already lost administrative capacity. But Korea was different. It had managed to avoid many bloody battles through certain means. Many foreign countries, however, had been swallowed up the instant corrosion zones appeared, and the nations themselves had simply vanished. There were 8 major danger zones among the corrosion zones, the 8 most dangerous places in the world, and the one on the right was Gansalok. Several years ago, Gansalok had suddenly appeared, madly expanding outward in a huge circle from the city center. So fast that no one had time to react, directly causing a country to perish. Although some people had barely survived, for those trapped inside the corrosion zone, most had been swallowed before they could even escape. The disappearance of a country was like dust blown away by the wind, without a trace. Looking out the window, the chairman continued, a nation's influence might not necessarily change in the age of corrosion. But internal power within central governments had already clearly weakened. Yu Chon-suk understood even less. What did any of this have to do with summoning him here? The chairman said that a few days earlier, Yoon Song-hyun of the Grand Purity Guild had come to visit him and had been very dissatisfied that Yoo Chan-suk had not joined his team. Yoo Chan-suk remembered that big guy, but had not taken him seriously at all. But the chairman's next sentence made his expression freeze. Yoon Song-hyun had actually demanded to know Yoo Chan-suk's address immediately. At the time, Yoon Song-hyun had come on very aggressively, and the chairman had not leaked any private information. But the Grand Purity Guild believed in the law of the strong, and even the chairman could not guarantee that the other side would not force Yoo Chan-suk into joining. Yoo Chan-suk felt annoyed. Trouble had come knocking. Although he did not take the other man seriously, with his current strength, he really could not beat him. The chairman observed, judging from your recent actions, you seem more accustomed to acting alone. Yoo Chan-suk admitted it. He had always been that way, and did not want to have his hands tied by a guild title. The chairman handed Yoo Chan-suk a bag. If you want them not to dare come near you, then you need to become stronger. For example, take on the important mission I'm giving you. Yoo Chan-suk had known the chairman was not that simple, but this still counted as the other man helping him once. He asked clearly, what did he want in return? He never believed in free lunches, but the chairman's answer sounded very familiar. He only wanted Yoo Chan-suk to remember that he had helped Yoo Chan-suk. Just like Lee Se-yoon's line of thinking. Yoo Chan-suk reached out and took the bag. He would remember the information inside clearly. When this deal was not a loss, the chairman's mission itself would add to his prestige. Go on, what exactly do you want me to do? You are to escort a cargo ship from Busan to Nanning. In the age of corrosion, transporting daily necessities is difficult. When Yoo Chan-suk saw clearly what those daily necessities were, he froze on the spot. Rolex watches, high-end porcelain, ginseng liquor, pu'er tea, and even luxury cars. He began to wonder whether the definition of daily necessities had changed over the past 20 years. The chairman said, for certain people, these were daily necessities. He had originally thought Yoo Chan-suk would understand that too, but he suddenly stopped there. He realized that the 20 years he had just blurted out was off. Yoo Chan-suk could not understand it at all. In a country where the central government was practically on the verge of collapse, why were they still transporting this kind of garbage? The chairman explained, many countries had fallen apart under corrosion, but international politics still had meaning. To put it bluntly, these were simply lubricants for maintaining relationships, in essence, bribes. If that's the case, then I refuse. As he spoke, Yoo Chan-suk had already undone the seatbelt at his waist. Sweat appeared on the chairman's forehead. Wait, the Korean government considers this task extremely important. Yoo Chan-suk told him not to bother trying to persuade him. His thinking would not change. For an individual to get dragged into a political vortex was foolish. The chairman said coldly, Hunter Yoo Chan-suk, this may be rude of me to say, but you are only a rookie who has just debuted. Excessive attention is already like poison to you. In the next second, an incomprehensible expression appeared on the chairman's face. Because Yoo Chan-suk took everything in the bag and directly threw it all into the sea, these so-called necessities had no value whatsoever to Yoo Chan-suk and would only bring trouble. Standing by the helicopter window, Yoo Chan-suk turned back and said to the chairman, thank you for the helicopter ride. I'll figure out a way to swim back to Seoul. The chairman's face instantly stiffened. He could not keep up with Yoo Chan-suk's logic at all. Yoo Chan-suk pushed off with his foot and left the helicopter directly. He leaped out and plunged into the sea below. The chairman rushed to the cabin door. He doesn't actually intend to swim back by physical strength alone, does he? Yoo Chan-suk hit the water with a huge splash. The chairman looked speechless. Young people these days are really too impulsive. Time quickly reached dusk, and the scene shifted to Incheon port. At one spot in the harbor, someone was staring fixedly at the sea, because he saw bubbles constantly rising on the surface, as if something were about to come up. In the next second, a hand burst out of the water and clutched the steps by the shore. Right after that, Yoo Chan-suk hauled himself onto land and brushed back his hair. I'm exhausted. I almost thought I was going to die. Who threatens people like that? When he turned his head, he found that there was actually someone standing beside him. The passerby said slowly, I don't know what you've been through, but you must have been through a lot. After climbing ashore, Yoo Chan-suk set his goal very clearly. What he needed to do now was build up his strength. By then, no one would be able to control him. Those lofty powerhouses would also be trampled beneath his feet. Very soon, Yoo Chan-suk took out his phone and checked the mission details. One mission in particular caught his interest, a kidnapping case in which the victim needed support from association hunters. The estimated rift level was around level 2. Yoo Chan-suk sat atop a construction machine and watched the sunset slowly exhaling. It seemed that from here on, he was going to be busy for a while. On September 3rd, fishermen from Goj Island in Tonggyang set out to sea to welcome the peak shrimp fishing season. But something major happened during this catch. Rift monsters built nests on the island and abducted all the fishermen as if they were hunting prey. According to one survivor who had luckily escaped, the abducted fishermen were still alive. Therefore, the association released a mission: rescue the hostages and eliminate the rift monsters. If Yu Chan-suk succeeded alone, he might even get a hero story, directly boosting his reputation. This mission was worth challenging, but the risks were equally enormous. Yu Chan-suk had heard that the higher the monster level, the more they seemed to belong to a completely different dimension. Level 3 individuals had destructive power on the level of tanks. Level 2, meanwhile, was like a natural disaster. Level 1 was an outright nightmare. Fighting a single one required the strength of an entire nation. Yu Chan-suk was worrying about whom to team up with when a figure suddenly appeared in his mind. If it was her, there should be no problem. Very soon, it was the day of the mission, and Yu Chan-suk stood there with his spear on his shoulder, waiting to arrive at the destination. He heard a girl calling his name from behind, and this woman was his teammate, Han Sang-ae. Yu Chan-suk, how much longer until we reach the island? Yu Chan-suk checked their position. About another hour. He reminded her to conserve her strength and said he would call her when they arrived. Just as he had said, this battle would be harder than the last one. But Han Sang-ae did not seem to take his words in and instead focused on the armor on his shoulder. That's the Ironwing Angel arm guard, right? Judging from the texture of the leather finish, it's even a limited edition. How did you get it? Yu Chan-suk said it was a gift from a scrap recovery dealer. But Han Sang-ae had also signed with a recovery dealer and had gotten nothing at all. Yu Chan-suk gave her a look of obvious disdain. Do you even need to ask? We're not in the same league at all. I'm the rising star who soloed a level 3 rift, and you're just a rookie female hunter hiding behind the title of Academy Honor Student. Han Sang-ae clenched her teeth, her eyes full of unwillingness. Silently, she swore that she would become famous and show Yu Chan-suk. Time returned to a few days earlier. At that time, Yu Chan-suk had called Han Sang-ae and asked whether she wanted to team up with him for a mission. After hearing the mission summary, she immediately broke into a sweat. Last time, she had nearly died in a third-tier battle. Yu Chan-suk waited for a moment, but there was still silence on the other end of the phone, so he spoke. Don't you want to become stronger? That sentence made Han Sang-ae's pupils tremble. Yu Chan-suk continued pressing her. On the last mission, I heard you say it myself. If I remember correctly, you wanted to learn my way of fighting. If you still want that, I can teach you. I can guarantee that if you stay by my side and learn, you'll become several times stronger than you are now. With that one sentence, Yu Chan-suk persuaded her, and the team-up was successfully settled. Han Sang-ae had a reason she absolutely had to become stronger, even if that road was as dangerous as a blade's edge. As long as she could become stronger, even if hell lay ahead, she would not frown. Seeing that determination in her, Yu Chan-suk suddenly became interested in her. What exactly had this girl gone through? Not long afterward, they saw an unidentified object ahead. The two of them instantly grew tense. There were 5 boats up ahead in total. Yu Chan-suk found it a little troublesome. To get there, they would have to cross over silently, and there were civilians on the boats as well. But just as he finished speaking, a pair of shoes behind him suddenly floated up on there. At that moment, Han Sang-ae was already suspended in midair. Yu Chan-suk had not expected that she actually had this kind of ability. Han Sang-ae burst out laughing. So there are things even you can't do. If you can't even do something this simple, you're really ridiculous. But what she did not know was that the instant she laughed out loud, Yu Chan-suk's face had already darkened completely. In the next second, Yu Chan-suk knocked her on the forehead with one punch and made her carry him while flying. And one more thing, don't splash water onto my clothes. I just bought these. Suddenly, Yu Chan-suk seemed to catch something and looked sharply toward the boats ahead. He told Han Sang-ae to approach the nearest one first, because he could feel fluctuations in magic power. The farther back they went, the stronger it became, and danger was approaching. A moment later, Han Sang-ae brought Yu Chan-suk down beside one of the boats. What confused her was that there was actually a figure standing on the deck. Almost at the same time, Yu Chan-suk stepped onto the deck with one foot. He told Han Sang-ae to open her eyes and look carefully. There was no way a human could move like that. Ahead on the deck, there was actually a huge group of zombies. Han Sang-ae landed heavily on the deck. Yu Chan-suk frowned and reminded her not to land like that, it would hurt her knees, and over time her body would wear out very quickly. And besides, you landed with such a big noise that you've already drawn all the zombies over. Han Sang-ae did not take those zombies seriously at all and directly stomped down, unleashing her power with a violent burst. If she could not even handle basic zombies like these, then she had no right to live. With a few sharp sounds, Han Sang-ae slashed out fierce arcs of sword light that pierced straight through the zombies' bodies. Yu Chan-suk nodded and praised her for doing well. These zombies were not high level, at most the lowest of the second rate. Logically, Han Sang-ae should have been able to clear them easily. But in the very next moment, Yu Chan-suk was nearly caught in the stray electricity she unleashed. Yu Chan-suk immediately started cursing. You idiot. You're using your magic power far too wastefully. If you burn through it like that, you'll hit empty in no time. With low-level zombies, basic techniques are enough. Han Sang-ae's heart gave a slight jolt. He was already starting to teach her. Yu Chansuk had said before that if he taught her, she could become several times stronger. That was also why she had agreed to team up with him, so she would listen to what Yu Chansuk said. Han Sang-ae curled her lips. Fine, I used too much just now, so I'll hold back this time. After saying that, she raised a hand, condensed strong electricity again, and tore the zombie apart by force. The zombie was cleared, but Yu Chansuk still felt she was overdoing it. She had to conserve even more. From then on, Yu Chansuk corrected her all the way, making her use a little less magic power every time she attacked. Under his pressuring style of instruction, Han Sang-ae also began to truly learn how to control her output. Han Sang-ae had had a miserable childhood, so she swore never again to live in the posture of the weak. She would personally stop that endlessly spreading darkness. Becoming stronger was her only path. Suddenly, one zombie lunged ferociously at Han Sang-ae. At the very instant its fangs were about to bite into Han Sang-ae, a bolt of lightning pierced through at a speed the naked eye could not follow. When the lightning fell, that zombie was split cleanly in two. At that moment, the pressure radiating from Han Sang-ae was terrifying. If it would make her stronger, she was willing to jump even into the abyss. As the last nearby zombie fell, Han Sang-ae finally let out a breath of relief. Immediately after, Yu Chansuk leaped to the other side. The threats on the other boats had already all been cleared by him. Han Sang-ae frankly admitted that she still had not reached Yu Chansuk's level, and thanked him for his guidance. She really had gained a lot. Yu Chansuk waved it off. There were too many idiots in this world, and even if you stuffed the answers into their mouths, they still might not swallow them. This was actually the first time Yu Chansuk had seriously given someone advice. Han Sang-ae replied helplessly. Ever since she started learning quickly, people around her had always said she was annoying. Yu Chansuk suddenly changed the subject. If I keep teaching you like this, maybe you'll become even stronger than me, right? Han Sang-ae's expression dimmed. I've never thought about surpassing any teacher. Hearing that, Yu Chansuk felt a little awkward for a moment. He immediately turned forceful again. Don't worry, that kind of thing won't happen to me. I'll make sure you can only look up at me for the rest of your life. Not long afterward, they successfully reached the mission's designated location. The person who came to meet them shouted loudly, "We'll be standing by on Geogiland. We wish you a smooth trip." Yu Chansuk answered blandly, "You do your best too." According to the survivors' intelligence, the hostages were being held near a shrine. Han Sang-ae added that there were two shrines on the island, namely Gaijin Shrine and Atazumi Shrine. Yu Chansuk made a quick judgment. Judging by the distance, Gaijin Shrine should be the first target. At their speed, they could reach it in a few hours. At the same time, Yu Chansuk was calculating in his mind. They were moving with the light now, but the return trip would definitely look very different. The report showed that there were 15 hostages, and if even one of them was injured, the difficulty of evacuation would double. And he could also sense a chilling magic power, far colder than the previous mist. The corrosion creatures across the entire island would hunt them down, in order to avoid being ambushed during the rescue and to bring all the hostages back safely. They would need at least one vehicle. Yu Chansuk turned and asked Han Sang-ae, "Are your driving skills any good?" Han Sang-ae answered without hesitation, "Of course they are. How could they not be?" In the next second, the car shot forward with a roar. Yu Chansuk immediately confirmed it. Han Sang-ae really did drive fast. And behind them, a horde of zombies was also chasing wildly. Yu Chansuk could not help shouting, "Are the brakes on this car just for decoration? If you don't like it, then drive it yourself." Yu Chansuk grabbed the car window and flipped himself onto the roof, cursing inwardly that this girl drove way too recklessly. But it was still more useful than his driver's license that had been gathering dust for 20 years. Han Sang-ae was obviously much better at killing. He gripped his spear tightly and locked onto the monster horde behind them. And in the next instant, the spear thrust out violently, piercing straight through a zombie skull and splitting it in half on the spot. After that, he held on to the seatbelt and shifted to the other side of the car, while loudly warning, "There are monsters charging in from the left." Hearing that, Han Sang-ae jerked the steering wheel hard. After plowing through a small group of zombies, she became even more excited instead. "You monsters, all of you get back onto the sidewalk." Yu Chansuk sighed inwardly. Maybe he really should be the one driving. Just like that, Han Sang-ae sped all the way on, and soon they were about to reach the shrine. But the zombies behind them were gathering in greater and greater numbers. Yu Chansuk said in a low voice, "Leave these monsters to me. Since you insist on chasing us, then I'll wipe you out all at once." In the next moment, purple flames rose around Yu Chansuk, and he immediately sent a raging wave of fire toward the zombie horde. In his mind he calculated, as long as he burned through the stairs leading here, they would never be able to catch up again. A short while later, the two of them arrived at the place where the hostages were being held. Han Sang-ae bent down and softly asked one hostage whose eyes were open, "I'm Han Sang-ae from the Hunter Association. Are you alright?" But the moment the man heard her voice, he immediately opened his mouth and drooled, then started struggling wildly, trying to break free of the ropes. Han Sang-ae instantly panicked and hurriedly explained, "I'm not here to capture you, I'm here to save you." But the man suddenly roared, "Run!" Han Sang-ae froze in place, unable to react in time. In the next second, a ferocious ghost samurai appeared silently behind her and slashed its long blade straight toward her back. At the critical moment, Yu Chansuk stepped in front of her and firmly blocked the fatal blow. He turned his head and urged Han Sang-ae, "Get all the survivors into the car, leave this to me." But in the very next moment, the ghost samurai swung again, and Yu Chansuk raised his hand and blocked it hard. It leaped into the air, and the second strike came crashing down from above. At the instant the blade pressure descended, Yu Chansuk gritted his teeth and endured it head-on. Just as the first blade was about to fall right in front of Yu Chansuk, Han Sang-ae suddenly slammed on the accelerator and, with a thunderous crash, rammed the ghost samurai flying. She shouted, "Get in the car," seeing how fierce she was. Yu Chansuk gave her a thumbs up on the spot. Yu Chansuk asked her, "Did you get all the hostages out?" She replied, "They're all rescued, but look ahead first." Yu Chansuk turned and looked, and saw countless zombies staring fixedly at them. His heart sank, that samurai had been sent flying, and it was still alive. He immediately turned back to Han Sang-ae and told her to lend him her sword. Han Sang-ae cried out, "Are you crazy? Asking a swordsman for their sword is a huge insult." Yu Chansuk lowered his voice. "A swordsman's pride or human lives, you choose." Han Sang-ae fell silent for a moment, but in the end she still threw him the sword. Yu Chansuk gripped the sword and tested its feel, inwardly sighing. He had not expected to use it this soon. He remembered that a few days ago, he had still been inside the level 3 corrosion source on Jedong Island. There, he had found a glowing glove, and after figuring it out, he confirmed that it was not an ordinary glove. The moment he discovered that it could absorb magic power from the surroundings, he understood. Functionally, it was very basic equipment that could support its own magical energy. But to Yu Chansuk, it meant much more. This thing was like a magic power battery. He had estimated its maximum storage, probably enough to last about 5 minutes. And in those brief 5 minutes, he might become strong enough to approach Lee Se-yoon's level. At that moment, Yu Chansuk gripped the sword tightly and activated his magic power. Then in one breath swung out dozens of sword energy arcs, their tearing sounds blending into one. Before the sword energy, the zombies were cut apart and fell like paper, and Han Sang-ae watched with a face full of disbelief. Her heart turned cold. In such a short time, he had already cleared out so many zombies. After clearing the immediate threat, Yu Chansuk told Han Sang-ae not to look back and to drive straight to the harbor. Han Sang-ae nodded and accelerated forward, and soon they reached a harbor in Yitsu. Yu Chansuk thought it would be over once they passed this point, but unexpectedly another huge wave of zombies surged up behind them. Han Sang-ae anxiously said the car was almost at its limit, and they might have to deal with the car first. Yu Chansuk rejected that outright and told her to keep driving. Han Sang-ae was worried, at this speed, they would be caught sooner or later. But just then, the zombies that had been chasing wildly all suddenly stopped in perfect unison. Han Sang-ae was puzzled, it was as if they had hit an invisible wall, and as if thinking of something, her expression shifted. Could it be because of that? She explained, this kind of formation was called the Divine Protection Method. She remembered Yu Chansuk mentioning it before. The Divine Protection Method was a means of suppressing monsters. Yu Chansuk had also said that even if he told her, she would not be able to learn it. It was a skill he had learned in another world. When the car finally slowed to a stop, Han Sang-ae sighed at how dangerous this operation had been. She asked Yu Chansuk, using this method, could they defeat any monster? Yu Chansuk looked at her and reminded her not to think so simply. This method did not work on real people. At that moment, the ghost samurai muttered in a low voice, the sacrifices must be protected. Han Sang-ae's whole body tensed instantly, she could feel that aura, and her heart sank, mind's eye. The surrounding energy grew colder and colder, but Yu Chansuk judged that it was not much of a threat. Mind's eye was a sense beyond the 5 senses that could predict an enemy's attacks. Han Sang-ae could not understand it, even masters found it hard to grasp. So how could an ordinary corpse possibly possess it? Looking at her trembling hand, Yu Chansuk quietly reassured her, don't be afraid. There's no need to fear it. So-called mind's eye, along with other similar techniques, were essentially all illusions. He told her to keep watching, and afterward he would teach her how to deal with them. Then Yu Chansuk slowly walked toward the ghost samurai, and Han Sang-ae was shocked, why can't you handle it alone? Yu Chansuk told her, that was data accumulated through countless real battles. Like a conditioned reflex, it was instinct naturally grown on the battlefield, an unconscious response to an enemy's intent and fear. Simply because he had released killing intent, the other side would fall into that pitiful state. Of course, very few people could do that. Something stirred in Han Sang-ae's heart, sword in sight and mind's eye, that selfless divine sword and the reversal of fate. Perhaps they all belonged to the same kind of enlightenment. At that moment, Yu Chansuk gripped the sword, gave it a light swing, and then followed with another swing. With only those two strikes, the ghost samurai was cut in half at the waist. Looking at the fallen samurai, Yu Chansuk said, "It isn't actually special. What's scary is the illusion of something like enlightenment. You get trapped by these names because you place limits on yourself first. What matters on the battlefield isn't the name, but the result. If you want to break out of the trap, you have to shatter your fixed ideas. That ghost samurai your car couldn't even kill, and its final trump card was only mind's eye." After hearing all that, Han Sang-ae even began to doubt what exactly she had contributed in this hunt. She kept saying she wanted to do her very best, but Yu Chansuk's power had already gone far beyond her understanding. She warned herself inwardly. When acting together with him, she absolutely could not lose focus. She looked up at Yu Chansuk, her gaze growing firmer. She spoke again. "Please, Yu Chansuk, teach me seriously." Yu Chansuk asked in return whether he had not already been teaching her all along. Was giving advice not enough? But Han Sang-ae said that now she wanted Yu Chansuk's direct instruction. "Compared with you, I'm too weak. That's why I want to become stronger as soon as possible." Yu Chansuk did not understand and told her to explain the reason clearly. Hatred ignited in Han Sang-ae's eyes. "Because I want to destroy the Shot Eye Club with my own hands." It was one of the world's 8 major corrosion danger zones, and the Shot Eye Club was infamous for swallowing the Himalayas in a single gulp. Yu Chansuk's heart sank. This goal was far too big. "You want revenge?" Han Sang-ae's eyes were full of pain as she nodded in admission. But she was not asking Yu Chansuk to help for free. Of course, she was not asking Yu Chansuk to do this without compensation. Her family owned a company worth 257 trillion won. Yu Chansuk confirmed, "You're the daughter of a chaebol family." Han Sang-ae nodded lightly. Her grandfather was in power, but she had given up the inheritance struggle. But if she made achievements as a hunter, she might instead be dragged back into the inheritance battle. As long as Yu Chansuk made her stronger, she would give him spirit medicine in return, the kind so scarce that it could not be obtained through normal channels at all. She also asked Yu Chansuk, "You want to become stronger too, don't you?" With the spirit medicine she could provide, he would reach the state he was pursuing. Yu Chansuk knew very clearly in his heart, even if he told her the truth, Han Sang-ae would not believe it. The height he was meant to reach, and that she could never touch, was one he had already stood upon long ago. Now, the only reason he wanted to become stronger was to return the world to what it originally was. So he did not need those scarce resources. "For now, the information you've given me is already enough." Afterward, Yu Chansuk drove Han Sang-ae to the medical center. The doctor there said that the 7 people they had previously sent over, judging by their current nutritional state, would need at least a week before they could speak. Once they regained consciousness, the hospital would notify Yu Chansuk immediately. So for now, they were asked to rest well and focus on recovering their health. In order to help Han Sang-ae improve her strength as quickly as possible, Yu Chansuk then immediately took her to a specialized training ground. But before the training began, Yu Chansuk stared at her and asked a key question. "If I swing my spear with full force, can you dodge it?" Hearing that, Han Sang-ae looked troubled. She felt the gap between herself and Yu Chansuk was too great. But Yu Chansuk rejected that on the spot and directly told her that she definitely could dodge. The method was to push her senses to the limit. Use her eyes to catch every change around her. Use her ears to hear every faint sound clearly. Use her nose to distinguish every change of smell in the air. And finally use her skin to sense the movement of the airflow. When you master these senses, you fight in awareness instead of flailing around unconsciously. Now, let me see whether you can remember what I've said. The moment the words fell, Han Sang-ae's eyes were instantly filled with fear. Yu Chansuk's figure had seemingly vanished into thin air. In the blink of an eye, the weapon's cold edge was already pressed against her neck, and that icy sensation made her whole body stiffen. Yu Chansuk's expression was severe. Real combat doesn't give you time to think things through slowly. You must sense first, then think. Act using the senses you already possess. The things you haven't mastered will only deceive you. Theory ends here. We move to actual combat. In the blink of an eye, the crisp sounds of weapons colliding rang out across the training ground one after another. And Han Sang-ae clenched her teeth and slashed at him fiercely with her blade. Yu Chansuk's eyes were sharp as a hawk, catching precisely the instant she drew her strike. He shifted to the side and cleanly avoided that flash of the blade. In the next second, Yu Chansuk swung his spear backhanded and blasted a heavy strike toward her. Han Sang-ae hurriedly raised her hand, trying to block. But in the blink of an eye, Yu Chansuk had already closed in front of her, the spear tip aimed directly at the center of her brow. Han Sang-ae's heart sank. She knew she could not dodge it. But just then, a voice suddenly rang out. Someone loudly called out to Yu Chansuk. The newcomer's tone was urgent. One of the survivors you rescued has just woken up. Yu Chansuk withdrew his spear and said to Han Sang-ae, "You can already block my attacks a little now. That's enough for the first training session. For now, we're going to the hospital." After rushing to the hospital, the survivor was trembling in panic. Grabbing Yu Chansuk, he said he had witnessed something unusual. A truck had driven to the place where he was being held, and someone escaped from it. That group was terrifyingly calm, catching them would have been almost impossible. The monsters showed no hostility toward them at all and were even helping them. They picked out several hostages and loaded them straight onto the truck. Hearing this, Yu Chansuk finally understood why only 7 hostages had been rescued because someone from Silver Hope had successfully escaped from there. And it was precisely because of that person's actions that they had gotten the chance to save the others. But the moment Yu Chansuk voiced that deduction, the survivor immediately denied it. Because those people had not escaped at all, they had been deliberately let go. Even stranger was this, ordinary civilians could break in and still escape, but trained hunters could not get in. If someone did not want to let you leave, then even being a hunter was useless. What would that mean? That place was a trap from the very beginning. But why would they do that? Yu Chansuk listened with growing interest, and the corner of his mouth slowly lifted. If they dare play tricks like this, then I'll play with them to the end. Looking at Yu Chansuk's expression, Han Sang-ae felt her chest tighten. Had he gotten angry because someone was underestimating him? Yu Chansuk asked the survivor again, aside from the trap, were there any other clues? The survivor hesitated for a moment, frowning as he tried to remember, and finally said that he had seen a cat. The person who came out of the airport had a cat-shaped mascot hanging from his waist. After getting that clue, Yu Chansuk and Han Sang-ae immediately set out for the airport. But after turning the airport upside down, they did not even find an ant, much less the target. Yu Chansuk stopped and stood where he was, beginning to weigh things in his mind. Should he go back to the shrine and investigate again? Just then, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. That face full of piercings left a deep impression on Yu Chansuk. How did your face end up like that? The man looked like an idiot on the surface, but Yu Chansuk knew this was absolutely no ordinary opponent. At that moment, Kim Ha-yun stood before the two of them, and admitted that he was the one who had brought the hostages onto the island. The two of them immediately tensed. That hostage was still alive. Kim Ha-yun spoke coldly, "Now, it's time for you to see what a so-called alternative plan looks like." Then he directly threw a hostage into the designated area. He's throwing a person into the corrosion zone. As long as the core remained, anyone thrown in there would have no chance of escaping. In the next second, that hostage mutated on the spot and directly became a corrosion entity. Kim Ha-yun gave a mocking laugh. "Just as I expected, weak hosts are worthless. A person like this can't even withstand a casual kick from me." Yu Chansuk asked in a low voice, "Are you trying to turn us into monsters too?" Kim Ha-yun answered bluntly, "Of course. Sacrificing ordinary civilians alone is far from enough. We need to create corrosion entities that truly meet the requirements." Yu Chansuk's gaze grew colder, "So your goal was never just kidnapping?" Kim Ha-yun shrugged, "Personally, I don't care about anyone on this island. But the elder told me to explain, said it was for the greater good, so listen carefully. We are the heirs of Dangle, gathered here for one purpose alone, and we will achieve it at any cost, to preserve Korea's current hegemonic status. If we do that, no one will dare challenge us again, and in the end we will build a truly powerful nation." As his words fell, Kim Ha-yun kicked the nearby car and sent it flying. The vehicle roared through the air toward Yu Chansuk. With one sweep of his spear, Yu Chansuk split the car cleanly in two. Yu Chansuk said coldly that in his view, this country was already one of the world's great powers. But Kim Ha-yun was even more unhinged. "It's still not enough. We want this nation to become something all people can be proud of, a powerful country that no one would dare look down on, to master a truly overwhelming, unshakable superhuman power. This country's past. It was once colonized, and I will never forget that humiliation. So we will reclaim everything that was lost." Yu Chansuk could tell that Kim Ha-yun was a black belt in Taekwondo, and despite having no equipment, he was absurdly fast, stronger than Yu Chansuk had estimated. But Yu Chansuk could still barely withstand his force. Honestly speaking, the logic Kim Ha-yun was using was not completely unreasonable. If the corrosion zones disappeared, Korea would have a hard time maintaining its current position. But Yu Chansuk directly shot back. "So what? Countless innocent people are dying. Can't you tell what matters most right now?" Kim Ha-yun sneered. "The one who truly doesn't understand is you. We've already found a way to control the corrosion zones." A flicker moved in Yu Chansuk's eyes. "If you really can control the corrosion zones, that would mean everyone could live safely. If the conditions are right, I'm willing to discuss cooperation." but to what extent can you actually control them? Kim Hyun replied disdainfully. Why should I tell you? In any case, we've already achieved enough control. Yu Chon-suk exposed him on the spot. So this so-called enough means you haven't achieved complete control, right? Just as I thought, you people don't have that kind of power at all. Acting as if you have lofty goals just makes you disgusting. Yu Chon-suk had intended to drag things out through conversation and slowly recover his magic power. But right now, his reserves were critically low, and he could not release the flames of paradox at all. Without the flames of paradox, he had almost no chance of defeating Kim Hyun. Just then, Han Sang-ae suddenly swung a streak of sword light at Kim Hyun. Kim Hyun smiled mockingly. I thought you'd be so scared you couldn't move. Didn't expect a pretty face like yours to actually have some guts. Yu Chon-suk immediately shouted, Han Sang-ae, don't fight him head on. Han Sang-ae gritted her teeth and answered, your scroll's magic is obviously exhausted. If you force more spirit medicine into yourself, there's a real chance your magic will overload. Right now, the only thing I can do is buy you time. Yu Chon-suk said quietly, thanks, Han Sang-ae. Give me 5 minutes, and I'll finish him. Han Sang-ae stared at him. Yu Chon-suk, you can't lose. In the next second, Kim Hyun lunged at Han Sang-ae with savage force. There was even a smile in his tone. Miss Han Sang-ae, I'm honestly worried I might not control my strength and kick you to death. Before the words had fully fallen, he launched a sweeping kick. The terrifying force sent Han Sang-ae flying on the spot. Fortunately, Yu Chon-suk rushed forward immediately and caught her firmly. Han fixed his eyes on Kim Hyun and said coldly, are you ready to die? Kim Hyun's pupils contracted. How did your magic suddenly increase so much? Were you hiding your strength from the start? Yu Chon-suk answered indifferently, nothing worth being surprised about. The principle is the same as the piercings on your face. Kim Hyun froze. How do you know that? Yu Chon-suk's gaze was like a blade. The fact that you haven't even noticed can only mean you're stupid. Look around, there's purified magic leaking all through the air. The magic inside your body has been overloaded for a long time, and that's why it's leaking out. Thanks to you, I finally gathered enough magic to ignite the flames of paradox. Come to think of it, I should thank you. Kim Hyun roared, you're talking nonsense. There's no way in the world to absorb discarded magic. Yu Chon-suk's voice turned colder. You don't need to know the truth. Either way, you die here today. In the next second, Yu Chon-suk's figure flashed, and he thrust 16 times in succession at Kim Hyun. After being pierced through, Kim Hyun could not even keep breathing, and he quickly realized that the problem with his body was far beyond lung damage. More fatal still, he could no longer even sense his own heartbeat. He was only standing by sheer force of magic power, just to preserve the last scrap of pitiful dignity he had left. And Yu Chon-suk had already burned away all the muscular strength in his body, leaving him with no capital to resist. Driven into a corner, Kim Hyun actually cried out to his captain for help. The moment the words left his mouth, a blinding light exploded before Yu Chon-suk's eyes. Yu Chon-suk's nerves tightened instantly, and he entered a combat response at once. In the next second, he pulled out the spear on his back and swung it hard toward the direction from which the attack had come. After blocking that wave of offense, Yu Chon-suk stared coldly ahead, wanting to see who else dared interfere. The other side had not expected that Yu Chon-suk could draw his spear and counterattack immediately. According to his plan, Yu Chon-suk's wrist should at least have been crippled first. Not only did that person receive Yu Chon-suk's counterattack, he even praised his reflexes and instincts in battle. Yu Chon-suk's heart sank, even in this era. There was still someone using traditional Korean archery. This guy was the captain they had mentioned, and the pressure of the energy waves coming off him was worthy of the title of captain. No matter how unwilling he was to admit it, Yu Chon-suk could only admit that this man was at least twice as strong as Lee Se-yoon, and possibly 3 to 4 times as strong. At that moment, the hooded man above finally spoke. He first praised Yu Chon-suk's courage, then asked in return, was Yu Chon-suk not afraid of death? Looking up at him on the rooftop, Yu Chon-suk answered in an unhurried tone, if you really wanted to kill me, you'd have done it already. The fact that you haven't means you have another objective. Then Yu Chon-suk raised a hand and activated his strange flame. Are you more interested in the life in my hands, or in the one under my feet? At the same time, Kim Hyun, wrapped in the strange flames, felt the burning pain intensify. At the last of his strength, he screamed and begged the captain to save him. Hearing the wailing, the hooded man directly ordered Yu Chon-suk to extinguish the flames on Kim Hyun, saying he did not want to repeat himself. At that moment, Yu Chon-suk finally understood everything. Before Kim Hyun collapsed, his magic had already been exhausted, and now it was only the hooded man's magic that was keeping him alive. More importantly, if that arrow just now had aimed at Yu Chon-suk's head rather than his wrist, he would already be dead. The other side had deliberately held back. On the other side, Kim Hyun finally could not hold on any longer, and his consciousness began to fade. In the next second, he completely lost his strength, and his body collapsed uncontrollably. The hooded man instantly flashed to his side and caught him steadily, then demanded to know whether Yu Chansuk realized what he had done to Kim Hai-hyen. Kim Hai-hyen's muscular strength was ruined, and for the rest of his life he would only on magic power to maintain blood circulation, destined to live in a wheelchair. The hooded man said coldly, "I will take you back alive. As long as I leave you breathing, that's enough. As long as Yu Chansuk was left with a single breath, that would be enough." Yu Chansuk fired back without hesitation, "Go ahead and try. I'd rather self-detonate on the spot than become your puppet." But before he could figure out the principle behind Yu Chansuk's flames, the hooded man withdrew first. He left behind one sentence. "When corrosion rifts first appeared, no one believed they could be controlled either, but I did it. One day, you too will stand beneath my rule." With that, his figure flashed and disappeared directly from Yu Chansuk's sight. After the hooded man left, Yu Chansuk understood, a short-tempered madman had set his sights on him. Even Han Sang-ae could tell. The thing the other side wanted was Yu Chansuk's unique trait. Logically speaking, if they had truly wanted to capture him, they could easily have tied him up while he was unconscious. But Yu Chansuk suspected that the other side might already know Han Sang-ae's background. Han Sang-ae asked, "Do you think terrorists would care about a background like that?" Yu Chansuk told her to think carefully. What was the real purpose behind this entire sequence of actions? Han Sang-ae reacted instantly and blurted out, "Wait, could it be that the Korean government doesn't actually want this matter resolved?" Yu Chansuk voiced his guess. The group behind all this had likely been receiving direct official support the whole time. Han Sang-ae panicked on the spot. "When does that mean we shouldn't have cleared this corrosion rift?" But Yu Chansuk answered her blandly, "Who cares, we'll just pretend we don't know." But Han Sang-ae said awkwardly that she was not good at lying. Yu Chansuk sighed helplessly, he had guessed that long ago. Then Yu Chansuk began walking deeper into the building and said to Han Sang-ae at the same time, they could settle the later trouble afterward, but for now they had to deal with the problem in front of them first. She should wait outside while he went in alone. Han Sang-ae looked worried. "Do you really not need me to come in and help?" Yu Chansuk glanced back at her, "You have no idea what they've done inside. Once I go in and take a look, everything will become clear. Stay here, rest, recover your strength, and wait for me to come back." With that, Yu Chansuk did not hesitate. With one leap, he jumped straight into the depths of the corrosion rift. After passing through the dark tunnel, Yu Chansuk reached his destination, the level 2 corrosion rift on Tsushima Island. Very soon, he arrived in front of the door of an old-style building. He did not pause and simply raised his hand and pushed the wooden door open. The instant the door opened, he saw the scene before him clearly and completely confirmed it. This really was a level 2 corrosion rift. He had originally thought this place would be a castle piled up from rotten undead flesh, but the structure before him was so solid that it was alarming. Not only that, the Yin energy was as dense as fog. Every breath Yu Chansuk took felt like icy needles stabbing into his lungs. Yu Chansuk knew very well in his heart, behind this door lay all the answers he wanted. Beyond the door was the location of the corrosion rift core. Yu Chansuk had never liked overthinking before a fight, but this time he had no choice but to calculate every possibility in advance. If he relaxed for even one instant, he could lose his life on the spot. After walking into the room, Yu Chansuk immediately saw a black vessel emitting a strange green glow. Watching that thing churn continuously with green light, Yu Chansuk's heart sank. It was actually a huge vat. He could hardly believe it. This thing was the core of a level 2 corrosion rift. The thing before him was the complete opposite of what he had expected. Just then, a faint sound reached him, and Yu Chansuk's pupils contracted sharply. Following the sound, he saw a man covered in wounds lying on the ground, stretching out a hand and using the last of his strength to beg him for help. At the same time, something suddenly extended out of the vat, and viscous liquid dripped from the rim one drop at a time. The man on the ground cried out, "Both my legs are gone, the pain is unbearable." His fingers clawed desperately at the cold ground, and though he was clearly on the verge of death, his pleas for help still came out in broken bursts. But in the very next second, a thick tail suddenly lashed out. Yu Chansuk's pupils shrank and his body froze for an instant. Immediately afterward, the man was dragged alive into the vat, and even his final cries for help were completely swallowed by the eerie green light. That scene instantly reminded Yu Chansuk of the other world. Countless shrill screams and cries for help flooded his ears like a tide. The hellish sight before him made his stomach churn, and instinctively he clamped a hand tightly over his mouth. He clenched his teeth, and cold fury surged in his eyes. What a disgusting bunch of humans. At that moment, Yu Chansuk fully understood. This was not the core of a corrosion rift at all, but an altar for live human sacrifice. But this sacrifice was different from every case he had encountered before. The instant this violent yet familiar energy appeared, Yu Chansuk recognized it immediately. Yes, this was the aura. In the next second, a bizarre figure fully revealed itself before Yu Chansuk. Looking at the katana clenched in the other party's hand, Yu Chansuk finally understood. This was the aura of a samurai. Him straight into a hell-level dungeon meant for soloing a boss. Who could have imagined that the moment he entered, he ran head-on into a bizarre figure wrapped all over in eerie turquoise, demonic energy, gripping a katana that glinted with bone-chilling cold light. What shocked him even more was that the core of the level 2 corruption source was this very freak, and that mysterious hooded man had somehow captured and controlled him alive. Turquoise, corruption energy surged wildly around the freak's body, and after he assumed a complete combat stance. Seeing the shackle around his neck, Yukinsuk stayed calm, though inwardly shaken. Anyone who could suppress a level 2 corruption source barehanded was far beyond any human hunter at this stage. Seeing no fear on Yukinsuk's face, the monster felt challenged and flew into a berserk rage, its killing intent pressing in from all sides. A cold flash wrapped in turquoise, demonic energy slashed at Yukinsuk's vital point in an instant, so fast it left only an afterimage and no time to react. Fortunately, Yukinsuk's reflexes were fast enough, and he barely escaped disaster. Watching Yukinsuk's desperate dodge, the freak muttered that the kid was hard to kill. He had escaped 2 killing moves in a row, anyone else would already have fallen. Yukinsuk was not about to wait for death. As the monster drew back its blade, he seized the opening, poured all his strength into the staff, and struck back. Against a speed-based close combat powerhouse, the only way to turn the tide was to strike first. He could not stay on the defensive until his stamina ran out. The freak completely saw through Yukinsuk's intent to attack. A chilling gleam full of pressure flashed in his narrow eyes as he had already predicted the trajectory of the staff's descent, and raised his hand in advance to block. The staff and katana slammed into each other, and at the instant the two forces collided, a dazzling golden light burst forth, the impact driven to the absolute limit. What Yukinsuk had not expected was, that the killing blow he had unleashed with all his strength was casually stopped by the freak with one hand. He could not even push his opponent back half a step. The gap in their raw strength was obvious at a glance. Worse still, a far more terrifying detail made Yukinsuk's scalp tingle and his heart tremble. He had been watching the freak's every move the entire time. Yet from start to finish, he could barely make out the full motion of the other party raising a hand, lifting the blade, and blocking. His reaction speed had already surpassed normal human understanding. Yukinsuk's heart jolted, so this was the top-tier speed rush style. In the very next second, the monster swung its blade again, leaving him no chance to catch his breath. This slash was even more vicious than the last, aimed straight at his neck. The blade missed his carotid artery by a hair 0.1 seconds slower, and his throat would have been slit on the spot. When the freak saw Yukinsuk narrowly evade another deadly slash, his competitive spirit flared at once. He stopped holding back and unleashed his trump card. Countless blue-green swords of light formed out of thin air and swept toward Yukinsuk all at once. Sharp blades tore through flesh, and blood splashed continuously into the air as Yukinsuk was instantly wounded in many places. The monster looked down at the kneeling Yukinsuk like a grandmaster. Covered in wounds and out of strength, Yukinsuk could no longer fight, and the outcome was already clear. Driven to the brink, Yukinsuk suddenly unleashed his exclusive ability, Contradictory Black Flame. It was his ultimate trump card, one he would never use unless death was at hand. Yukinsuk had never imagined that on his very first mission, he would be forced this quickly to use his life-saving trump card. But the next second, reality hit hard. The monster was not alive, and the Contradictory Black Flame did nothing. Yukinsuk's strongest move was useless. Seeing that this kid had actually stood back up again, the freak could not help but sigh that humans really were hard to kill. After that sigh, the freak stopped delaying. Gripping the katana with both hands, he let blue light surge through his body and prepared to end the battle. Yukinsuk was badly injured, his trump card had failed, and his stamina was gone. He was at his limit. He was too weak to stop the monster's next attack. Seeing that Yukinsuk was on the brink of despair yet still refused to bow his head, the monster felt a strange stir. The next second, it chose to end it at once. In that instant, a voice flashed through. At that moment, the freak slowly guided the katana back into the scabbard at his waist. Leaning on his battered body, Yukinsuk raised his staff with both hands and barely took a defensive stance, cold sweat covering his forehead and fear plain in his eyes. The searing pain from that near miss had almost made him pass out, but for some reason, the guy had not torn through the muscles in his shoulder. He seized the moment the freak turned away and exposed a blind spot, then lowered himself and circled behind for a sneak attack, betting on this one chance to turn the fight around. But the freak had long seen through that little move. Before Yukinsuk could get behind him, a sharp surge of sword energy was already coming from the rear, and the sense of mortal danger instantly wrapped around his whole body. He could clearly feel that the blade behind him had already locked on to his vital point. From behind him, the freak said calmly, with a hint of mockery, that his speed was far too slow. Before absolute speed, any thought of a sneak attack was pointless. Sharp sword energy danced wildly through the air, and a bright red bead of blood slowly dripped down the blade. In this one-sided crushing battle, from beginning to end, Yukinsuk could only take the beating passively and had absolutely no power to fight back. The cold blade was pressed directly before Yukinsuk's neck, its sharp side tied against his skin, and the edge was only 1 millimeter away from his cheek, one slight bit farther forward and it would slice open his carotid artery. At the critical moment between life and death, Yukinsuk clenched his teeth and forcibly suppressed the tearing pain throughout his body. Using the last trace of his strength to retreat at incredible speed and widen the distance, barely escaping this fatal restraint, the freak looked at Yukinsuk, who had narrowly escaped, and a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. The kid's luck was good, a blow that should have killed him had somehow missed. Yukinsuk calmly reviewed the fight. The other party had clearly had dozens of chances to kill him in one stroke, yet had held back the whole time. The monster fell silent, then finally told the truth. In his complete state, he could have killed Yukinsuk in the first exchange. The fight would not have lasted this long. After hearing these words, Yukinsuk's eyes filled with shock, and countless questions surged up from the bottom of his heart. The freak slowly spoke of the calamity that had befallen him. He had lost all memory of the past, and only blank emptiness remained in his mind. He recalled the experience of his crushing defeat. His former self had been utterly defeated by a strange man of unknown origin, and after losing, he had been fitted with a metal shackle that symbolized humiliation while also restraining his power, and it had bound him all the way until today. After learning the monster's past, Yukinsuk felt conflicted. Its body remained, but its memories and combat instincts were gone. In that sense, it was his opposite. He immediately thought of the shackles the freak had mentioned and linked them to the rumors among hunters. Could this restraint on the strong be the very tool that mysterious man had used to control him? The freak's eyes were full of loneliness. Even his own real name had been completely forgotten, and the swordsmanship techniques once engraved into his heart so thoroughly had now become something he had to relearn from zero. How to grip a sword, how to swing a blade. What kept him gripping the katana day after day was no longer protection, ambition, or obsession, but the overwhelming resentment born of defeat and lost memories. As his words fell, invisible blue sword energy surged through the space, corruption energy ran wild, and the oppressive atmosphere instantly reached its peak. Yukinsuk felt a little speechless and inwardly confused. What was going on now? How had the other party's resentment suddenly skyrocketed to this extent? He weakly grabbed at his own hair with both hands, and above his head floated a pitch-black level 2 corruption source core. With invisible threads of energy extending downward to connect to his skull, the energies of the two tangled tightly together. Swallowed by the triple torment of lost memories, shackles, and defeat, the freak had been pushed to his limit, his chest choked with helpless rage and nowhere to vent it. The resentment surging around him was denser and more terrifying than at any previous moment. Once this resentment fully lost control, its destructive power would multiply. Though memory loss had left flaws in his moves, the freak's battle instincts, forged over years, remained. Even with blood running from his eyes, his combat foundation was not entirely gone. If the enemy could not kill him at once, Yukinsuk still had a slim chance to strike back. To leave the core zone alive, he had to go all out. The freak was wrapped in glaring turquoise light, his presence at its peak, and Yukinsuk immediately pulled back to a safe distance. The freak's pupils suddenly contracted, his face full of disbelief, as he abruptly sensed that something was wrong. Strange black flames were tightly enveloping Yukinsuk's entire body, and the wounds left by the battle just now had actually all healed completely. The freak was filled with confusion. The restorative power of these black flames was simply too outrageous. Yukinsuk gave a grin. He had already seen it very clearly now. This flame burned concepts. Burning away concepts sounded like it possessed infinite destructive power, but in reality, that was not the case. Fatigue and staircase friction were both concepts, but on different levels. The greater one's mastery, the wider the effect, and the higher the cost in magic power and proficiency. Overuse could cause backlash. Against Kim Hai-hee and Yukinsuk kept the flames restraint to avoid burning away the concept of his own muscles. If this were his original peak body in the other world, he would not need to be so cautious with this conceptual flame. But in this world, his power was heavily restricted. Normally, he had to keep his power restrained to avoid the risk of backlash. But now this was a life and death battle, and worrying about backlash any further had become meaningless. Golden light suddenly blazed in Yukinsuk's eyes as he stared fixedly at the freak before him. Next, I'm going to burn away the durability of this space. At that moment, the freak suddenly leaned back slightly. He had no idea what durability even meant. Yukinsuk's gaze was blade sharp, and he waved a hand, too lazy to explain. There was no point reasoning with someone who did not understand the rules. Taking advantage of the moment while the freak was still frozen in place, Yukinsuk's figure flashed as he activated Flash Step and charged straight into his face. A terrifying conceptual force bore down head-on, and the freak was instantly crushed by the pressure to the point where he could barely breathe. Yukinsuk gripped the iron rod in his hand tightly, his tone cold and domineering. Don't think about it. Take the beating first, then slowly try to understand. The freak instantly understood. He had not expected a human to know power's final barrier, but to him, that was good. He had always wanted to break his shackles by his own strength. The freak immediately proposed changing locations and fighting with full power. The room inside was far too small to allow them to fully unleash their strength. Outside, the sky was clear, the wind gentle, and the visibility incomparably wide. With a thunderous boom, both of them exploded with power at the same time, smashing straight through the roof and soaring into the air. High in the sky, the two powerhouses faced off from afar, both gathering strength as their killing intent peaked, each intended to decide life and death in a single move. The next second, heaven and earth changed color. The sky darkened as lights of every attribute twisted and collided, drowning the air in violent energy. The freak seized the opening exposed by the interlacing lights and locked onto his chance to attack. Holding the katana in hand, after charging power, he slashed out fiercely with one stroke. This strike was savage to the extreme, carrying the sound of air being torn apart. Yukinsuk's pupils suddenly shrank as he stared fixedly at the blade cleaving toward him. The sharp katana struck the iron rod with perfect accuracy. A piercing metallic screech rang through the mountains as dazzling golden light exploded, and the iron rod, hardened to its limit, snapped on the spot. Yukinsuk's heart sank, and his mind went blank. The freak also showed delight, not expecting that this strike had truly hit. Clearly the sky was still bright and clear at that moment, with no strange phenomenon at all. Yet on the mountaintop, a piece of broken stone suddenly rose into the air. Immediately after, a dazzling blue arc cut across the sky, the stone fell onto the mountaintop. The hard mountain rock was instantly split in two from the middle and exploded with a crash. Gripping a sharp sword formed from broken stone, Yukinsuk's figure burst forward violently as he launched a desperate charge at the freak. In the air, there remained only the afterimage of a snow-white sword mark. The freak, positioned above, suddenly turned his head to look back. An uncontrollable terror instantly surfaced in his eyes. At this moment, Yukinsuk had already completely entered a state of battle madness. The distance between the two was instantly closed, until only the slightest margin remained. The situation on the battlefield spiraled completely out of control, and there was no road back anymore. Violent energy directly blasted the freak backward dozens of meters. The freak dragged the tip of his foot against the ground to force himself to stop, gouging out two trenches several meters deep in the earth. The freak's heart shook violently. This kind of terrifying impact was a pressure he had never felt in any of his past battles. He was filled with doubt, just what exactly was this human boy? His gaze turned toward the sky. Above, a cross-shaped blade of light dove rapidly downward, slashing straight at him. The freak had never seen or even heard of a move in this form. Holding a spear, Yukinsuk curled it out with all the strength in his body. Countless blue rays crossed and gathered in the air, weaving into a giant net. In an instant, it cut the freak's body into countless fragments. In the final second before his life dissipated, the freak could only let out a heartrending scream. This human boy truly intended to put him to death. Yukinsuk gazed at the black shadow scattering in the sky, opening his mouth wide as blazing battle intent erupted from his eyes. Even heavily wounded, the freak still retained fighting power and had not fallen behind in the slightest. The two faced each other once more, staking all their power as they prepared to make the final ultimate decision. Sharp blades tore through his flesh, and several strikes hit Yukinsuk in succession. Blood quickly soaked his clothes, and his wounds were gruesome. And the freak as well was critically wounded head-on by the power of concepts, his condition plummeting off a cliff. Both of them clenched their teeth at the same time, enduring the intense pain by force. Their eyes containing nothing but the utmost hunger for victory and an almost obsessive fixation. The entire mountain burst with an extremely dense and violent purple light. The core area of the mountain was completely swallowed by that terrifying energy. Time returned to before his soul transmigrated here. A friend had asked him what he would do if he met an opponent he could not defeat, and that opponent was so powerful that he was probably about on the same level as him. Yukinsuk's answer was simple. Cold sweat streamed down his companion's forehead as he waited uneasily for the answer. If he really met someone like that, then out of those two people, one of them would definitely have to die. Yukinsuk dropped to one knee, looking as if his stamina was exhausted and he had already lost, while the freak stood behind him, his whole figure shrouded in darkness. The freak thought he had already secured victory and burst into wild laughter. But things were far, far from as simple as he imagined. An extremely ruthless cold gleam flashed through Yukinsuk's eyes, and a sneer of complete control curled onto his lips. At the very moment that sharp sword wrapped in blue cold light fiercely stabbed into the ground, Yukinsuk had already cleanly and decisively slain the freak before him. Just then, the system suddenly popped up a window and directly gave him an exclusive treasure chest. Staring at the dark blue chest, he was instantly excited. He had not expected the reward to appear just like it did in the otherworld's dungeons. But the moment he opened the treasure chest, the item inside was somewhat unexpected. It was actually a short spear. He instinctively gripped the shaft, and in the next second, a miracle happened. The spear had instantly shot out through the air, so fast that its trajectory could not be seen at all. It turned out that this weapon could freely extend and contract in length depending on the wielder's magic power. As everyone knew, as long as one entered a corruption source and cleared it successfully, everyone could obtain a system reward. At that moment, Yukinsuk felt a twinge of regret. If he had known, he would have brought Han Sang-ye along. Even hiding her in the safe zone to claim a reward would have been worth it. On second thought, he happened to be lacking a sword right now, so he might as well give Han Sang-ye the weapon he had used to kill the freak as a gift. At this time, the entire building was deathly silent, so quiet that it felt chilling. Han Sang-ye lay on the floor, sleeping deeply. But in the next second, her instinct suddenly caught a deadly aura of danger. Immediately after, a long sword came crashing straight down toward her head. She whipped her head around and only then realized that Yukinsuk had thrown it over. Yukinsuk casually brushed it off, saying he had just picked it up along the way, and even specifically told Han Sang-ye to accept it and properly get used to the weapon. The moment the sword was drawn from its scabbard, the blade reflected her image. At a glance, it was obvious that this was an excellent sword, and one that had been maintained extremely well. Han Sang-ye immediately became suspicious and directly questioned him, "Where exactly did you pick up such a top-tier sword? And also, how could you have come out of a level 2 corruption source without a single injury?" But at this moment, Yukinsuk's whole body was sore and weak, and his eyelids were so heavy that he could not keep them open at all. In the next second, he suddenly collapsed stiffly right in front of Han Sang-ye without any warning. Cold sweat instantly burst out all over Sang-ye. This rookie monster could actually faint, too. Very soon, news that a rookie hunter had solo cleared a level 2 corruption source spread back to hunter headquarters. Every hunter gathered in the hall stared at the unfamiliar face on the giant screen. Meanwhile, Yukinsuk's phone had long since exploded with messages, with notification pop-ups flooding the screen non-stop. Holding his phone, he looked at the tightly packed crowd surrounding the outside of the window, and his mood became indescribably complicated for a moment. Just then, a cool female voice suddenly came from behind him. The person who had come was none other than Ju Sujong, the person in charge of the arcane chamber of the Tower of Prohibited Transport. Yukinsuk quickly thanked her for paying all of his hospital fees in advance. But when he heard the name Tower of Prohibited Transport, he still could not help being startled. After all, the treatment costs here were terrifyingly high. An ordinary person would never possibly pay such a price for someone unrelated. Yukinsuk went straight to the point. "Tell me, what is your real purpose?" It was impossible that Ju Sujong had personally come here merely to visit a patient. Yukinsuk told her to get to the point and stop wasting each other's time. Instead, she smiled and first brought up a piece of cake. She took out a shield generator. This thing could be used to defend against corrupted entities. A bite had already been taken out of the sliced cake by then. Only then did Ju Sujong reveal her true reason for coming. She wanted to entrust all transportation missions for the magic shield devices to Yukinsuk. At present, this equipment was still in the most critical phase of experimental research and development. Once mass production succeeded, it would be able to protect those high-risk areas that hunters were unable to reach. This was even an important mission capable of changing the fate of all humanity. Yukinsuk immediately realized that the scale of this commission was probably even greater than he had imagined. After opening the mission report handed over by Ju Sujong, he was completely stunned. Even the powerful Monkey Guild had accepted this joint mission, which was enough to show how important it was. Their transport route was extremely complex, first by train, departing from Vladivostok to the Netherlands, then transferring to a special plane to Dover in the United Kingdom for the final field experiment. Yukinsuk could not understand why they had to go to the United Kingdom of all places. That island nation was surrounded on all sides by the sea, and the power of hunters simply could not cover it. The hunter companies of today were like warlords, each controlling different regions, and their operation this time had also come at the invitation of an international organization to deliver relief supplies there together. Yukinsuk's heart jolted. Could this international train trip become the target of concentrated attacks and hunts by every major faction? In this mission, the Tower of Prohibited Transport would only be responsible for data collection and analysis throughout the journey, and Ju Sujong herself would also participate as a team member the whole way. While eating cake, Yukinsuk sorted out his thoughts. Having an acquaintance along really was more reassuring, but why was this woman so certain that he would agree? He then put down his knife and fork and stated his one and only condition for taking part in the mission. Han Sang-ye had to be brought along as well. Upon hearing this condition, Ju Sujong immediately showed obvious reluctance. Yukinsuk quickly explained that he and Han Sang-ye had a prior agreement, and that her strength was absolutely reliable. He gripped the armrest of the chair tightly, clearly a little nervous, afraid that the other party would refuse. But unexpectedly, Ju Sujong compromised in the end after all. Yukinsuk could not help but think to himself that his influence was growing even faster than he had expected. The scene shifted, and a helicopter came roaring down onto the hospital rooftop. Looking at this display, Yukinsuk could not help but sigh. A civilian commission could actually mobilize a dedicated helicopter for pickup and drop-off. Only now did he fully understand just how absurd the difference in prestige was between a level 2 corruption source and a level 3 mission. The association president admitted frankly, when your strength changes from something people hope for into something they can confirm, the Hunter Association will pour in every resource to guarantee your operational safety. Yukinsuk stepped onto the helicopter, and his heart suddenly felt much clearer. The rules of this world were simply that realistic. As long as you were strong enough, many things became much easier. He looked at the association president's back below, yet a question rose in his mind. Did the man actually know about Kim Hae-hee, and that mysterious hooded man as well? There was no time to think further. He grabbed the edge of the aircraft and climbed straight into the cabin. A familiar figure came into view at once. Lee Se-yoon was raising a hand to greet him. The helicopter immediately started up and rose into the air. After circling once in the sky, it flew at full speed toward the mission target. On the ground, the association president watched the departing helicopter and silently prayed that this mission would be completed smoothly. While in the air, Yukinsuk learned that this aircraft was next headed for an army base. What surprised him even more was that the South Korean regular army would also be joining this joint mission. If the mission succeeded, not only would it protect national security, it would also greatly reduce the country's dependence on hunter forces. But for the hunter community, that was not good news at all. At that moment, Lee Se-yoon revealed a top-level secret. Hidden among the civilians was also a mysterious organization called the Descendants of Daegon, and every one of its members was Korean. This dangerous organization specialized in ambushes, choosing specifically to interfere when hunters were purging corruption sources. Yukinsuk said that he understood the rules, but he simply could not comprehend the extremist thinking of these people. Hearing that, Lee Se-yoon's expression instantly turned heavy and sorrowful. Then she casually tossed Yukinsuk a piece of yolk made with pumpkin. Yukinsuk stared at the candy in his hand, completely puzzled. He did not understand why Lee Se-yoon had suddenly given him candy, but she suddenly asked him in return whether he had any experience operating overseas. At that moment, a chill ran down Yukinsuk's back, and he instantly sensed that something was wrong. Ju Sujang had asked him the exact same question before. There was no way this could just be a coincidence. Lee Se-yoon let out a soft sigh and spoke solemnly. After this overseas mission is over, your view of Koreans will completely change, and the way you see them will no longer be the same. After arriving at the army base, the commanding officer immediately gathered everyone and held a full mobilization meeting. Yukinsuk gripped the mission documents in his hand, feeling a little panicked and looking somewhat at a loss. Lee Se-yoon kept glancing toward the commanding officer out of the corner of her eye the whole time, clearly paying close attention to his movements. Director On Hun Seo stepped onto the stage and began explaining the operation plan in detail. They were responsible for a train that stretched a full 80 miles in length, of which 65 cars were for transporting cargo and other supplies. The remaining 15 cars were for the hunters and South Korean military personnel involved in this commission to rest in. The director even specifically set aside an entire carriage solely for Lee Se-yoon's personal use. Yukinsuk secretly sighed in admiration. Top hunters in the top 10 of the rankings really did receive treatment ordinary people could never compare to. But what Lee Se-yoon cared about most right now was not treatment, but exactly who would be assigned to escort the dedicated carriage storing the shield generator. The director's expression turned serious instantly, and his eyes gained a sharper edge. He coughed twice and slowly explained that this journey was too long, and everyone would be heavily drained after traveling such a distance, so the escort mission for the shield generator would be handed over entirely to the South Korean military. The director had only just asked whether anyone had any objections when Lee Se-yoon stood up on the spot to oppose it. The shield generator had always been under the Monkey Guild's heavy protection. Anyone with eyes could tell that there were absolutely many forces watching this device. Of course, the director also knew perfectly well that considerable risk was hidden in this arrangement, but he still guaranteed with great confidence that no force would be able to get even half a step close to the carriage storing the generator. The moment he finished speaking, cold sweat had already broken out on his forehead, and he hurriedly changed the subject, suggesting they continue with the meeting agenda. Lee Se-yoon slowly closed her eyes. After a moment of silence, she still chose to compromise and accept the arrangement. Using a map, the director explained that their route would pass through many corrupted zones, but the number of corruption sources that could actually pose a fatal threat was only 7. In addition, large numbers of bandit groups were entrenched all along Siberia. After hearing that, Lee Se-yoon could not help but complain that train robbers sounded like something straight out of a movie. Yu Chon-suk's face also gradually darkened. The association had already sent cooperation documents to all 8 major warlords in Europe, but in the end only 3 of them had replied. The moment everyone present heard that, they instantly panicked. That meant that over a mission period of more than 2 weeks, they would have to face 5 hostile forces at the same time. Corruption monsters, bandits along the route, plus attacks from various warlords on multiple sides. No one had any confidence left about whether this mission could still be completed smoothly. The huge conference hall instantly became noisy and chaotic, with wave after wave of discussion breaking out. Lee Se-yoon's gaze was incomparably firm as she spoke to calm everyone down. No matter what emergencies they encountered on the road, she would do everything in her power to deliver the train safely to its destination. When the day of the mission's official departure arrived, the train staff began guiding most people aboard the second-class cars. Yoo Chon-suk walked forward with steady steps. His assigned seat was in first class, and he still had to keep walking a bit farther ahead. A familiar voice suddenly came from behind him. Turning around, he found that it was actually Han Sang-ae. She promised Yoo Chon-suk that once this commission was completely over, she would hand the spirit medicine over to him immediately. But Yoo Chon-suk's heart was full of doubt. The entire way here, he had not seen Han Sang-ae anywhere at all, and had no idea where exactly she had been hiding before. He scanned around along the way, but still saw no sign of Lee Se-yoon. Someone nearby muttered in amazement that after seeing the entire escort train with their own eyes, the overwhelming pressure it gave off was simply too intense. Only then did Yoo Chon-suk notice that Ju Soo-jong of the Tower of Prohibited Transport had also arrived. He stared straight ahead. The protective armament of the entire transport train was sealed so tightly that not even a drop could leak through. It was practically a moving iron fortress. Yoo Chon-suk truly could not figure out what method the enemy could possibly use to break through this level of defense. But on second thought, another concern surfaced in his mind. With the target made this conspicuous, it might instead become a live target fought over and attacked by every faction. Ju Soo-jong saw through his concern and immediately reassured him. The train's outer layer used depleted uranium armor of the same class as armored vehicles, so its protective performance was already maxed out, and there was no need to worry about its safety at all. On the surface, Yoo Chon-suk still looked rather unconvinced, but inwardly he muttered to himself that with Lee Se-yoon overseeing things, they surely would not mess this mission up. Not long after the train started moving, corruption sources along the route swarmed out all at once to cause trouble. A hunter covered in blood hurried over in panic to ask for help. While complaining that these people really could not handle anything, Yoo Chon-suk quickly headed toward the combat zone. The train had only been underway for a mere 10 minutes, yet they had already encountered so many corrupted entities. And this time, the number of enemies was shockingly huge. They simply could not kill them all no matter how hard they tried. Originally, he had thought that with Lee Se-yoon present, this mission would be much easier, but who could have expected that the railway on the Siberian side had already been severely damaged, forcing the train to move slowly while also sending people out to repair the tracks at the same time. The workers responsible for repairing the railway had no ability at all to fight monsters, so every hunter had to stay close by their side to protect them. And Lee Se-yoon happened to be assigned to guard this area, meaning the strongest combat asset in the team was pinned down here completely and could not play her core role at all. This kind of arrangement was basically wasting top-tier fighting power for nothing. Yoo Chon-suk tightened his grip on the long sword in his hand and looked up at the flood of corruption monsters pouring in from the sky, his emotions heavy and complicated. The scene shifted to Khabarovsk, Russia. A giant monster covered in blood was being dragged across the snow by a bald man. The bald man frowned tightly and sharply sensed that strangers were approaching nearby. The person who arrived was a handsome young man, with blazing flames swirling all around him. The monster on the ground suddenly roared and scrambled back up, preparing to pounce and tear into everyone. In an instant, a shrill scream rang out across the snowy field. The bald man threw a vicious punch directly, blasting the monster back to the ground on the spot. The entire snowy field was dyed a glaring red by blood in an instant. Lee Hae-yoon from Korea walked forward with a big smile on his face and took the initiative to greet the bald man. As the saying went, one never visits without a reason. With that smiling tiger expression, it was obvious at a glance that the visitor had not come with good intentions. This bald man was none other than Baranov, the man who ruled the Khabarovsk region. These monsters had originally been caught by him to serve as dinner. He had gone through great trouble to knock them out, only for them to be awakened again by the commotion just now. Baranov was short of neither money nor possessions, and he truly could not understand what exactly Lee Hae-yoon wanted by coming to him in person. Even though Baranov's attitude was cold and tough, Lee Hae-yoon remained utterly certain that this matter would definitely interest him. Before long, an escort train departing from Vladivostok would pass through this region. After hearing that, Baranov only thought the other party was joking. The railway crossing site barrier had long since been damaged and shut down. Lee Hae-yoon then explained that among the people now awakening magical power, there existed a special category of ability users who could rapidly repair all kinds of damaged machinery using only materials. Baranov was a little surprised. Could they actually repair it while keeping the train moving? Then what exactly was the train carrying? Lee Hae-yoon told him not to worry about that. What mattered most was seeing who exactly was responsible for escorting it. When he heard that the one in charge was Candy Lady of the Monkey Guild, Baranov was visibly taken aback, his eyes filled with both shock and confusion. Lee Hae-yoon told him not to rush. He had already thought of a countermeasure for him. That immediately piqued Baranov's interest. Robbing a train personally protected by Lee Se-yoon really did sound quite interesting. In fact, this mission did not require seizing it. They only needed to blast away that specific heavily guarded carriage directly. Then, in the very next moment, Lee Hae-yoon immediately corrected himself. After that, he took out a black box and told Baranov that all he had to do was break into the train and connect this device to the apparatus storing the supplies. If, after completing the objective, he also happened to destroy the supplies inside the carriage along the way, that would be perfectly fine too. Seeing Lee Hae-yoon being so generous and straightforward, Baranov curled his lips into a wicked grin and directly accepted the commission. He stared viciously into the distance, a mad and daring plan already taking shape in his mind. He was going to slaughter every single accompanying hunter right in front of Lee Se-yoon. Yu Chan-suk gripped his extendable spear tightly, his eyes full of ruthless killing intent. In only a brief stretch of time, hundreds of monsters had already fallen at his hands. The hunters watching from nearby were all dumbfounded. Who could have imagined that a rookie who had just entered the profession would possess combat power this ferocious? He slammed the butt of the spear hard into the ground. The aura around his whole body was so sharp and intimidating that he looked even more dangerous than the hordes of monsters. Meanwhile, the other ordinary hunters had already collapsed to the ground from exhaustion and were of no help at all. Yu Chan-suk felt somewhat helpless, as if from beginning to end he had been the only one forcibly holding the entire battle together. At that moment, Han Sang-ae spoke up to steady everyone, reminding them not to let their guard down, because this mission was still far from over. Yu Chan-suk could not help feeling secretly pleased. Sure enough, when it really mattered, the only people one could truly rely on were the ones he himself had brought. Suddenly, he sensed an unusual disturbance coming from the side. A massive avalanche suddenly broke out ahead of the train. An announcement immediately came from the control room, reporting that a snow obstruction had appeared on the road ahead, but that it would not temporarily affect the train's continued movement. Lee Se-yoon's urgent shout suddenly exploded through the headset. She urgently demanded that the control room stop the train immediately. What lay ahead was not just an avalanche at all. There were also countless unknown enemies already lying in ambush there. In the blink of an eye, a blinding red light locked directly onto the entire train. Fortunately, the control room reacted quickly enough and brought the train to a steady stop before the attack could land. With a long sword in hand, Lee Se-yoon rushed straight up. By sheer force of her own alone, she endured that fatal attack. A glaring signal flare rose into the sky, and at that very moment all the ambushing enemies revealed themselves, making it obvious that they had come purely to provoke. Han Sang-ae was still frozen in place and had not yet reacted, when Yu Chan-suk quietly reminded her that there was only one person who would dare be this arrogant in Khabarovsk territory. It was the armed gang under Baranov. Lee Se-yoon understood very clearly that the enemy had absolutely calculated the timing in advance and had specifically waited here for them. In the next second, several talismans flew rapidly in from the air. A layer of purple barrier instantly wrapped around Lee Se-yoon completely. This was the first time in all her years in the profession that she had encountered this kind of sealing spell, and the offensive force of that purple lightning was astonishingly fierce. This time, Lee Se-yoon had truly run into serious trouble. Han Sang-ae sharply caught sight of a giant purple pillar shooting into the sky behind her. She scratched the back of her head, inwardly bewildered. Could something really have happened on Lee Se-yoon's side? Logically speaking, Lee Se-yoon was a top hunter firmly ranked among the world's top 10, so there should have been no reason to doubt her strength. But at this very moment, Han Sang-ae truly and clearly felt an enormous pressure. The space around her had actually been completely sealed off. A wave of panic instantly surged up in Han Sang-ae's heart. Yu Chan-suk, on the other hand, remained exceptionally calm and immediately informed all the hunters. The enemy was launching a surprise attack from both sides of the train, and Lee Se-yoon, their commander-in-chief, had already been trapped in a seal and could not come support them for the time being. And the enemy force outnumbered them by a full 10-1. Even if the commander could not join the battle right now, they absolutely could not retreat, they had to hold the train at all costs. Lee Se-yoon, trapped within the barrier, still had a resolute look in her eyes as she ordered everyone through the radio to actively engage the enemy and begin combat immediately. Yu Chan-suk did not waste a single word. He turned around and leaped straight off the train. His partner Han Sang-ae jumped down right after him. There was no way back now. 50 of them would have to directly withstand 500 enemies head-on. The other ordinary hunters on the train were also completely ignited by the pair's resolve, and one after another they made up their minds and charged down to meet the battle as well. Lee Se-yoon reassured everyone over the radio that she would break through the seal very soon and return to the front line to support them. But a figure with a red cord tied at his waist stood in front of her. Lee Se-yoon coldly questioned him, asking whether the sealing barrier was his doing. Lee Hae-yoon did not answer directly. Instead, he first stated his identity, saying that he was one of the descendants of Dangon, while Lee Se-yoon belonged to the line of Grand Prince Yangyong. If one really calculated by seniority, Lee Hae-yoon was even her distant nephew. Inside the purple barrier, the sword in Lee Se-yoon's hand shattered on the spot. Lee Se-yoon's heart jolted. The power of this seal was simply too terrifying, even her bonded divine weapon, which had accompanied her for years, had been crushed directly. Lee Hae-yoon advised her to be sensible and surrender obediently. A barrier of this level was not something that could be broken so easily. Lee Se-yoon raised her hand toward the ring on her finger. The ring instantly burst with dazzling white light. The moment Lee Hae-yoon saw this, his face immediately fell. He had never expected that she would even bring this life-saving treasure with her. A brand new longsword appeared out of thin air in Lee Se-yoon's hand. This ring was a treasure she had obtained after clearing a level 1 corruption source. It was called the Winter Ring, and it could bind only one weapon. Even if the weapon was destroyed, it could reconstruct it completely in an instant and return it to its owner's hand. Lee Hae-yoon squeezed his eyes shut tightly and cursed under his breath. Did this really mean they would be trapped in an endless loop, just waiting for the barrier to dissipate on its own? The long sword in Lee Se-yoon's hand gleamed with chilling light. In the next moment, she gathered all her strength and brought her sword down hard against the sealing barrier. On the other side, Yu Chan-suk, who had already rushed to the front line, looked at the vast black mass of enemy troops opposite him, and his scalp tingled with dread. From the looks of it, this group had clearly made up their minds to fight them to the bitter end. That immense pressure came crashing toward him, so heavy that Yu Chan-suk could barely breathe. Clad in iron armor, Baranov floated in midair and coldly looked down at the pitifully few hunters below. With a mouthful of mockery, he said that the Hunter Association's strength was only this much after all, and that who got to leave here alive today would be entirely up to him. Yu Chan-suk looked up at Baranov in the air, his heart full of confusion, because he could not sense even the slightest trace of magical power from him. Han Sang-e quietly explained from beside him that this suit of armor was special equipment developed 10 years ago under the Iron-Blooded Warrior project. It did not require magical power to operate and could be worn and used directly. Baranov was clearly very satisfied with the performance of this armor. But a faint doubt arose in Yu Chan-suk's mind. This was clearly equipment developed by Korea. So why had it ended up in the hands of Baranov, the local strongman of Russia? Han Sang-e had already mentally prepared herself to fight and kill, but she still was not sure whether she could truly bring herself to kill someone. Yu Chan-suk advised her that if she really could not get over that hurdle in her heart, it was still not too late to retreat to the train. On the battlefield, once you became soft-hearted, the only person you would end up killing was yourself. Han Sang-e was deeply puzzled. Yu Chan-suk was clearly killing for the first time as well. So why could he remain so calm, as if nothing had happened at all? Forcing herself to adjust her state, she faced the charging enemy head-on. In her very first direct clash, she achieved astonishing results. By now, this battle had already become one where only death could end it. With one kick, she sent the enemy's head flying straight off. Yu Chan-suk reminded her that since she was able to strike, she should not hesitate, but she absolutely must not let herself be trapped by guilt either. This sense of guilt would last only a few days at the shortest, and at most a month. Given enough time, it would gradually fade away. Weapon fragments and flesh mixed together across the ground, and the air was filled with the choking stench of blood. Everyone on the scene had already gone red-eyed with killing. Looking at the horrific scene before him, Yu Chan-suk felt his stomach churn violently, and the nausea was overwhelming. Yet strangely enough, this scene instead gave rise to a faint sense of familiarity in him, as if he had returned to that homeland of the past where killing never ceased. In the middle of the fierce struggle, he suddenly realized a crucial problem. Judging by individual strength alone, their hunters clearly held a firm advantage over the enemy, but the enemy's numbers were simply too outrageous. Their morale had already been completely crushed by the enemy's overwhelming manpower. If they wanted to turn this around now, there was only one path left. Capture the ringleader first, take down Baranov directly. Baranov had already recognized Yu Chan-suk's face. Yu Chan-suk felt speechless inside. The news really spread far too quickly, even local thugs all the way in Russia knew who he was. Before he could think any further, a blinding red light had already rushed straight before his eyes in an instant. This strike was unbelievably fast, and its power was absurdly tyrannical. The specially made armor on Baranov's body had defense almost maxed out. Ordinary attacks could not harm him in the slightest. Yu Chan-suk clenched his teeth and weighed it silently in his heart. This Baranov really was troublesome. Winning this hard battle would be far more difficult than he had expected. Baranov suddenly pushed off with his feet and slammed straight toward him like a madman. Just by looking at the fury surging in his eyes, one could tell that this man had been completely enraged. He clenched his fist tightly, preparing to send Yu Chansuk off with a single punch. But Yu Chansuk saw through the problem at a glance. This man shouted fiercely, but when he truly attacked, he was clearly still holding something back. Could it be that he was afraid the battle would affect the shield generator? That earlier wave of attacks had only been meant to force the train to stop. If Lee Se-yoon had not stepped in to stop it in time, the core equipment inside the carriage probably would already have been destroyed. The more Yu Chansuk thought about it, the more wrong it felt. The other side had clearly found out the identities of everyone in the entire team beforehand. A Russian gang boss wearing Korea's exclusive armor, and then a sealing mage who was one of the descendants of Dan Gun suddenly appearing halfway through. Put together, these two things were far too suspicious not to invite deeper thought. The two clashed head-on once again. Baranov looked down at the black flames clinging to the surface of his armor, his face full of confusion, having no idea what kind of bizarre power this was. Yu Chansuk directly activated the black flames and issued the command to burn through the armor's durability like mad, intending to end the duel as quickly as possible. Immediately after that, he swung his hand and hurled another stream of black flame toward Baranov's other side. At that, the bald man was completely overtaken by rage, and he exploded with force, smashing a vicious punch straight at Yu Chansuk. Yu Chansuk gripped his cold gleaming sword and chose to meet him head-on. A flowing series of 16 strikes traced out in blue swept forward seamlessly, and the sword-light tore apart Baranov's defenses on the spot. A tremendous pressure instantly enveloped Baranov, and his heart jolted violently. He had never imagined that this nearly invincible suit of armor would crack open with fissures under such relentless attacks. At this point, the only thing he could do was retreat temporarily, by some time, and look for another opportunity later. He suddenly remembered that Lee Se-yoon was still trapped inside the barrier, so he immediately told Yu Chansuk to stop, claiming that he could help undo the seal trapping Lee Se-yoon. But just as the words left his mouth, a sharp flash of sword light pierced straight through his skull. Yu Chansuk had no interest at all in negotiating any conditions with him. Baranov, the local overlord of his generation, died on the spot beneath his sword. Elsewhere, the purple seal trapping Lee Se-yoon also began to fade away little by little. It was obvious that she had broken through the spell's restraints by her own power. All the hunters present were dumbfounded. After coming to their senses, everyone simultaneously raised their arms and shouted, welcoming Lee Se-yoon back into the fight. Yu Chansuk silently marveled inwardly. So there had been no need for anyone else's help at all, Lee Se-yoon could break the seal herself. At this moment, a faint purple glow wound around Lee Se-yoon's body, and her eyes were filled with icy killing intent. After dealing with this ambush, the train started up again and continued on its way. The snow piled up on the tracks had already been cleared away. Corpses littered both sides of the road, and the scene was a complete mess. After this battle, all the remaining hunters' confidence in the escort mission shot upward instantly. But even so, no one dared to lower their guard in the slightest. Lee Se-yoon greatly approved of Yu Chansuk's performance just now and casually handed him a piece of candy. While tearing open the wrapper, Yu Chansuk casually guessed that the sorcerer who had set up the seal just now was probably one of the descendants of Dangon. Lee Se-yoon said truthfully that after she broke through the seal, that person had fled immediately. Everyone's eyes all turned toward Yu Chansuk at once as they watched him unwrap the candy. He turned his head and popped the entire piece directly into his mouth. The people beside him all thought he was outrageously bold when they saw that, practically insane. Yu Chansuk was still wondering why everyone's reaction was so exaggerated, and only after asking did he find out that he was apparently the only one who would actually eat the candy. Because in the hearts of all the hunters, Lee Se-yoon was almost a godlike existence. Any little thing she gave away would be kept as a collectible, and people would even privately show them off to each other and compare them. At that moment, he keenly sensed an unusual disturbance behind him. The group from the Korean military had already walked over to Baranov's corpse and were preparing to recover that special suit of armor. Heavy doubts immediately arose in Yu Chansuk's heart. The set on Baranov's body was clearly exclusive equipment of the Korean military. Could it be that the force backing him was already powerful enough to ignore the Korean authorities entirely? Or could it be that from the very beginning, the Korean military had tacitly allowed Baranov to run wild outside the country? With these doubts in mind, he could not help but begin to worry whether, for the rest of this journey, he could really sit at ease on the same train as these soldiers. Inside an ancient Chinese-style building full of old charm and lush vegetation, the bedraggled Lee Haeun retreated back alone. He held his forehead, his face full of frustration. In order to set up the seal just now, he had overdrawn his magical power far too severely, and his body was already close to its limit. In the distance, a mysterious figure spoke and calmly told him that he had worked hard. Lee Hae-un lowered his head on his own initiative and admitted that this ambush mission had already failed completely. The mysterious person comforted him, saying that it was only one failure, and there was no need for him to droop like a drowned dog. He should put this matter aside for now and focus on recuperating. After hearing those words, Lee Hae-un gradually steadied his emotions and accepted the other party's advice. The mysterious person was actually somewhat surprised inside. After Kim Hae-un failed, even Lee Hae-un had fallen short against Yu Chon-suk. And his core objective this time was also very clear. He absolutely had to thoroughly figure out the true nature of Yu Chon-suk's black flames. After saying that, he took the elevator to the third floor. He greeted the person who was sitting there with his head lowered, absorbed in research in front of a computer. It was a bespectacled fat doctor named Seo Ji-un-woo. The mysterious person asked how far the research he had previously assigned had progressed. Seo Ji-un-woo's attitude was very perfunctory. If they wanted results, they needed both budget and time, lacking either one would not work. The most crucial subject right now was first to dismantle and understand the internal operating principle of the shield. After hearing that, the mysterious person told him not to rush. The long Siberian journey had only just begun. After this, they would still have countless more opportunities to act. The train cut all the way across the boundless Siberian snowfields, and under Lee Hae-un's overall command the entire time, they not only steadily blocked wave after wave of attacks from corrupted entities, but also advanced step by step toward their destination. The group planned to stop in Warsaw, Poland, and rest for a full 3 days. Lee Hae-un brought good news. The warlord Mazurka, together with the hunter guild under him, was willing to cooperate and provide support. At last, everyone could slightly set down the weight in their hearts. Lee Hae-un then asked why the other warlords still had not replied, and the squad leader could only confess truthfully that there had been no response from them from beginning to end. After hearing that, the worry on Lee Hae-un's face deepened further. But at this point, there was no other choice but to continue trying to stay in contact. The train slowly entered a station within Polish territory and finally came to a stop. After getting off the train, the hunters unexpectedly felt a kind of solidity and peace of mind they had not felt in a long time. Yu Chon-suk calculated silently in his mind that Poland itself was not exactly a bad place. But this station in front of him was so dilapidated that it was almost beyond belief, and a powerful sense of doubt immediately rose in his heart. Yu Chon-suk could not help sighing that this place looked practically no different from a mass grave. The surroundings were barren and bare, with hardly even a trace of green in sight. Yet when Lee Hae-un and the other hunters saw the scene, they remained as unshaken as if nothing had happened at all, and he even began to wonder whether his perception and strength had already left these people far behind. Before long, someone proactively came forward to speak to them. The newcomer spoke fluent Korean. He was Polanski, a field officer under Mazurka. Polanski led the group through the ruined urban district toward the dormitories that had already been arranged for them. The ground along the way was full of potholes and damage everywhere, yet the Mercedes luxury car sent to pick them up was absurdly high-end. Yu Chon-suk understood at a glance that they were about to be housed separately in different places, and even the standard of the lodgings had clear-ranked divisions. Yu Chon-suk sat in the car with one leg crossed over the other, looking down in thought, when Polanski suddenly spoke and asked whether he was a free hunter with no guild affiliation. The other man's real purpose was actually to recruit him and have him stay in Poland long-term to work for them. Yu Chon-suk said bluntly that the infrastructure here was indeed far inferior to Korea's, but in a place like this, one could hold enormous power that most people would never obtain in their entire lives. After hearing that, Polanski could not help asking in return what exactly he meant by power. Did he mean sitting in luxury cars, drinking champagne, and indulging himself while corpses lay scattered outside the city? Yu Chon-suk knew very well that in Korea, everything he did would be subject to restrictions at every turn, but if he followed Polanski, then here, he could truly do whatever he wanted. He lowered his eyes, but inside there was only disgust and speechlessness, and for a moment he even wanted to throw a punch right at him. As the evening sun slowly set, the group finally arrived at the lodging area. The moment Yu Chon-suk pushed open the door, he unexpectedly discovered that the accommodation conditions here were actually quite good. He secretly marveled inwardly that, as an outsider, he could actually enjoy treatment of this level. The bathroom and washing area had both been clean, spotless, without the slightest sign of dirt or disorder. There was also a large pile of instant rations placed on the table. Just as he picked up a cup of instant noodles and examined it carefully, Ju Sujong suddenly barged straight into his room holding a bath towel. Her eyes were hazy and alluring, making her look especially seductive. She had come here purely to borrow an independent bath. While soaking in the bathtub, she chatted casually with Yu Chon-suk through the door. Yu Chon-suk did not find this awkward at all. Between acquaintances, it was only natural to make things convenient for each other. Still, a question arose in his mind. All the rations in this room were actually made in Korea. Ju Sujong directly told him the truth as well. This was a material distribution policy established by the Korean authorities. Yu Chon-suk was completely bewildered by what he heard. Now that corruption sources were everywhere, rare earths, chemical raw materials, and all kinds of fruits, vegetables, and meat all had to be shipped back to Korea first as the priority. Only after domestic stock had been used up would the remaining portion continue to be exported abroad to other countries. Yu Chon-suk truly could not understand how other countries could willingly accept rules like this. But the reality was that even if they were given 100 times more courage, they still would not dare fall out completely with Korea. Once relations soured, they would never again receive support from hunter teams. Without the protection of hunters, agricultural and mining work simply could not continue, and territories everywhere would only keep being swallowed by corruption sources. After all the layers of exploitation, what actually ended up in the hands of ordinary civilians was nothing more than expired canned food and those inferior supplies that had almost completely lost their value as food. For example, potatoes that had already sprouted. Taking advantage of the moment, Ju Soo-jong then asked about the current progress of aid supply allocation. Yu Chon-suk was startled at once, thinking that they were about to be sent to carry those sprouted potatoes next. Ju Soo-jong got up and pulled open the door, with only a towel wrapped around her body, raising a hand to adjust her glasses. She explained to Yu Chon-suk that the relief supplies being transported by the train this time were actually secondary process number 65 mixed powder. This kind of powder was made by baking assorted food scraps at a high temperature of 390 degrees, drying them out, and grinding them up, and the number 65 indicated that the organic matter content inside was 65%. Yu Chon-suk listened in total confusion. Korea clearly had the means to transport fresher and better quality ingredients here. But even if the very best supplies were truly sent here, there was no way they would ever reach the lowest classes of ordinary people. Holding the cup noodles in his hand, Yu Chon-suk asked with a hint of mockery, so in the end, whose stomachs would those premium ingredients actually go into? Even if the food were truly distributed, it would only be intercepted halfway by the warlords in the end. Worse still, they would trade that food in exchange for firearms and weapons. He spread his palm to indicate that on this land, chaos like this had long since become an utterly ordinary daily reality. At this moment, Yu Chon-suk finally completely understood what Lee Se-hoon had said before. Only by truly leaving one's country could one see how cruel this world really was. He had imagined this world to be too stable and too clean. The corruption and darkness in reality were even more outrageous than in another world, even more absurdly, with the world already rotten to this extent. There were still secret organizations trying to manipulate the corruption sources and continue maintaining this unjust order. Yu Chon-suk crushed the cup noodles in his hand in one squeeze, and in his heart he completely settled on what he would do next. He moved closer to Ju Soo-jong and asked the last question he had been hiding in his heart. Somewhat surprised, Ju Soo-jong asked what exactly he wanted to know. Among the warlord forces that refused to cooperate with the escort mission, which one was closest to them right now? The scene shifted to Hamburg, Germany, where a helicopter landed steadily on the rooftop of a building. Yu Chon-suk walked over with firm, steady steps, his whole body carrying a bone-chilling killing intent. Leader Daniel looked at the unfamiliar man before him, and a heavy pressure inexplicably settled over his heart as he demanded harshly to know what had happened. At this moment, Yu Chon-suk was beating several local hunters violently. There was only one reason. He was interrogating them about why they had refused to cooperate with the train escort operation in the first place. His fists were already stained with bright red blood. Daniel immediately shouted for him to stop, warning that if he continued, he would lodge a formal protest with the Korean Hunter Association. Yu Chon-suk paused slightly. In the next second, without another word, he smashed down another vicious punch. Seeing that this outsider paid absolutely no regard to his authority, Daniel's anger flared instantly. Yu Chon-suk raised his hand and pointed at the next hunter, who was already trembling in fear from head to toe. He directly told everyone present that if they had the guts, they should kill him right now. Otherwise, not a single person here should expect to leave alive today. In the splendid and magnificent city of Warsaw, Poland, everything had originally been quiet and peaceful. But in the very next second, a single figure shattered that tranquility outright. Yu Chon-suk shoved the door open and prepared to discuss an important matter with Lee Se-yoon. Leaning diagonally against the desk, Lee Se-yoon candidly admitted that she still had a pile of work in her hands. So she told Yu Chon-suk not to beat around the bush and to get straight to the point. Of the descendants of Dangon was to take control of all corruption sources. After hearing that, a flash of shock instantly passed through Lee Se-yoon's eyes. Yu Chon-suk explained that those words had been spoken personally by a member of the descendants of Dangon whom he had encountered earlier in Tsushima. Lee Se-yoon casually slapped the report in her hand onto the desk. She had long since seen through the fact that Yu Chon-suk had already made up his mind inside. He planned to take the initiative and confront the descendants of Lee Se-yoon. Let out a soft sigh. At last, he had made the most correct choice. At that moment, a report came through the earpiece that Han Sang-ae had also come to see her. Lee Se-yun could not help but wonder whether Yu Chan-suk intended to bring Han Sang-ae along to take on a commission related to Tsushima. In fact, she herself had originally had the same idea in mind. After personally witnessing the ruined and chaotic state of Warsaw, Han Sang-ae had been deeply shaken inside. Could it be that Korea's upper leadership truly knew nothing at all of the real conditions in foreign countries? Lee Se-yun calmly told her that this kind of chaos was the reality tacitly permitted by those at the top from the very beginning. Han Sang-ae could not help sighing that if she had not followed the team here this time, she would never in her life have been able to see darkness of this level clearly. But Lee Se-yun reminded the two of them that their thinking had already gone off course. Right now was not the time to keep digging deeper into those issues. This cross-border escort commission had already left everyone overwhelmed, and along the way they had not been able to get the slightest bit of outside support. The most urgent matter now was to complete the task before them smoothly. Yu Chan-suk immediately raised his hand to indicate that he had something to say. He planned to use his own method to talk to the warlords in each region. He spread his hand open, and the meaning could not have been more obvious. He was prepared to directly use force to make those warlords submit. Taking into account the Hunter Association's image abroad, Lee Se-yun felt that this method was still too extreme and too unstable. Yu Chan-suk took the initiative to step forward and placed all responsibility on himself. Let him, a free hunter with no guild tying him down, go out and ruthlessly beat down those warlords who refused to cooperate. On second thought, Lee Se-yun realized that the team just happened to be staying in Poland for a few days to rest and regroup. If all these troubles could be resolved during that time, then even if the means were somewhat harsh, there really was no better option right now. In the end, Lee Se-yun asked once more to confirm, was he really fine going alone? Yu Chan-suk answered that before all the relief supplies on the Polish side were fully distributed, he would definitely handle everything. When the time came, Lee Se-yun would only need to step in and deal with the aftermath. Filled with worry, Han Sang did not want him to take the risk alone and wanted to act together with Yu Chan-suk. Yu Chan-suk told her to stay at the base and practice properly the techniques he had taught her earlier. If, by the time he returned, there was still no sign of improvement, she was definitely going to get an earful from him. Before setting off, he turned back and made an agreement with the two of them. They would meet again later in Germany. On the other side, the helicopter hovered in midair as a burst of golden light slammed violently into the ground. That terrifying shockwave instantly swept through the surroundings, and the one unleashing it was none other than Yu Chan-suk, fighting at full power. Warlord Daniel had originally thought that with his subordinates' numerical advantage, they could easily take down this Korean hunter. But the current Yu Chan-suk had long since fought his way into a blood frenzy. With just a single shockwave, he sent all the surrounding hunters flying. Yu Chan-suk's expression was icy as he directly gave everyone present two choices, submit or resist to the bitter end. Looking at his fallen men all over the ground, Daniel was filled with disbelief. This man's magic power should already have been exhausted long ago, so how could he still erupt with such absurd combat strength? But as a warlord who ruled one side, he still refused to admit defeat and immediately ordered everyone to rush forward and kill him together. His men raised their rifles in unison and madly pulled the triggers at Yu Chan-suk. Daniel hated the man before him to the core and roared for everyone to keep firing with full force. But in the next second, Yu Chan-suk was already right in front of him, gripping his throat tightly with one hand. In a cold voice, he forced Daniel to make his choice immediately. Cold sweat poured down Daniel's forehead as he was completely smothered by that overwhelming pressure. And he threatened Yu Chan-suk, asking whether he could really bear the consequences of offending him. The words consequences instead made Yu Chan-suk pause slightly. Daniel's pupils looked almost ready to split apart, and his whole body was so tense he was nearly on the verge of collapse. In Yu Chan-suk's golden eyes, there was only unwavering determination. When he heard that Yu Chan-suk did not care at all about any so-called consequences, Daniel's mentality completely collapsed. In an instant, he lowered his posture and said he was willing to sit down and talk things out properly. Yu Chan-suk followed Daniel into the camp, casually picked up a cup of cola from the table, and tilted his head back to gulp it down. But the moment it entered his mouth, the taste was bizarrely off, and he frowned as he asked what exactly this thing was. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down, frankly admitting that it was only an imitation drink with a similar appearance and color. He himself had not tasted what real cola was like for many years. A question immediately rose in Yu Chan-suk's mind. Could the living conditions in this region actually be even harsher than in Poland? Only then did Daniel tell the truth. This military base had actually been built back when the corruption sources had first appeared. But after so many years, as all kinds of domestic resources kept drying up, they were now already close to being unable to hold on. The ordinary people on this land were all living in truly miserable conditions. Yu Chan-suk had no desire at all to keep listening to him play up their suffering and directly questioned him about why he had refused to cooperate with the train's passage in the first place. Daniel finally revealed the reason behind it. They actually needed the shield generator more than any foreign power did, and the source of all the problems lay in Restaurante. Yu Chansuk suddenly recalled that before setting out, he had already heard this place name more than once. Compared with the endless stream of corruption monsters pressing in from Restaurante, the corruption sources within Country Y were practically nothing at all. Yu Chansuk directly explained that the shield generator was still only in the experimental stage, and they had to gather data in relatively safe and stable environments like foreign territories. If Daniel continued refusing to cooperate, the mass production progress of the entire system would only be delayed endlessly. Daniel's mood sank. He had not expected that even at this point, Yu Chansuk would still refuse to budge in the slightest and be completely unwilling to consider their situation. Yu Chansuk gave no ground at all and directly ordered him to cooperate with the team escorting the shield generator. Daniel was not someone who had been frightened into submission before. Seeing Yu Chansuk act so tough, he instead felt that the other man seemed to have concluded that he had no second option left. Yu Chansuk suddenly tightened his grip on the glass in his hand and calmly asked in return, wasn't the other option plainly right in front of him? As soon as the words fell, he exerted force with his hand, and the glass was crushed to pieces on the spot. Looking at the blood continuously dripping from Yu Chansuk's palm, Daniel finally softened his attitude completely and asked exactly what he needed to cooperate with. Yu Chansuk stated directly that there was no need to discuss the specific terms with him. He was only responsible for forcibly opening this line of communication. Daniel instantly realized that it was Miss Candy, Lee Se-yoon, who had sent him to handle this matter. Yu Chansuk frankly said that instead of endlessly enduring frustration and retreating step by step, it was better to take the initiative and sweep away every obstacle directly. Hearing that, Daniel instead felt completely relieved. He told Yu Chansuk to go back first, and that he would contact Lee Se-yoon himself to handle the follow-up coordination. But Yu Chansuk said that he would remain in the camp until the other side truly fulfilled its promise. After saying that, he pulled a candy from his pocket and tossed it out as his lodging fee for staying there temporarily. Daniel secretly marveled that this Korean really was broad-minded. Such rare and precious candy, yet he could casually take it out like that. But at this moment, Yu Chansuk felt a faint unease in his heart, because he had no way of predicting what would happen here tomorrow. His thoughts also drifted back to that earlier conversation. Lee Se-yoon had once asked him what he planned to do after this commission was completely over. Yu Chansuk thought quietly, this world was now already scarred beyond recognition and filled with danger everywhere. Whether it was the first-level corruption sources that could be seen everywhere, or the 8 great disasters that were destined to descend in the future, he intended to deal with them one by one with his own hands and personally save this broken world. On the square in front of the royal castle in Warsaw, refugees stood in a long line, waiting to receive relief rations. After a long wait, it was finally one young man's turn to step forward for food. But the thin porridge in his bowl was so shallow that it could barely cover the bottom. Holding that nearly empty bowl, he was full of frustration. How could something this watery possibly fill anyone's stomach? The authorities were clearly just fooling people. Armed soldiers stationed nearby sternly drove back the crowd, forbidding anyone from gathering together, making noise, or causing trouble. When they heard the refugees privately mocking the authorities for doing nothing, one soldier turned to his companion and said that if the people rioted, they would directly suppress them with weapons. The young man who had just received porridge angrily cursed them on the spot, saying that the Korean military and the upper authorities were all the same, nothing but shameless scoundrels with no sense of justice. The instant those words left his mouth, his pupils shrank sharply and his brows twisted tightly together. The Korean military directly shot him, and the surrounding refugees instantly erupted in shock. No one had expected that over just a bowl of thin porridge, they would really dare injure someone. The soldier explained that what had just been fired was a salt round and would not be fatal. With supplies now in total shortage, every relief portion was originally issued in fixed amounts, and no one could take more. If anyone dared gather and stir up trouble again, the next step would be direct suppression with rubber bullets. The soldier ordered the refugees to retreat immediately, but after learning that the salt rounds were not deadly, the crowd instead surged forward all at once and immediately began looting the food. The scene shifted to an internal meeting hall in Poland, where everyone was bent over, urgently compiling all kinds of data. In this operation, there had been 37 lightly wounded and 8 seriously wounded, and the number of reported cases involving illegal private misappropriation of relief supplies had reached as high as 24. The complicated workload had everyone dizzy and overwhelmed. At that moment, someone hurried in to report that Warlord Kaiser had proactively sent a contact message. A trace of a smile finally appeared on Lee Se-yoon's face, and she immediately connected the communication. Warlord Kaiser had already agreed and consented to cooperate with the Monkey Guild in completing this escort mission. The scene shifted again to devastated Germany. Daniel personally came out to receive Lee Se-yoon and could not help marveling that the helper she had brought was absurdly strong. Lee Se-yoon did not waste any extra words on politeness and directly thanked Daniel sincerely for being willing to reach a cooperation agreement. Off to one side, up high, Yu Chan-suk stood there alone in a daze, his expression carrying a hint of arrogance. Han Sang-ae suddenly appeared at his side. Yu Chan-suk turned and asked in confusion whether she had found something unusual while patrolling the surroundings. After hearing her explanation, he learned that Lee Se-yoon was simply looking for him to regroup. Yu Chan-suk did not hesitate in the slightest and immediately prepared to head over. But he sharply caught an unusual presence in the distance. From a building far away, there came the faint trace of a disturbance. In the next second, a dazzling white light flashed across the rooftop. Han Sang-ae narrowed one eye and instinctively raised a hand to block the glaring light. Yu Chan-suk moved instantly and rushed straight toward that building. By the time he climbed all the way up and charged onto the rooftop, he looked around, yet could not see a single person. The person had clearly been there just moments ago, only to vanish without a trace in the blink of an eye. The other side had most likely already noticed that they were being tracked and directly used magic power to escape. Although the remaining magic aura was very weak, by following this trace, he should still be able to lock onto the other party's position. Standing on the rooftop, Yu Chan-suk focused and sensed the energy fluctuations spreading through the surroundings. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the ceiling overhead. He abruptly looked up, and the faint traces of magic were steadily deepening and growing denser. Yu Chan-suk immediately tightened his grip on his weapon, his gaze fixed firmly on the ceiling above. In the next second, a ghostly blue light suddenly enveloped his entire body. A crack actually split open and spaced itself on the spot. This kind of spatial traversal technique was something Yu Chan-suk was seeing for the first time. The mysterious figure raised a hand to lower the brim of his hat and calmly remarked that Yu Chan-suk's tracking ability was too strong, so today, he had to be subdued first. Traditional Korean clothing paired with a cane sword made for an indescribably strange combination. Only then did Yu Chan-suk truly see the other party's identity clearly. It was another descendant of Dangun. Suk Jo-hyam gripped the hilt and directly corrected Yu Chan-suk. This was not some cane sword, but the renowned Calamus sword. Before the words had even fully fallen, he casually slashed with one strike, and the entire rooftop instantly split apart and collapsed. Yu Chan-suk was blasted away on the spot, shocked inwardly that the other side's combat power was actually this terrifying. The two of them became entangled in battle once again. Yet Yu Chan-suk's entire smooth and connected offensive sequence was all effortlessly evaded by the other side. Stepping over the rubble all around, he charged forward again to fight at close range. But the other side's movement was elusive and unpredictable, every time precisely avoiding the fatal attacks. This nearly godlike evasion skill sent a chill straight down one's back. At this moment, Yu Chan-suk finally clearly realized that he had encountered an enemy who was truly absurdly strong. Suk Jo-hyam merely gestured lightly, telling him to bring out all of his abilities and try harder. Yu Chan-suk quickly sorted out the battle situation before him, and directly activated his Black Flame ability, Contradictory Black Flame. The moment this move appeared, a clear trace of wariness flashed across Suk Jo-hyam's face. Holding his long sword, Yu Chan-suk charged straight forward again. The moment Suk Jo-hyam's blade merely touched that black flame, his entire body suddenly twisted and warped. Yu Chan-suk had never expected that the other man's body would split apart on the spot. Yet in the next second, Suk Jo-hyam stood before him again completely unharmed. A ring of strange light rippled outward from beneath his feet, and this was a type of sorcery Yu Chan-suk had never seen before. The crossing of blade light lasted only an instant before Suk Jo-hyam had already moved behind him. Yu Chan-suk pulled out his short spear in a backhand motion and finally caught the flaw in the other side's technique. With blood at the corner of his eye, he suddenly realized that this person had been using clone techniques all along. Once the main body and the clone merged back into one again, the other side's speed and strength would surge instantly. Lowering the brim of his hat, Suk Jo-hyam plainly told Yu Chan-suk that with his current strength, there was simply no way he could do anything to him. The gap between them was not even on the same level. A light breeze gently lifted the ribbon hanging from the edge of Suk Jo-hyam's hat. Yu Chan-suk stood directly facing him. At a glance, he analyzed that this person's increase in speed was probably an exclusive talent, but what he still could not see through was the principle behind that penetration technique that allowed attacks to pass through. Suk Jo-hyam coldly declared that the next strike would slit his throat directly. Just from the aura released when he attacked, it was obvious that this penetration technique had almost never failed. But no matter how strong the move was, it was useless, because today, the one he had encountered was Yu Chan-suk. Do not forget that in the other world, he had been a top-tier warrior wielding a giant axe. All those monsters that could teleport and phase through attacks had died beneath his axe. He had long since seen through the patterns of this kind of creature. Back when these monsters had first appeared, they really had brought huge trouble to everyone. At the time, his companions had been very curious about how exactly he had dealt with these troublesome creatures. Looking at the torn remains of the monsters in Mad R, it seemed that no matter how they attacked, nothing had any effect on them at all. Yu Chansuk knew very well that they were merely using magic power to temporarily shift their physical bodies somewhere else. His companion asked him how exactly one was supposed to break that. His answer had only one word: wait. This displacement technique would trigger and think according to the speed of the incoming attack. As long as one precisely seized the rhythm of one's own strike, then at the exact instant the other side shifted its body, one could directly shatter the true body. Suk Jo Hee-yum had never imagined that someone could actually completely putty the penetration technique he relied on to save his life. After being slashed by the long sword, he dropped to one knee on the ground, forcing himself not to collapse. His mind was full of questions. With Yu Chansuk's speed just now, there was no way he could have reached that attack point in that instant. Then how exactly had he done it? Yu Chansuk gave him no time at all to continue thinking, tightened his grip on the spear, and charged at him head-on once again. Suk Jo Hee-yum could only hurriedly raise his blade and forcefully block. After an intense exchange of blows, a violent explosion suddenly sounded behind Yu Chansuk. Suk Jo Hee-yum gave a light laugh and remarked that it seemed luck was still on their side. Yu Chansuk was full of confusion and had no idea what had happened. Just then, an urgent order came through his earpiece, telling him to stop the pursuit immediately and hurry back at once. A saryl gas bomb had already landed in the northern outskirts of Hamburg. Only a very small amount of this gas was enough to paralyze the nerves, and its lethality was extremely deadly. If they did not intercept it in time, the entire area would soon turn into a living hell. After hearing the news, Yu Chansuk replied in a flat tone with only one sentence: got it. In the next second, he suddenly turned around, his eyes fixed firmly on the direction of the incident in the distance. His feet burst with force as he sprinted toward the gas leak point at top speed. During the rush, his mind was also racing. Why had the other side not directly attacked Hamburg's main city? There had to be some other plan behind this. At this moment, Hamburg was still temporarily stable. The Korean military calculated that the gas would completely cover the entire city in 15 minutes. They had to board the train within 5 minutes and immediately head to the Netherlands to take refuge. Yu Chansuk briefly used a high wall as a foothold and adjusted his breathing slightly. Then he jumped directly down from the tall wall. At that moment, he finally completely saw through the other side's full scheme. As long as Lee Se-yoon was deliberately lured away from the train, they could take the shield generator on board without any obstruction. Han Sang-ae sent the latest intelligence through the earpiece. The opponent responsible for tying down Lee Se-yoon was an archer. It was precisely the same archer who had appeared before in Satsuma. Yu Chansuk instantly realized that the situation had become extremely troublesome. The archer drew the bow and shot out a dazzling beam of light, and Lee Se-yoon swung her sword to block it head-on. Her face was tense, and it was obvious that this direct clash was extremely difficult for her. She could not gain even the slightest upper hand. She raised her hand and struck with another sword slash, forcibly splitting apart the flying rubble. The archer once again drew the bowstring to its fullest, and the energy of the light arrow kept building, already nearing its limit. In the next moment, a brilliant light, so intense it was nearly destructive, exploded violently. Lee Se-yoon was both shocked and suspicious, never having expected the other side's offensive to be this terrifying. A sky-filling tide of attacks swept straight toward her. She planted both feet firmly into the ground, held her sword horizontally in front of her, and with all her strength endured this wave of impact. Lee Se-yoon had already been pushed to her limit, and a white glow rose in her eyes, making it obvious that she had truly been completely enraged. On the other side, the train staff informed everyone that all the relief supplies had been fully loaded. The hunters all rushed onto the train in a frantic scramble. Once everyone was aboard, the person in charge immediately prepared to start the train and depart. But to everyone's surprise, a massive crimson blaze suddenly exploded outside the train carriage. Everyone inside the train instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Looking at the overwhelming sea of flames outside the train, everyone was so frightened that their hair stood on end. The battle at the front had already reached a complete fever pitch, and Lee Se-yoon had clearly fallen into a disadvantage. Quite a few hunters were beginning to panic inside. Could it be that they were really going to lose this battle? But in the next second, everyone's gaze suddenly turned in unison toward the roof of the train. The skylight hatch was suddenly thrown open from the inside, and a head popped out, when they saw clearly that it was Yu Chansuk. Everyone in the train finally felt the weight hanging in their hearts ease a little. Lee Se-yoon was outside risking her life to hold back the enemy by herself, not so this group of hunters could hide in the train and wait to die. Since the enemy had deliberately lured Lee Se-yoon away, they would definitely take the opportunity to strike at the train, so he immediately called for everyone to enter battle mode. The morale of everyone in the train was instantly ignited, and they resolved to hold out together with Lee Se-yoon until the very end. The team leader immediately issued an emergency notice to all hunters to gather at once at the carriage storing the shield generator. Amid the smoke, Lee Se-yoon stood quietly in place like a war god in a hopeless situation. Anyone could clearly sense that this mysterious archer's strength was unfathomable. Yu Chon-suk was also secretly wondering whether this person might actually be the true leader of the descendants of Dan Gun. Lee Se-yoon endured wave after wave of the opponent's fierce attacks head-on, and even though her whole body was soaked in sweat, the corner of her mouth still curled into a mocking smile as she declared that the other side's strength was only a so-so. After all, the archer's eyes were full of suspicion, and he coldly warned her not to be too arrogant. From the moment Lee Se-yoon left the train, the descendants of Dan Gun's plan had already become a sure victory. The train sped along the tracks at high speed. The control room suddenly engaged the emergency brakes, and the train came to a violent stop. Ahead on the tracks stood two delicate-looking young men, directly blocking the way. Yu Chon-suk pressed his earpiece and quickly reported to the control room that a large group of suspicious individuals had rushed onto the bridge ahead. Most of them wore red masks and were dressed in uniform ninja-style outfits. The atmosphere at the scene instantly dropped to freezing, pressing down so hard that people could barely breathe. In the next second, all of them charged at the train at once and launched a direct assault. Looking at the enemies diving down through the air, the hunters felt nothing but a heavy sense of helplessness. It was another desperate battle of the few against the many, and everyone could only fight with all their strength and hold out against this wave of attacks. Seo Yeonju greeted Yu Chon-suk in a flat tone, her expression completely unreadable. Yu Chon-suk froze for a moment on the spot. How did this person know him? It turned out that orders had already come down from above that he must be captured alive. But Seo Yeonju was not good at sparing lives at all, and with neither the elders nor the higher-ups present to oversee the scene, even if she accidentally killed Yu Chon-suk on the spot, there was nothing those above could do to her. Yu Chon-suk's heart jolted. This woman was absurdly arrogant. The moment the words fell, the other side had already charged straight at him. Yu Chon-suk lifted his eyes and looked toward the distance in midair. In the next second, a pressure like a giant hand came crashing directly toward him. Seo Yeonju floated in the air, continuously plucking at the strings, clearly intending to rely on sound waves to launch a wide-area attack. The piercing sound waves made one's scalp go numb and were simply unbearable. At the side, Lee Haeun also swung the weapon in his hand, producing an even noisier and harsher racket, while muttering continuously under his breath so that no one could make out what he was saying. Immediately afterward, his body also began twisting strangely, as if he were performing some kind of ritual dance. The clanging noise mixed with the zither music and pressed down together, making it impossible to concentrate. The violent sound tormented Yu Chon-suk until his head felt like it was splitting apart. Yet Seo Yeonju had absolutely no intention of stopping and raised her hand to continue gathering power, preparing another round of sonic bombardment. Only then did Yu Chon-suk realize that the strange dance just now had not been random flailing at all, but an auxiliary spell used to strengthen her own skills. A dazzling white light suddenly burst from the body of the train. Han Sang-ae's pupils suddenly shrank, and her heart jolted violently. Only then did she realize that the opponent's shockwaves could actually reach the train even from that far away. Yu Chon-suk had been heavily injured by the relentless sonic attacks, and blood was already slowly seeping from all 7 orifices. He clamped his hands tightly over his ears, trying as much as possible to suppress that piercing pain. In order to break this deadlock before him, an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. A cold smile curled at the corner of Seo Yeonju's mouth as she concluded that Yu Chon-suk simply could not withstand this kind of sonic torment and would sooner or later be worn down to death bit by bit. But she never noticed that a massive pitch-black flame had already quietly ignited in Yu Chon-suk's palm. In the next instant, strange waves of attack surged around his body, and the violet-black contradictory black flame exploded outward, so fearsome that even the Gijayam instinctively gave rise to a trace of fear. She immediately tried to transmit a message, urging Lee Hae-won to prepare the next round of sonic assault. But just as she was about to speak, not a single sound came out of her throat. Yu Chon-suk had long since calculated the deadliest weakness of these two people. Once they lost the support of their sound waves, all of their abilities would be rendered useless on the spot. Trapped inside the isolating barrier formed by the contradictory black flame, no matter how they struggled, they could not break through this wall of flame. Seo Yeonju's earlier intelligence gathering had been utterly terrible. She had never imagined that Yu Chon-suk would actually possess an ability that specifically countered them like this. Fortunately, however, it was still 2 against 1, so they still had a chance to turn things around. On the other side, an expression of extreme pain appeared on Lee Hae-won's face. Seo Yeonju suddenly sensed danger approaching from behind. A snow-white blade flashed past in an instant, and Seo Yeonju fell dead on the spot. They had originally planned to capture Yu Chon-suk alive, yet unexpectedly lost a companion first midway through. Lee Hae-won's brows were tightly furrowed, and scattered blood floated before him, and for a moment, he had absolutely no idea how to break the deadlock before him. In his desperation, he directly undid the seal, and spread out a layer of purple energy barrier, intending to trap Yu Chansuk firmly inside. Seo Yunju, on the verge of death and bleeding from all 7 orifices, weakly questioned Li Hei-won on why he had rashly used the seal. Yu Chansuk instead looked curious and asked, "Your name is Li Hei-won?" The moment the words fell, the purple energy barrier suddenly shattered and dissipated. Li Hei-won had overdrawn his magic power and could no longer sustain the barrier. Seo Yunju had only one final breath left, yet she still could not help complaining that he should not have used the seal against a monster like Yu Chansuk. But at this point, he had no other choice. He could only rely on this barrier to hold the opponent back and complete the mission. That earlier purple barrier had even managed to trap Lee Seo-yun. So no matter the cost, they had to take away the shield generator. A pitch-black figure suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. Lee Hei-won's heart sank, knowing that this time it was truly over. In the next second, the spear had already pierced through his body. Even until death, he could not understand why the other side could break through his defense so easily. Yu Chansuk spoke in a cold tone and bluntly told them that this was not a place where they could come and go as they pleased. Lee Hei-won realized in shock that this man's abilities had long since exceeded ordinary human understanding. Compared with taking the equipment, the most important thing now was already preserving their lives first. Using the last of his strength, he roared at Seo Yunju to run. Before he could even finish speaking, Yu Chansuk viciously twisted the spear in his hand. His expression became even more pained, yet he still kept reminding his companion that escaping with her life had to come first. Yu Chansuk was even more merciless, coldly reminding Seo Yunju that if she wanted to run, she should hurry up and do it. The scene shifted to Hansen's transfer station. At this moment, Lee Se-yoon already had visible injuries on her face. Seeing that she had held out until now, even the archer opposite her showed a bit more surprise in his eyes. Then the other side said something unexpected. He intended to suspend the battle for now. Lee Se-yoon looked completely bewildered, and the other side even complimented her, saying she was the pride of the nation. She had never expected that this archer actually knew of the Wangik theory. This line of thought came from a group of scholars who promoted pseudo-history. According to legend, in Korea's ancient primordial era, Wangik had ruled the entire Eurasian continent around 60,000 BCE and had even invented modern devices such as submarines and telephones. The archer admitted that anyone with even a halfway normal brain would not believe something so absurd. Lee Se-yoon was clearly stunned and pressed him on why he would say such a thing. Whether one believed it or not was actually not important at all. What truly mattered was that there was a large group of people who did believe in this theory, and they stood on his side. Driven by that shared obsession, those people would follow the archer to complete that so-called grand ideal. As soon as the words ended, the archer's figure vanished into thin air. Lee Se-yoon's eyes were filled with murky bloodshot veins, and she could only barely support her wavering body with her sword. She still could not understand what exactly the other side had been plotting by deliberately stalling her for so long. Yu Chansuk judged that the person who had just escaped was already seriously injured and probably could not get very far, just as he was hesitating over whether to chase immediately. An urgent report suddenly came through his earpiece. Commander Lee Se-yoon had lost contact, and for the time being, command authority over the entire train was being transferred to him. Learning that he was to temporarily take over command of this escort train, Yu Chansuk was somewhat surprised as well. On the other side, the remaining red-masked enemies raised their blades and roared that they would kill him. But the instant the blade was swung over, it was blasted away by a force on the spot. Yu Chansuk moved back and forth through the enemy ranks. His footsteps were so fast that only afterimages remained. These people were no match for him at all. With a casual strike, he could knock one down. After clearing out the last enemy, his weapon traced a streak of cold light through the air. He gripped the hilt tightly and strode forward, slashing the opponent's throat open with one strike. Watching the enemy collapse into a pool of blood and lose all movement completely, after sweeping away every obstacle, he issued an order through the earpiece for the train to depart immediately. The members of the Monkey Guild all urged him to turn back first and save Lee Se-yoon, but he still insisted on ensuring the train's departure as the top priority. This choice looked like trying to do two things at once and doing neither efficiently, but he did not regret it at all, because what the train carried was life-saving relief supplies. Even after waiting and waiting, there was still no news of Lee Se-yoon, and his heart gradually sank little by little. Could something really have happened to her? At that moment, someone came running over in a panic to report in, and Yu Chansuk immediately pressed him on what had happened. When he heard the news that Lee Se-yoon had returned safely, he finally let out a visible sigh of relief, and joy at last appeared on his face. Lee Se-yoon was in a bedraggled state, her face full of exhaustion, clearly having just gone through a deadly battle that had consumed an enormous amount of strength. Very soon, she was sent to the hospital for treatment and recovery. Yu Chansuk went up and asked her whether she would be dissatisfied that he had given the order on his own for the train to depart first. Lee Se-yoon calmly said that when she had handed him temporary command authority in the first place, it was because she hoped he would make exactly that kind of choice. She also frankly told Yu Chon-suk that her battle with that archer had been perilous to the extreme. If the other side had not withdrawn on his own initiative, she likely really would have had a hard time coming back alive. As a top hunter firmly ranked among the world's top 10, she had actually been completely unable to find any way to suppress her opponent. Yu Chon-suk spoke to comfort her, saying that breakthroughs in strength were never something one suddenly comprehended in a single instant. Lee Se-yoon frowned tightly, her heart full of anxiety. She was afraid that her strength might never continue to improve in the future. Afterward, she turned to ask about the progress of the relief supply distribution. A mischievous smile curled at the corner of Yu Chon-suk's mouth as he said that everything had been advancing very smoothly according to his own methods. Then he revealed his plan. He intended to stay in Britain for a while, and for the continued transport and escort of the shield generator, he would not be able to help for the time being. Lee Se-yoon let out a soft sigh, not expecting that he actually planned to remain in Britain alone. Both of them knew very well that the descendants of Dangan would absolutely not let things end so easily. This period of going out to train was precisely to continue honing his strength before later returning to Korea. Aside from that, he also planned to challenge the Brazk first-level corruption source cold storage site. Lee Se-yoon instantly broke out in a cold sweat. A first-level corruption source was not something one could challenge so easily. Even when she had personally conquered one in the past, it had been extremely dangerous. Yu Chon-suk said that he had already discussed it with Han Sang-ae, and the two of them would go together as companions. Lee Se-yoon felt a wave of helplessness. These two were both complete lunatics. Whether alone or as a team, the difficulty of this mission was absurdly high, so she decided to stay behind and go with them as well. Among the many first-level corruption sources, the Brazk cold storage site was already considered one of the weaker ones. But a first-level corruption source was still a first-level corruption source in the end, and they could not let down their guard in the slightest. She hoped that after Yu Chon-suk conquered this corruption source, he would still continue to hold on to this original intention and fighting spirit of clearing away corruption and saving the world. Yu Chon-suk pressed his lips together in a faint smile and turned to ask her for one favor. In exchange for guarding the shield generator throughout the entire journey, they borrowed an enormous professional training ground to use for closed-door training and strengthening their abilities. Not long afterward, the two of them arrived at the training ground. Han Sang-ae immediately took a liking to the fully equipped dormitories there and could not help sighing that the environment here was really nice. Yu Chon-suk told her not to get distracted and to put her mind back on training first. At that moment, Han Sang-ae took out a small bag containing several tubes of unknown liquid. Yu Chon-suk let out a sly grin. He directly picked up all the test tubes and tilted his head back, drinking all the mysterious liquid in one go. After finishing, he prepared to officially begin practical training. There was no prop simpler and more direct than an egg. In his left hand was an ordinary egg with no magic power. The egg in his right hand, meanwhile, was filled with dense magic power. Han Sang-ae watched with her own eyes as both eggs were crushed at the same time. She immediately saw the difference. After the egg infused with magic power shattered, the egg white and yolk twisted together in a completely mixed mess. After seeing the huge difference between the two eggs, she instantly understood that this exercise was meant to make one more proficient at controlling one's own magic power. Yu Chon-suk inwardly marveled that she had understood it quickly enough. Right now, Han Sang-ae's control over magic power was still very clumsy, and this set of basic exercises was just right for making up for her weaknesses. Han Sang-ae immediately prepared to begin practicing, but Yu Chon-suk stopped her at once, leaving her standing there in confusion. This was only basic homework to reinforce whenever there was spare time. The true core training was not this at all. At that moment, Lee Se-yoon walked over from the distance and told the two of them that real cultivation had to begin with actual combat. Han Sang-ae instantly broke out in a layer of cold sweat down her back. The scene shifted to a secret laboratory. Kim Ha-yeon was tightly bound to a hospital bed with ropes and could not move at all. He slowly opened his eyes. What entered his sight was a strange doctor wearing glasses and sporting a head of green hair. Kim Ha-yeon weakly asked where exactly this place was. The doctor calmly replied that this was his personal laboratory. Using the last of his remaining strength, he demanded to know why he had been moved from the hospital room to a place like this. But the doctor looked entirely unconcerned and even found it somewhat amusing. He said that lying half dead like this, staring blankly at the hospital room ceiling every day, he must have gotten bored of it long ago. Those words fiercely provoked Kim Ha-yeon, who wished he could kill the man in front of him on the spot. The doctor revealed a chilling smile and told him that there was not even a trace of magic power left in his body now. Once disconnected from the ventilator, he would not even be able to breathe normally, so he had better stop wasting effort struggling. There was also no need to harbor such great hostility toward him. Only then did Kim Hye-yeon learn that the doctor was preparing to launch a brand new human experiment. It seemed that he himself was the experimental subject the other side had chosen. As long as the experiment succeeded, he would gain enough power to seek revenge on Yu Chon-suk. A month passed by in the blink of an eye. Han Sang-ae practiced control every day and kept cracking eggs. But when the egg fell into the bowl, she wrinkled her entire face and sighed dejectedly that she still could not reach Yu Chon-suk's level. On the other side, Yu Chon-suk had already gotten himself ready and entered a combat-ready state. As soon as the 5-minute break ended, a new round of training began immediately. Han Sang-ae was obviously unable to keep up with such a tightly wound pace, but she had no choice and could only hurry to her feet and go join them. Although the egg mixture from the 2 eggs in the bowl still could not achieve the same even blending as Yu Chon-suk's, it was already obvious that she really had improved a great deal during this time. Next, the two formed a pair and officially began Han Sang-ae's practical combat special training. Lee Se-yoon's gaze was sharp, and her whole body radiated a determination to win. Han Sang-ae also had only one goal left in her heart, and that was to desperately become stronger. Yu Chon-suk made it clear in advance that when it came to a real fight, he absolutely would not hold back. Lee Se-yoon moved with astonishing speed, every move fierce and ruthless, without the slightest restraint. Han Sang-ae was deeply shaken inside and simply could not block the other side's offensive. Before her body had even landed, Lee Se-yoon was already charging at her again with her greatsword in hand. At that moment, Yu Chon-suk silently circled around behind Lee Se-yoon. Lee Se-yoon had never expected that the greatsword in her hand would actually be slapped away by him in one motion. Carrying the momentum of certain victory, Yu Chon-suk turned and launched another attack at Han Sang-ae. Han Sang-ae leaped into the air and met his offensive head-on. A dense pattern of magical light swirled within Lee Se-yoon's eyes. The power unleashed by the collision between the two was nearly world-shattering, and the scene was so intense that it reached the very peak of spectacle. Lee Se-yoon had never imagined that Yu Chon-suk could now directly knock her sword away. It was clear that over this 1 month, the speed at which both of them had improved was astonishingly fast. Just then, an urgent distress call suddenly came through the earpiece. Something had happened in Dover. The base had already been attacked by the descendants of Dangon, and thick black smoke had tightly surrounded the carriage storing the shield generator. All 3 of them felt their hearts sink at the same time, knowing that things were bad. They immediately got into a luxury car and sped off at full speed. In the whole team, only Han Sang-ae had a driver's license, and the speed at which she drove was outrageously fast. Even Lee Se-yoon, sitting in the passenger seat, was badly frightened and gripped the handle inside the car with both hands. Yu Chon-suk suddenly noticed that there was something wrong with the road ahead. A monster was charging straight toward the car. The moment the vehicle slammed into the monster, thick black smoke instantly billowed up from the front of the car. Han Sang-ae hurriedly slammed on the brakes and brought the car to a steady stop. Yu Chon-suk leaned out and looked toward the ground behind the car. Lying on the ground was a purple humanoid outline that did not look human at all. In the next second, that thing propped itself up on its arms and struggled to stand. When it finally straightened its body with a hunched back, Yu Chon-suk recognized at a glance that this monster was most likely Kim Hye-yeon. A perfectly normal person had actually been turned into this grotesque state. His pupils glowed with a bizarre purple light, a shining gem was embedded in his forehead, and his whole body was covered densely with 4 tubes. The muscles in both legs bulged grotesquely, with veins standing out one by one. The red light in his eyes surged wildly, and he pinned every bit of hatred over his current fate onto Yu Chon-suk. This guy's impact force was now terrifyingly great. One casual collision was enough to crush reinforced concrete into powder. Staring fixedly at Yu Chon-suk in front of him, Kim Hye-yeon's eyes even carried a trace of dazed disbelief. He had never imagined that the other side would actually dare to get out of the car alone and duel him head-on. Yu Chon-suk directly activated his ability, intending to use the contradictory black flame to burn away and disintegrate Kim Hye-yeon's mutated muscle tissue. The situation now had already completely veered away from the original plan. So Lee Se-yoon immediately arranged for Han Sang-ae to head to the port to provide support, while she herself drove alone to the train headquarters. Now all they could do was pray that the hunters at the port could hold on a little longer. Han Sang-ae and Lee Se-yoon quickly switched seats, and Kim Hye-yeon watched as the luxury car sped rapidly away from the battlefield. Watching Lee Se-yoon's hasty retreating figure, Kim Hye-yeon could not help letting out a sneering laugh. The whole scene was simply too ridiculous. Yu Chon-suk gave a cold smile and directly told him that today, his only opponent was him, beat him first, and then they could talk about anything else. Ever since Yu Chon-suk had crippled him back then, Kim Hye-yeon had sworn day and night in his heart that he would make Yu Chon-suk personally taste every bit of the agonizing pain he himself had suffered. He roared that he would tear Yu Chon-suk to pieces, then charged over at full speed. Yu Chon-suk set his stance and waited in full readiness. The mutated Kim Hye-yeon's danger level had already skyrocketed in a straight line. On the other side, when Han Sang-ae arrived at the port, the scene before her was too tragic to bear, with the ground covered in hunters' corpses. In the distance, 3 descendants of Dang Gun were staring at the solitary Han Sang-ae. The one in the lead leaped forward, landing heavily right in front of her. The red mask hit the ground, and the killing intent was completely undisguised. They were clearly here to eliminate Han Sang-ae. The 3 of them stood still and coldly sized up this girl, who looked thin and fragile at first glance. After learning that she was the daughter of the Keirai group, they immediately came up with another plan in their minds. If they tied her up and took her away, they could surely demand an astronomical ransom. Han Sang-ae was full of shock. Could it be that these 3 people before her had slaughtered all the hunters at the port? The combined strength of these 3 enemies, 1 big and 2 small, was truly impossible to read. Watching the 3 of them laugh among themselves, Han Sang-ae was completely baffled. What exactly were these blindly arrogant fools plotting? The moment the words fell, the 2 red-masked underlings had already rushed up from the left and right to flank her. The leader gripped a long blade, preparing to strike amid the chaos and completely crush Han Sang-ae. Facing 3 people at once really did push the difficulty to the limit. A layer of cold sweat instantly broke out across Han Sang-ae's back. The magical power of these 3 people was fully twice her own. But she always remembered what Yu Chansuk had taught her before. In real combat, the amount of magic power was never the only factor determining victory or defeat. What truly mattered was whether one could calmly see through the battle situation and keep one's own mindset steady. Even if the joint offensive of the 3 was both fierce and dense, she had to grit her teeth and hold on until Yu Chansuk arrived to support her. Inside the laboratory on the other side, the doctor took out a test tube, and inside it was a special gem soaking in liquid. This thing could rebuild brand new muscle tissue for Kim Hae-hee, who had been reduced to nothing but an empty shell. With this new body, he would no longer have to barely cling to life with a ventilator. But though this modification was powerful, the price was terrifyingly cruel. Every bone in his body would be crushed little by little and then reassembled, his internal organs would twist and shift, and even his eyes would dry out and sting as if scorched by fierce flames. But Kim Hae-hee, obsessed only with revenge, did not care at all. As long as he could once again possess a complete physical body, this price meant nothing in his eyes. The doctor asked him whether he was afraid. The veins at Kim Hae-hee's temples bulged, and nothing remained in his eyes except dense hatred. This was the doctor's chance for him to turn things around, far better than spending the rest of his life lying uselessly in a hospital bed. Kim Hae-hee's whole body burst with crimson light, and his muscles also began to expand wildly. No matter how terrible the cost of the modification was, he did not want to spend the rest of his life staring blankly at the hospital ceiling, because his only obsession was to defeat Yu Chansuk with his own hands. He clenched his fist, wrapped in blinding light, and smashed it viciously toward Yu Chansuk. Yu Chansuk stared fixedly at the white light blasting toward him head-on, allowing that tremendous force to swallow him bit by bit. It had to be admitted that after the modification, the destructive power of Kim Hae-hee's punch had multiplied several times over. Yu Chansuk quickly calmed himself and began reassessing the battle before him. The opponent's second heavy punch came crashing over immediately after the first, slamming solidly into the shaft of the spear in Yu Chansuk's hand. Kim Hae-hee instantly realized that something was wrong, his pupils shrinking sharply as the spear shaft had already rammed hard into his chest. In the next second, his whole body was blasted dozens of meters away by that impact force. After taking this round of losses, his attacks clearly became far more cautious. A chill also rose quietly in his heart. Yu Chansuk's strength was still unfathomable. With no bottom in sight, Yu Chansuk decided to take the initiative and attack. He suddenly leaped up from the ground, gripping the spear shaft with one hand, drove the butt end of the spear hard into the ground, and then planted one foot on the shaft to forcibly steady his body. Looking at that spear suddenly extending longer and longer, almost reaching straight into the sky, Kim Hae-hee was filled with shock. This weapon could actually extend in contract at will. It was practically identical to the Rui Jingu Bang from legend. Yu Chansuk held the spear, gathering power, and bluntly said that this punch of the opponent's was far stronger than during their previous clash. Immediately afterward, he mobilized all the magic power in his body and thrust out a fierce strike, wanting to see whether this modified body could really withstand destruction on this level. Hearing those words, Kim Hae-hee froze for a moment. Around the spear swirled magic power so dense it had reached the extreme, and the energy fluctuations bursting from this strike pressed down so heavily that one could barely breathe. Yu Chansuk charged forward with the spear, the tip seeming as if it would pierce through the entire sky itself. A moment later, Kim Hae-hee was already sprawled out in the middle of a pile of shattered rocks. Yu Chansuk's assault this round had been too fierce. He could not suppress it at all and directly coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. The strength gained through outside modifications still could not beat the other side. In utter despair, he simply begged Yu Chansuk to finish him off directly. Yu Chansuk stared at his mutated body, his mind racing rapidly, because what was flowing inside this guy was no longer ordinary blood at all. Even in another world, this kind of technique would be considered high-level forbidden magic that required dozens of mages working together to complete. The fluids inside his body had long since left a category of humanity. Yu Chan-suk, who had lived for thousands of years in another world and had continuously delved into the path of magic, understood more clearly than anyone else that the humans of this world still knew far too little about magic, like primitive people who had only just learned how to use fire. The descendants of Dangon believed they had developed the contract gem through their own power, but the essence of such a gem was actually nothing more than a vessel for a magical contract. It was made by a powerful otherworldly being extracting its own magic power and then materializing it into physical form. Once a mortal fused such a gem into the body, it was equivalent to personally signing a contract of total enslavement. Holding the spear, Yu Chan-suk looked at Kim Hae-hyun and directly told him that from beginning to end, he had never truly understood what kind of transaction he had signed up for. The gem embedded in Kim Hae-hyun's forehead suddenly erupted with blinding light. Yu Chan-suk's eyes filled with shock. He had never expected that this gem could actually detonate directly. He immediately raised both arms and forcibly endured the impact of the explosion. When the sky full of smoke and dust gradually cleared, Kim Hae-hyun's figure was already nowhere to be seen. This was not simply a self-destructive explosion to erase the corpse, the contract itself had directly erased his existence. In the other world, to achieve this level of annihilation effect, one had to form a contract with a high-ranking demon. Back then, the demons of that other realm had almost all been purged by Yu Chan-suk's own hand, yet he had never imagined that this land would still contain a remnant of the same kind of contract. There was no time now to investigate the root cause behind it. The most urgent matter was to first deal with this chain of crises before him. This issue could only be investigated slowly later. The scene shifted back to the port battlefield, where Han Sang-e suddenly had an epiphany in the middle of the fight. As long as she could dodge every attack through sheer speed, she could defeat them one by one and take down all three of them. Just as Yu Chan-suk had taught her before, this time she finally won through her own abilities. Only the last masked enemy remained. Seeing that the situation had turned bad, he immediately turned to flee. Han Sang-e gripped her long sword in one hand, and a soft yellow magical aura spread over her body. At the instant she launched forward, the opponent did not even have a chance to resist. The entire finishing sequence consumed very little magic power, and her movements were clean and decisive. This battle could almost be called perfect. Yu Chan-suk appeared silently behind her and softly reminded her not to think too much. During battle, she only needed to focus on the enemy. Han Sang-e was truly startled, having no idea when he had arrived. Yu Chan-suk did not answer immediately, however, and only cast his gaze straight into the distance. Looking at the enormous machine faintly glowing all over, he murmured in a low voice, "So this was the shield generator." Han Sang-e could tell at a glance that an immense and surging amount of magic power was contained within the shield generator. Suddenly, footsteps came from behind the two of them. Lee Se-yoon stood before them, holding a red glowing sword, her presence as overbearing as a monarch looking down over the entire field. At last, the team of three had regrouped, and all the crises they had encountered on their separate paths had been resolved smoothly. Yu Chan-suk was thinking over how to explain Kim Hae-in's modified mutation, so he simply laid out everything he knew and told it all to the two of them. He spoke of how, after returning from the other world, he had originally thought he could live in peace, only to find that Earth had already been turned upside down by corruption sources, leaving him no choice but to become a hunter to make a living. As for those obscure lines about priests from another world, with a bit of polishing and revision, they were just right for covering up his secret. Lee Se-yoon listened with exceptional focus. Yu Chan-suk lied that when he had been entangled in battle with Kim Hae-in, he had been wrapped in black smoke and heard strange whispers in his ear, casually fabricating a grand-sounding so-called divine revelation about saving the world. After hearing it, both of them felt that this so-called revelation sounded absurd beyond belief. A worried look appeared on Yu Chan-suk's face. Now the entire land was filled everywhere with corruption sources and monsters, and there was definitely a mastermind behind the descendants of Dan Gun. These people were not just simple extreme nationalists. His gaze was firm as he listened to the two beside him analyze the situation back and forth. At that moment, more news arrived. The international hunter transfer market would soon officially open. During this period, all hunters would have a chance to change their affiliated guilds, but this was far more than ordinary job hopping. Senior representatives of the major hunter guilds would gather together to recruit famous powerhouses and build connections. Lee Se-yoon planned to make all the information Yu Chan-suk had shared public at the exchange meeting. Yu Chan-suk knew clearly that with Lee Se-yoon's status, as long as she spoke, none of the hunters present would dare dismiss these clues lightly. Of course, not all strong people clustered around the Hunter Association. Top hunters like Yoon Sung-hai would come all the way to Britain specifically to meet him in person. Yu Chan-suk could not help feeling secretly smug. He had not expected his popularity to be this high now. He had always mistakenly thought Yoon Sung-hai was a woman, and only today did Han Sang-ae tell him that this person had long since married and started a family. That only made Yu Chon-suk look forward to this meeting even more. The scene shifted to inside the Grand Purity Hunter Guild. An extremely handsome man sat in the main seat, and he was Song Se-yoon, the representative with the most authority and prestige in the guild. Yoon Sung-hai knelt on the ground with his head lowered, begging for forgiveness. The moment Song Se-yoon heard Yoon Sung-hai quietly say "I'm sorry," his anger exploded instantly. He raised his hand and smashed a hard punch into Yoon Sung-hai's face. The task of recruiting Yu Chon-suk had been completely ruined, and Song Se-yoon was so angry he wanted to personally step in and negotiate. Yoon Sung-hai had handled things far too pathetically and could not even recruit a newcomer. If this continued, the other guilds would only look down on the Grand Purity Guild. This recruitment mission had to succeed, there was no way out. As he said this, he threw another punch, knocking Yoon Sung-hai in heavily to the floor. Yoon Sung-hai unhurriedly defended himself, saying that the fault was not his at all, it was Yu Chon-suk who absolutely refused to join the guild. Song Se-yoon's expression turned dark and cold as he bluntly said that Yu Chon-suk's thoughts were irrelevant. If he failed to complete the task next time, he should apologize with his life. The next day, the group came to the place where the three were temporarily staying. Yoon Sung-hai and Han Sang-ae were completely baffled, because Yoon Sung-hai had actually come to their door with two burly bodyguards. The two sides sat down, planning to talk things over properly. Yoon Sung-hai's purpose was direct and clear. Once the transfer market opened, Yu Chon-suk had to honor the agreement and transfer to join the Grand Purity Guild. Yu Chon-suk stared at him coldly and bluntly informed him that the conditions from back then were no longer valid. When the other side took out a stack of pressure documents, it was obvious that he had no intention of negotiating properly. Having a representative was an advantage for the Grand Purity Guild, but it was also a weakness. Yoon Sung-hai and Han Sang-ae planned to invoke the name of Senior Representative Song Se-yoon to force Yu Chon-suk to compromise. Outside, the sunlight was bright and dazzling. The moment the two bodyguards heard Yu Chon-suk say that Song Se-yoon did not count as a proper hunter, their brows instantly tightened and their faces filled with alarm. In Yu Chon-suk's eyes, someone like that, occupying a high position and relying only on status and reputation to pressure others, was nothing but an idle freeloader who consumed resources without doing any real work. Yoon Sung-hai sternly warned him to show some respect when he spoke, or he would end up dying without even a whole corpse left behind. Yu Chon-suk inwardly sighed that these people's loyalty to Song Se-yoon had become almost obsessive, but in the next second, he gave a clean and decisive answer, directly rejecting Yoon Sung-hai's transfer demand. Yoon Sung-hai instantly lost emotional control on the spot and grabbed the edge of the table, flipping the entire solid wooden table into the air with one violent motion. Yu Chon-suk froze where he stood. He simply could not understand how this man could explode in anger so suddenly. At this moment, he did not directly fight back. The other side swung his fist, his furious expression like a beast that had lost all reason. Then he clenched his fist and gathered power, hurling himself straight at Yu Chon-suk. The destructive force of this punch was terrifying to the extreme, already far beyond the range of ordinary fists and kicks, more like the impact of a high-speed shell. Yu Chon-suk hurriedly pulled back to widen the distance, telling the other side that he was about to start fighting back as well. At that moment, a heavy pressure descended from above, as if a massive weight were trying to pin him firmly in place. Yu Chon-suk reacted in an instant. The two burly men in front of him, forming special hand seals, were not ordinary bodyguards at all, but combatants specifically specialized in cultivating magical pressure. The pressure released by the two of them in overlapping layers happened to counter his battle rhythm exactly, and the magical suppression was still multiplying in strength. Yu Chon-suk immediately felt that the situation had turned very bad. Before he could even adjust his state, Yoon Sung-hai's heavy punch slammed hard into him.